Currently, Seoul has confined its future to a single person. Jang Shuan, the master of the Jungwa Guild, was fighting against a man amidst several fallen bodies. The people around couldn't believe that he was being defeated. Shin Kanggu, the world's public enemy, said that now they were the only ones left. The man said that all of this was because of a meaningless fight he had started. Activating his ability, he said it was because of an evil like him. Smiling, the other man said it was a joke. He asked if he thought he was a messenger of justice. Shuan asked him how he dared to speak of justice. He shouted that he was fighting in the name of everyone, but even so, he was always in his way. He asked what the young man was if not an evil person. Everyone watching the fight started shouting the hero's name. Hearing the shouts, he became more confident. He said that as long as they cheered for him, he would not be defeated. Then, he attacked the young man. The attack went straight for him. Kanggu tried to protect himself. The energy ball caused an explosion that frightened everyone. Now kneeling, he saw the hero approaching. Amidst the smoke, only the two of them remained. Shin saw from a distance the silhouettes of the people celebrating his defeat. They shouted that they had always believed in the man. All in unison screamed to kill the enemy. Shuan said that not a single person wished for him to live. Using his ability, he said this would be his end. With speed, he launched a blast of energy at the young man who had not stood up. He was hit from far away, landing on the cracked ground. After that, the hero ascended. Smiling, he told the people that all his preparations had borne fruit, that now perfect freedom would descend upon the earth. People began to cry with happiness. The hero used his ability to launch a beam into the sky. A large circle formed above everyone. From it, a huge hand descended to take him. Below, the people began to fear what they were seeing. However, the hero continued to smile. The hand descended with such force that they began to run desperately. He said that since the Demon King had descended, there would be peace, but he was interrupted by Shin, who said that all they would have was tyranny. Noticing that he hadn't died, the hero called him an insect and told him to watch, to look at the world that his creation would build. That was how the world appeared. Fingers tapped repeatedly on the keyboard. The reader's expectations must have been crushed, since the protagonist, Jang Shuan, was a supporter of the Demon King. He and the 13 stars were long-standing high-level evils. However, fiction was just a mirror reflecting reality. The theme of that novel was based on his own life as a student. It was at that time that he saw the true face of the world, a power that could cover up school violence and distort good and evil. For that reason, he incorporated that reality into the novel. But the criticism was not positive. There was nothing else to do after all. He decided to close the comment tab and sat on the bed in the messy room. Lying down, he started reading more malicious comments about the book. He decided to let it go and get some sleep. However, he was awakened by a loud noise. When he opened his eyes, he saw several men with pickaxes trying to dig a hole in the ground. He touched the ground and realized it was made of stone. In front of him, a young man was being beaten while being accused of defiling the grace of the eclipse. Seeing the young man, he remembered someone from the past. He wondered why he was appearing in his dreams. A guard grabbed the young man by the collar and told him to get back to work because this was getting out of hand. He was about to punch his face when something caught everyone's attention. The guard turned his attention to the writer and started punching him while he wondered why a dream hurt so much. Another guard decided to intervene and they started arguing. Hearing everything, he wondered if this was really a dream because everything felt real. Leaving, the guard said he would choose him and give him a beating. In front of him, the boy who had been beaten asked if he was okay, calling him Kanggu. Looking at his hands, he started to feel incredulous. He ran away and fell to his knees. With his hands on the ground, he began to feel mana flowing out of them. A massive amount of energy spread throughout the place. He had the power to absorb mana at will, which was congenital mana hypersensitivity. Placing his hand on his forehead, he saw his reflection mirrored in a puddle in front of him. That meant he was Shin Kanggu. Laughing, he wondered why it had to be him of all the characters. If his colleague was alive, it meant he was 5 years before the end of the story. If he had possessed Jang Shuan, he would have been revered as the hero of that world. But at that pace, it would end with the descent of the Demon King. Only the lives of the Demon King's followers would be spared. He would have a pathetic death if he didn't change the ending. The good news was that he knew how to escape that place. As expected, after possessing someone, it was as if Shin Kanggu's past and experiences were his own, despite still being at level 10 and without any constellation. After working for a while, he felt exhausted. His stamina was too low and he started to regret giving him mana hypersensitivity just because he was a villain. With a crystal in his hand and drawing his plan on the ground, he said it was the only way. His colleague appeared running, calling his name, and when he got closer, he asked if he was okay. Shin said he was fine, and the young man asked if he wanted a break. Smiling, Kanggu said that if the guards allowed them to rest, it wouldn't have dragged him to that place. In the detention center created by the criminal organization Eclipse, novice hunters who could use mana were forced to work as slaves to mine mana stones. Turning to his colleague, he told him not to worry and to go mine the stones. To the young man's surprise, Shin said he was thinking of escaping, but he asked the other to forget about it and get back to work before the guards caught him. He told him not to do anything reckless, and the other agreed. Going back to work, he thought that he had done everything he could to warn him. That guy was the character he had created based on the boy he had met. He couldn't make any changes to the novel yet, for the sake of his escape. The men were working and carrying mana crystals. Looking to the side, he noticed that one of the guards had grabbed a young man. At the moment when they were paying attention to the novices, he had tried to escape. Another guard appeared, ordering everyone to watch, making the young man tremble. Grabbing his sword, he told them to see what happened to those who tried to flee. Then, in front of everyone, he struck the young man's stomach with his sword. All the boys were terrified by the scene. Angry, the guard kept hitting him, splattering everyone with blood. Shin started trembling with rage at what had happened. Seeing the body on the ground, he called him an idiot and said that he had warned him. The guard approached and told him to act like last time because there was no one there and he would kill him too. Kangyu said he didn't care about the young man's death. He asked him to the bathroom because that was more important, leaving the guard confused. The guard sarcastically asked if the boy had wet his pants. Since Shin didn't answer, the man relented. Then he told him to follow. Arriving at the door, the guard said he had 1 minute. If he took longer than that, it would be his grave. The young man entered the place and saw several bodies on the ground. As he walked further into the bathroom, the guard was counting outside. A few seconds later, Kangyu found what he was looking for. At 49 seconds, he started drawing with blood on the ground. When only 18 seconds remained, he had already completed the symbol. A strong light began emanating from the drawing. Shin started reciting that he knew he was being watched, that he knew the entity went mad over tragedies, trials, and despair. Outside, the guard said the boy had 10 seconds left, so he should pull up his pants and come out. Turning to the symbol, he asked if it wasn't curious how someone of such a low level had summoned it. If it stayed a little longer, the entity would appear later, just like in the novel. To persuade him, the entity would say that waiting even one more moment would mean the end of the world he desired. Since he had become the entertainment it sought, he would use that to get a response to his summons. Shin said that he was the most efficient person to use the ability. As the light grew stronger, the boy smiled and said he knew it would appear. The main constellation that had made a contract with Shin, Kangyu, and the novel was the Dimensional Plunderer. It called him insolent and said it would lend him power for a moment since he had caught its attention. Then it asked him to prove himself, and Shin told it to sit back and watch. Outside, the guards started pounding on the door. He managed to break it down and shouted, asking if the boy was joking. However, when he looked around, he noticed that no one was there. A lot of dust could be seen and a silhouette within it frightened him. Shin gained power through the constellation. He quickly rushed toward the guard, but he disappeared just as the guard tried to grab him. The guard looked behind but only saw the door. He said the boy wasn't there, but then Shin appeared behind him. Using an iron rod, he struck the guard's neck. When the man realized what had happened, he started cursing him. He started to ask something but began to stutter. Quickly, Shin pulled the iron rod from the other's neck. The man fell to the ground instantly. Looking at him, the young man thanked him, because it was thanks to him that he had decided to leave that place. The constellation said that Shin was interesting and sealed the contract. With that, Kangyu managed to avenge the young man. He grabbed the knife and placed it in the compartment he had taken from the guard. The system notified him that a weapon had been registered. From now on, he would never look back. When night fell, Shin began to prepare. Grabbing gasoline canisters, he started pouring them everywhere. To escape, he first needed to get a second-class guard uniform. The second step was to set the criminals on fire. Then, he needed to escape through none other than the front gate. The other guards started running due to the increasing fire. They wondered who had done that and called for the firefighters. One of them shouted for everyone to follow the instructions and head to the crematorium. Everyone boarded a van and left quickly. Looking at the second-class guard, Shin called his attention. He asked if he had replaced the guard who was in charge of them. He said yes because someone had escaped from Building 18. He said the fugitive had run toward the northwest fence of the building. Then he asked why they hadn't left yet. Nervously, he began to accelerate the van. The path leading northwest from the fence he mentioned was Chungmyeon Mountain. At first glance, it seemed like a good escape route since it was dark, unguarded, and complicated. However, in reality, it was full of traps set by Eclipse, making it the most dangerous route. Shin would use that information to escape. He told the other guards they would catch the fugitive on the escape route, and that since he was heading for the mountain, they just had to retrieve the body. The driving guard agreed. They used the code to enter. Finally, he was leaving the prison fence. The van drove through the streets at night. The driver asked the young man what was happening in Building 18. Getting into character, Shin said it would be much easier to kill the prisoners because they didn't listen. He said he was right. They were nothing but losers. Noticing the way the driver talked about the prisoners, Shin got irritated. The driver asked how long he had been serving in Building 18. Shin said 2 days, and the others commented that he should have worked in Unit 9, which he agreed with. However, the man said that Unit 9 didn't exist. Even so, the van kept moving. Smiling, Kangyu said he was right. He grabbed his knife and quickly stabbed the head of the man in the front seat. With seriousness, he began attacking the two men, saying he would finish them off. With one of them dead, the vehicle began to swerve. After stopping, the body was thrown out through the glass. Using his ability, the other guards started cursing him and attacked. His power was so great that when the young man dodged the attack, the van's roof had a hole in it. Seeing that, the guard became nervous. Then he asked how he dared to deceive them and attacked again. An energy beam created another hole and sent Shin flying. Smiling, the guard said he was worthless. But when he looked to the side, he saw the young man's reflection in the rearview mirror. At that moment, Shin jumped out of his vision. In the same instant, Kangyu appeared beside him, using his sword to slash his neck before he could retaliate. They stared at each other as the young man pulled the sword out. The guard's body was thrown out of the window. Shin started feeling sick because he had used too much mana. When he looked to the side, he saw a strong light coming toward him. A car was approaching. He hadn't expected them to be patrolling and smiled, saying that he would have more obstacles. Taking advantage of his location, the young man descended the slope to escape. After falling for a while, he reached the ground. Even so, man approached, saying he couldn't believe he had managed to kill 2 guards and escape. He was holding an axe and called him a worm. The red mark above his head indicated that he had a contract with a constellation. Shin wondered what his power was. His constellation was the Competent Connector, which had the ability to track mana. It was with that ability that he had found him so easily. Smiling, Kang said that was great, leaving the other man confused. He could see the constellation the man was contracted with and the red mark above his head for a reason. By killing another hunter, he could plunder their contracted constellation. The system informed him that he could loot the young man. Reading that with a smile, he thought that he could use the constellation loot for the first time. If he had made a contract with the constellation, it meant he was at level 100, so he had to avoid a direct fight. Then he started running, deciding to lure him in an attack. Smiling, his opponent called him an inferior worm. A movement was seen in a bush. The man told him to do his best to hide, because he could see everything that was hidden with his eyes. In the middle of the forest, the man began to search for him. Using his ability to scan between the trees, he wondered where he was hiding. Looking more closely, infrared detected someone behind a tree. Running towards it and throwing his axe in the tree's direction, he shouted that he had found him. When he got closer, he saw that the entire tree had been cut down and there was no one there. He wondered where he had gone. His question was answered when he noticed something that terrified him. Below him, Shin used his sword to strike directly at his neck. He couldn't believe that someone fighting in close combat would throw away his weapon. Finishing the cut, Shin said it was his own fault for underestimating an opponent. The system issued a notification stating that he had killed the target and acquired the contract with the Competent Connector. This contract was under the control of the Dimensional Plunderer and could only be ended through extinction or contract termination. All of his abilities now belonged to Shin. He began reading about the skills he had gained. After reading, he was satisfied with what he had obtained. Using night vision, he searched for more pursuers nearby. At that moment, he covered his mouth because he started feeling sick. Falling to his knees on the ground, he looked at his hands and saw that he was coughing up blood. Worried, he wondered if it was due to excessive strain. To hide his tracks from the man, he had suppressed his mana hypersensitivity and concealed himself. He had poured all of his mana into a stone. If he had left it as it was, it would have explosively absorbed all the surrounding mana. So he had to immediately suppress his mana hypersensitivity and throw the stone away. Thanks to that, he managed to lure him in and kill him. But to get close, he had to use short-distance teleportation. That had put his body in this condition. If he pushed himself any further, he would die, so he needed to find a safe place. Walking a little, he heard a noise from the road. It was the truck transporting the sand that purified mana stones. Running to the edge of a cliff, he jumped onto the road. He quickly landed on top of the sand. Lying on it, he thought about how he had killed 3 men, something that had never happened in the novel. He had to make sure the future wouldn't change while strengthening himself to use his knowledge. Considering how insignificant his existence was in this world, the future wouldn't change because of that. As the truck moved, Shin began to laugh. More relaxed, he started observing the sky and the view in front of him, which was irritatingly beautiful. At the company, a man said they had plenty of others to extract mana stones and told them to get back to work. Behind him, his subordinate agreed. After he left, the man called the fugitive from the prison clever, because he caught them off guard and confidently walked out through the front gate. Shin arrived at his destination exhausted, thinking that this was killing him. Due to excessive mana use, his stamina wasn't recovering easily. The man commented that he was a level 10 assassin whose stamina couldn't be detected, yet he had killed a level 45 and a level 55 of the constellation. Kang-Hu in a phone booth called someone. He said he was in front of Daejun's station. Leaning against the phone, he asked if he could request a favor. At the company, the man commented that this would be an interesting hunt. Shin was at Han Soyeon's house being bandaged. He thanked her for taking care of him when he suddenly asked for help, and she asked what had happened. He told her that Eclipse had captured him, making her nervous. Soyeon asked if he had been taken to the mana mines, and the young man said yes, because they needed low-level hunters like him. Despite that, he trusted the girl and contacted her. He knew she still loved Shin Kang-Hu. At that moment, Han started apologizing while crying. The woman said she should have stayed close because after their breakup, she was a novice hunter, although she was now a level 150 veteran with a constellation contract. At that time, if she had been with him, she would have also been dragged into the Chomyeong detention center. Standing up, the young man said they shouldn't be near each other because of Eclipse, and the woman said that at her level, she was hardly traceable. Turning away, Shin said she didn't mean to worry about him. He asked her to use her power only for herself. Soie packed a bag for him with money and a formatted phone to prevent tracking. Without even looking at her, he commented that her guild had been walking on eggshells. Back when they were dating, and even now, she fit well within a guild. Nervous, Han asked him if he had no plans to join a guild. She started saying that they could do something together, but the young man interrupted her. He asked her not to be stuck in the past. Hearing that, tears began to fall from the girl's face again. Pulling herself together, she said she already expected that answer. Han said she had already taken care of everything. She had a friend who was a leader and the details were on the phone. Still with teary eyes, she asked him to be careful and stay safe. Smiling, he said the same. Getting into a taxi, he asked to be taken to Daejeon's station. The driver asked if he could turn on the radio, and the young man told him to go ahead. When he turned it on, the news reported that the Jungwoo Guild had massacred everyone in the White Rose Corporation. They also spoke about the arrival of Judgment Day. In the car, a man told his wife that things felt strange because there were no cars on the streets, and he became worried when his wife didn't respond. When he looked at her, he saw that instead of her face, there was only a skull, and he was terrified. Looking up, he saw a huge scythe at his neck. Above them in the sky, various entities flew over a burning car. A reporter talked about how the sky was turning purple and worsening every second. Before she could finish speaking, she was dragged away by monsters of unknown identity. Amidst the open dungeons and the chaos of monsters in the streets, those with powers were called hunters. That inexplicable situation led the population to believe that divine judgment had fallen. Hunters who fought against monsters began hunting people in the name of the gods. But later, they changed for no particular reason. However, just when it seemed like everything was coming to an end, something happened. A woman was cornered by other men. One of them said he would end it all in a single strike. That was when the savior of the world appeared. Jang Shuan grabbed the sword with one hand before it could strike the woman and asked if she was okay. Thus, the Jungwoo Guild was created, protector and healer of the people. Because of that, everyone wanted to go to the supposedly safe Seoul. Listening to the radio, Shin knew that the White Rose Corporation was not a terrorist group. The terrorist attacks were also not their doing. In reality, it was an act committed by Jang Shuan himself. In the car, the taxi driver said his son dreamed of joining the Jungwoo Guild. If Shin went against the man and revealed what he had done, he would be turned into a villain. With that, the result would be as clear as day. That was why he had asked to be introduced to the mercenary corporation, because guilds could be within his reach. Minutes later, he arrived at his destination. Being a commission worker who only took jobs from the mercenary company was the best option for him. Lee Yurin appeared, greeting him and introducing herself. He considered not revealing his real name yet and introduced himself as Jung Sunkyu. They shook hands and she said it was a pleasure to meet him. Handing him some papers, she said she got a great collection job for him. Shin said he preferred the difficult ones first, those that offered good rewards. Erin commented that she had heard he was level 10, and the young man confirmed it. Hearing that, the woman burst into loud laughter. Wiping her tears, she said it was hilarious. Releasing a threatening aura, she asked if he wanted her to clean up a corpse. He asked if being a mercenary wasn't about having the necessary skills regardless of level. Lee Yurin was a mage and buff supporter who had a contract with a high-tier constellation, a character he had created to one day face the 13 stars. Shin knew he had to earn her trust. He asked her if she wasn't a mercenary. The woman said that reality and spirit were different things. Walking past her, he commented that truth and prejudice were as well. Smiling, Lee decided to make an exception and asked to see his abilities. Thus, the two stood face to face. Activating her ability, Yurin said she would judge only one thing, whether he could avoid her power. The only thing she wanted to know was if he could protect his body and dodge attacks to create opportunities for a counterattack. She began creating mist puppets capable of tracking even in distant places, an ability called Tracking Fog. Since it wasn't an offensive ability, he wouldn't die if he got hit, but he needed to dodge to stay in the test. Prepared, he shouted for them to begin. The woman launched the Tracking Fog in his direction. A wave of energy formed as soon as it hit something. However, she couldn't see clearly what happened. To her surprise, she saw the young man running on the wall to her right, which made no sense because at his level, even jumping a meter should have been difficult. She thought he was incredibly proficient in using the short distance jump ability. Smiling, she thought of Shin as just a loudmouth. Casting her ability again, she asked if he could dodge this one. It moved toward the young man with speed and force. Tracking Fog extended its hand to grab him as it approached. When he looked back and saw her smiling. Once again, Tracking Fog closed in, spreading a massive wave of energy until it reached him. Looking up, she noticed that the young man had dodged again. She wondered if what she had seen was transverse teleportation when he appeared behind her. To her surprise, a sword was placed right against her neck. Shin asked to end the test there. Seeing the blade near her, she smiled. She thought the young man was faster than expected. It was no wonder she was a mercenary. Turning around, Yurin asked if he had been trained before. With sincerity, the young man answered no. Placing her fingers on the blade, she said those weren't movements a level 10 would make. Kangoo asked if he had passed, and the woman said yes. She could commission him if he were level 50. Sheathing his sword, Shin said that was good. At the counter, she looked at the young man through the mirror. She asked if he was interested in bulletproof glass because there was a sniper behind him. When she said she received a lot of love from Eclipse, he understood that it was a territorial war. Unfolding a paper, she said it was a commission to track down a wanted criminal. She handed it to him, saying it would be very useful for him. In the abandoned ruins was Kim Mukian, a level 50 mage with a request to retrieve the third-class Vastero shoes. Reading the details, Shin asked if he needed to bring him back alive. Eren said he could kill him on the spot because he had caused the deaths of many civilians and that the security agency would appreciate it. Happily, he said he would start immediately. She said it wouldn't be easy since the man could be hiding. The place was large, but for him, it wasn't a dungeon too difficult to track. Kangyu had used that place as a hideout in the novel, and there were useful intermediate bosses there. Noticing the movement around him, he said they were there. So Shin began by cutting his hand with the sword. The blood that splattered from the cut triggered the instincts of the rabbits that were watching him. They all rushed toward him. He used short-distance teleportation and all of his abilities to attack and eliminate them. Finally, he used transverse teleportation and the leap ability. Behind him, all the creatures lay fallen. Eren requested that he retrieve the commissioned item and do whatever he wanted with the rest. Behind him, a man appeared with 2 swords in his hands. When asked what he wanted as a reward, Shin said he wanted a dungeon attack license for those with multiple bosses. Looking at the man behind him, he recognized that he was an intermediate boss. Shin greeted Ventus, saying it was a pleasure to meet him. The only thing he said was that he would kill him. Shin told him not to complain, and then Ventus charged at him. Several clones descended with him, making it difficult for Shin to see the original. Above him, one of them leaped with a sword in hand. With great force, he swung it downward, aiming to strike the young man. However, Kangyu used transverse teleportation to dodge. It might have seemed like a simple full power attack, but he could see the real one closing in on him. Using short-distance teleportation, he appeared in front of him and struck his stomach. Realizing he had been hit, Ventus grew irritated. He tried to land another sword strike but failed. Dodging again, Shin said he was an intermediate boss only in name. He noticed that direct combat was too crude. As they were behind him, Kangyu stepped on his back and on the wound he had inflicted earlier. Equipping a weapon, he aimed for his head. The plan worked, and the sword quickly pierced his back. Shin left, leaving his fallen opponent behind. After he disappeared, the system announced that he had looted the target's illusion ability. He was pleased and observed his surroundings for a while. Behind him, a glow caught his attention. When he crouched down to see the green light, he realized it was Silesium. Elsewhere, a young man told Nim that it was difficult to obtain. Young couldn't believe he had seen someone hit Ventus at his weak spot. The girl said she had seen Shin at the market before. She had seen him requesting some items at the counter. It seemed like he was about to hunt monsters in dungeons and farm. While watching him, the young man said he seemed like a skilled assassin and that he had never seen him there before. Another person thought Shin shouldn't be in that dungeon, and the girl said the young man was no match for him. He asked if they could drag him to where they were, but Youngji said it wasn't necessary. It would be easier to let him do all the work and then loot him afterward. Smiling, she said that was just what she expected from him and that they only needed to wait. Kangmu distributed his resistance points, but since controlling mana hypersensitivity was possible, he could put everything into resistance. He was finally starting to feel a little alive. Silesium had a calming and analgesic effect and was an effervescent suppressant for mana hypersensitivity. It was difficult to find in a normal dungeon, and since it grew naturally, it was hard to mass produce. However, there was only one person in the country who knew how to cultivate it, and she was at Ground Zero. The place was once considered a demilitarized zone in the past and was far from there. If his hypersensitivity had gotten the best of him during the fight, he would have died in the blink of an eye. Leaving the area, he said that what he needed most at the moment was money. Eren said that a year ago the calls weren't bad, but they were only getting worse. The person on the other end said they were under Eclipse's influence and that things could get even worse, making her anxious. He said it seemed like she was going through a tough time after getting involved with Eclipse's people. Looking into the car mirror, the woman said she was fine. She had gotten used to always keeping her eyes on her back. Accelerating the car as much as she could, she heard the voice ask if she had a hunter to recommend, because they were extremely short on personnel. As Eren rushed through alleys, the person said they couldn't resist getting in touch with her. She started by saying she didn't know. Shuwon heard her say she wasn't sure if she could recommend a hunter who would suit him. But the one she was considering needed a little more time, and she didn't want to make premature conclusions about him. He said her recommendations had never been wrong, that it was unfortunate they had lost so many due to unfortunate incidents. Eren commented that it was in the past and he shouldn't worry about it. She would observe the candidate, and if he was approved, she would let him know. Then she asked if the man had any useful information for her. He said he had managed to obtain some insider information about a certain crime syndicate. That soon she would receive a secure email about the case, and she thanked him. Smiling, Shuwon said it was nothing and that he could help her with that kind of information whenever she needed it. The Jungwook Guild really needed a lot of talent. Looking at the last person she sent, tied up, he told her to send someone better. He would treat them the best way possible. She asked God how she could even think about recommending someone who had just received their first commission. Elsewhere, Shin was fighting against Ibria, an intermediate boss. He threw his sword at the entity, and it got stuck in its leg. His opponent used its claws to attack, trying to grab him using its abduction ability. However, it passed straight through his body and grabbed the stones behind him instead. Seeing that he wasn't there, Ibria was surprised. Then it picked up the pile of stones to throw at him. The young man used illusion magic to escape. Since the abduction ability left a large gap, he would take advantage of the opening. The entity hurled the stone at him. It came at him with speed and force in the direction he was running. He threw himself forward to escape. At the same moment, the stone hit the ground and shattered into pieces. Since he had used illusion magic, the person the stone had hit was just one of his clones. Seeing that, Ibria was shocked. Kangoo used transverse teleportation to get behind it. Instantly, he grabbed his sword and plunged it into the entity's back. It was caught off guard by the sudden attack. The young man pulled out his sword, leaving the body to fall. After the battle, he looked at the scaffolding in front of him. A man watching him commented about having another guy they could rob. Knocking on the wall, he called the others to come out. Wolf spirits emerged from the area, growling, and the man said it was time to eat. The wolves ran in the direction their master commanded. They leaped directly towards Shin. Unbothered, the young man made a piece of meat appear in his hand and held it out for the wolves to see. Noticing what he was trying to do, the man was confused. Seeing all three stay still and eat the meat, he didn't understand why. They weren't the type to get excited over normal meat. Kangoo took advantage of them being occupied and grabbed his sword. He eliminated the animals one by one. Their master grew nervous at the attack. Looking at him, the young man said there was a reason why the animals had gone crazy over the meat. He had prepared it specifically for their taste. Minutes later, all three animals disintegrated. With seriousness, Shin said it was a warning. He told him to give up the stolen items if he valued his life, and the man started cursing Yaren. From the top of the scaffolding, he shouted to catch him if he could, and as he ran inside, Shin said he would handle it that way. Smiling, Mukyin said he was well prepared but lacked a brain. He wondered what kind of idiot would enter enemy territory like that. Throwing a bomb, he told him to explode and die. Kangoo used mana tracking to see several other bombs scattered on the ground. He used short-distance teleportation to leap between them. Seeing that it was working, the man grew irritated. Shin avoided all the mana traps and jumped between the iron bars. Mukyin couldn't believe what he was seeing. Frustrated, he asked if Shin really thought he would be scared of that. Kim said he was protected by a constellation called the Chaos Combatant. He declared that he would show him the black magic of hell and hurled a wave of magic at him. Shin used transverse teleportation and short-distance jumping to dodge the attack and leap to his position. The man was around level 50 and was a dark mage with a disorienting constellation. Running, he said it was obvious what he would do. He said the young man wouldn't dodge this time. He activated the vision capturing ability and the entire environment turned dark. Seeing the darkness approach, Shin stood still, thinking it wasn't the time. As it got closer, Kangoo told himself to wait. Placing his sword to shield his eyes, he said it was time and advanced. Mukyin asked how he knew what effect the ability had to defend against it. The young man said it was obvious, because he was the creator of the ability. In an attacking stance, the man told him to stop talking nonsense. Shin used the abduction ability, grabbing him, surprising him since it was a monster's ability. He said that ability had an opening and called it cheating, but Shin said he only used it to cancel his movements. Quickly, he struck him with the sword. Since he couldn't move, all he could do was scream in pain. Kim activated mana dispersion. A burst of energy exploded, throwing Shin far away. Now free, he declared that he would burn him to death. As he fled, Kangoo thought that his casting speed was inconsistent. Then he wondered if he was using an item to influence his awakening state. Thinking about this, he jumped far from the area. Shin clung to a high ledge, and the man called him a rat. Throwing a magic orb at him, he screamed for him to die. Instantly, the magic struck him. His body fell to the ground as the man laughed. He began asking how he dared to challenge him. But looking down, he saw several others who looked just like his enemy. Angry, he began emanating energy and used heat rain to attack them all at once. Two of them dodged the attacks and rushed toward him. Kim was confused about what was happening. At that moment, something frightened him. Kangoo grabbed him by the neck and placed his sword exactly where he had previously wounded him. Screaming, the man said he had been struck in the same spot, and when he was wounded even more severely, he shrieked and collapsed. Holding his stomach and cursing, he asked how Shin had managed to deceive him. Smiling, Shin said he did it because he knew he would fall for it. Shin said it was an incredible strategy. Beside him, the system began issuing a notification. The Gorilla Master constellation highly praised his attack strategy. Although countless constellations observed hunters, sponsorships were rare due to high energy consumption. The Dimensional Plunderer called the sponsorship pathetic, but Shin said it had helped him make the best decision. He said he would take advantage of every ability he could. The Plunderer called him a lunatic and told him to focus on the enemy in front of him. Kangoo agreed and struck the fallen man's leg, making him scream in pain. The man asked if anything would change just because he had been captured. Shin replied that if the world changed just by capturing someone like him, he wouldn't be there preparing his weapon. As he finished speaking, Shin slashed in with a final attack. Now that he had killed his target and confiscated his contract, he could use new abilities. Shin checked the abilities he had just obtained while sheathing his sword. They were vision capture and superficial chaos, and he wondered if he should take his items as well. Without hesitation, he began searching the enemy's clothes for equipment. After removing the pieces, he thought that his opponent had many good items despite being only level 50. He said that with the gloves, he could connect a mana thread to his dagger, the armor would enhance his energy, and the ring would boost his resistance. Lastly, he pulled out a talisman of the evil god, which granted reduced ability cooldowns at the cost of 1 mana per second. After equipping himself and checking all the items, Kangu reviewed his status again and noted that the item was the best buff he had. The young man concluded that he had taken everything he needed and should sell all the rank 9 items. It would be perfect if he reached level 20. Leaving the area in his new outfit, he thought that this way he could unlock a vital assassin ability. Now on the streets, he found it strange that there were no monsters around, especially since this was the area of clawed rabbits. In the distance, a gleam from a magnifying lens was visible. On top of a building, a huntress asked the boss beside her if they could just finish up quickly to take the young man's items, and the boss agreed. The boss signaled to his companions further back with a flash of light. One of them, upon receiving the signal, said they would tire Kangu out by releasing monsters to attack him while they prepared to strike. The freed rabbits detected the blood on Shin's clothes and lunged at him, while he, relieved to find them, prepared for battle. With ease, the rabbits were taken down. After defeating them, the system issued a notification that Kangu had reached level 20. Due to his sponsorship, his new accelerated stabbing ability had upgraded to Bloody Stab. The huntress was shocked that the monsters had been defeated so easily, and the boss took the opportunity to attack. Jumping from the building, he lunged at the young man with a powerful strike. The boss slashed the ground with his sword, but Shin calmly dodged using short-distance teleportation. Kangu wondered who his opponent was and if he was trying to rob him. He had nearly lost his head. Enraged, his opponent questioned whether he had been too slow and used his charge ability to attack again. However, Shin dodged once more and performed the Bloody Stab attack on him. Since the enemy's recovery ability would be limited after 10 attacks, he figured he just needed to repeat them. But the boss mocked the attack, and the huntress confidently stated that the boss was a berserker. He only grew stronger the more he fought. Right after, the opponent charged again, and the young man dodged, thinking that this man was truly worthy of being a berserker. However, due to his exaggerated attacks, he left many openings, allowing Shin to strike him again. The berserker kept mocking him, demanding more, but Shin calculated that he only needed 4 more attacks. As the opponent approached, he noticed something was wrong. His vision was beginning to blur. Kangu, now close to him, activated the vision capture ability, incapacitating him. At the same time, he used the superficial chaos ability, leaving him disoriented. With all these openings, Shin landed multiple attacks. Even though the berserker couldn't feel the stabs, he swung his sword wildly, saying he couldn't even notice the cuts. Once the effects wore off, he could finally see again, and enraged, he asked if Shin had run out of tricks. However, a wave of pain surged through his body, making him wonder what had happened and why he was losing strength. As both stood still, the huntress became concerned for the boss, and her companion grew nervous. Enraged, the berserker shouted that the more he was hit, the stronger he became. But at that moment, an abduction ability was activated. Kangu approached and delivered a fatal stab to the boss's chest, calling him human despite being a berserker. He said that if the boss lost too much blood, he could end up dying, and instantly the boss collapsed, shocking the other two. The huntress and her companion were terrified and started running away in fear of Shin. The young man concluded that if bandits were operating in this area, then the National Hunter Security must have collapsed. A system notification appeared, informing him that he had obtained the Blood Glutton contract. Kangu was thrilled and told his constellation that he had secured 2 contracts in one day. He said it was about time he got sponsored, but the plunderer simply called him a lunatic. The protagonist, known for his absorption and assassination abilities, reflected on recent events. He commented to a kneeling man that he had acquired some useful items such as a magic resistance anklet. Besides the shoes that increased his movement speed, he also had gloves that enhanced his physical resistance. He thought it would be ideal to combine these gloves with a throwing set, balancing defense and offense. With this setup, he could face powerful enemies with greater efficiency and strategy. He asked aloud if he should now finish the commission and determined walked away. In Daejeon, countless buildings could be seen in the distance while a wide street stretched ahead. His magical shoes began to glow intensely, drawing the attention of everyone around. A woman was both delighted and surprised that he had managed to find the Vartaro's shoes so easily. She received a simple but polite response along with a thank you that ended their brief interaction. Sunkyusai informed him that the first commission was usually a small test, and he had performed better than half of the participants. The man concluded that 50% of the people who took on their first commission died, and that thanks to the woman's cold and calculating mind, she had a high success rate and high-rank commissions. As promised, the woman in black gave him an attack pass for a dungeon with many intermediate bosses. She carefully handed him all the necessary information to complete the mission. At Howling Winds Hill, located at Gapyeong Station, there were 4 intermediate bosses and 1 final boss. Shin Kangmi read the paper while she asked if he was enjoying what he was reading. With a slight smile on his face, the protagonist thought that this was a dungeon with 5 abilities he could steal. Thus, he asked to reserve the item for the next morning, ensuring it would be available at the correct time. Continuing the conversation, the man still questioned whether she really intended to buy it, showing curiosity about her decision. Kim Mukyeon had indeed taken many items, and soon she saw the opportunity for a good deal. They began discussing the possibility of a new mission, carefully evaluating the details. The protagonist pointed to the image of a man printed on the papers he had been given. His name was Hugh Jungti, and he had committed crimes such as stealing national artifacts and committing physical assaults. Sung Kyusai stated that it would be difficult to find his base since the man did not make many public appearances. However, that wasn't a problem since there was a way to track him down. After selling the items he didn't need, he had already earned 250 million won. While making a call, he was concerned about increasing his security using the money he had gathered. A person on the other end answered, asking who was calling. Without hesitation, the protagonist stated that he wanted to buy 10 Salaciums and that the location was Yongsan Station. A mustached man responded, confirming that he understood the agreement and quickly hung up. After ending the call, he reflected that there was still time before the dungeon raid. He decided to grab a drink and gather some information at Club Hades. A fierce fight between two men broke out, drawing the attention of everyone around. The man with long brown hair was severely injured and started screaming. Around them, the other guys watched excitedly, celebrating the fight as if it were a spectacle. Shin Kang-yu informed the red-haired bartender that he wanted to bet everything he had. With a chilling gaze, he ordered a glass of Salacium Burst. The girl named Benny widened her eyes upon hearing the unusual request. Laughing, she informed him that the drink had a rather unique taste and that no one usually ordered it. The man started thinking that in clubs like this, bartenders often had some useful information. However, this information had not yet been verified, leaving doubts about its complete accuracy. He widened his eyes once again, showing surprise at what he had just seen. Fixating his gaze on a new figure in front of him, he was extremely shocked by her unexpected appearance. A woman with short hair and a tight dress sat at the bar. She was the subordinate of Eclipse's executive member Kang Dongyan, the hunting dog Soie. As he received his drink, the protagonist considered the possibility that Eclipse had started tracking him. Smiling, the red-haired bartender informed him that it would be difficult to see a handsome man like him in this club again. Promptly, he questioned her about why. The girl said she had only heard rumors. Leaning in to share a secret, she told him that Eclipse intended to take over the club. She added that their plan was probably to separate the hunters at the bar and drive them to the mines, a typical human trafficking strategy used by Eclipse. With this, it became more evident to him why Soie was there. He assumed the best decision was to leave that dangerous place as soon as possible. Startled, both the bartender and the protagonist quickly turned around, trying to understand what was happening. He realized that something had gone terribly wrong and began showing clear signs of nervousness. A gang of men dressed in black carrying weapons suddenly stormed into the club. Everyone stared at them until someone asked if they were Eclipse. The bartender ran away in fear, and the men grew irritated at the gang's arrival. With a twisted grin, one of them warned everyone to be careful with what they did next. Panic spread as people began to flee, initiating a frantic fight with the club's patrons. A man in a suit tried to defend himself while sweating profusely, showing great nervousness and fear. In desperation, he lunged at one of the men in black, using all the strength he had. The sound of clashing weapons echoed through the room, growing louder by the second. A man wearing glasses raised an eyebrow as he heard something strange. Shin Kang-yu stood in front of him, staring at him intently. With an axe in hand, he asked the protagonist if he wanted to die. But Shin was much faster and delivered an attack using transverse teleportation. Completely lost, the enemy couldn't understand what had just happened. He didn't even realize the moment he was attacked swiftly and completely unexpectedly. Already on the ground, he realized it was too late to react or defend himself. Soie was watching the fight intently from a distance, remaining calm and analyzing every move. She carefully observed everything happening in the area, planning her next strategic action, until she stepped out of her hiding place. She approached the protagonist stealthily, making no perceptible sound. Soon he sensed the woman's presence as she slowly moved toward him. She hit a sharp knife behind her, ready to strike a fatal blow. With a single motion, she hurled the knife toward Shin Kang-yu. The hero had to think and act quickly in that moment. However, the knife flew toward an enemy who had been trying to attack him from behind, hitting him precisely. Racked with unbearable pain, the man could only look at the woman's face, unable to react properly. Immediately after, she struck another fatal blow, giving him no time to respond. He couldn't understand why she was saying those words, which seemed completely disconnected. Without any explanation, the short-haired woman continued her relentless attack, showing no sign of hesitation. She fought tirelessly against anyone who dared to approach, driven by unshakable determination. Not even the warrior could understand what was happening there. The woman stated that she had never seen him before, but something about him caught her attention, and she asked which guild he belonged to. With a serious tone, he retorted that he didn't like being tied down to any place. Smiling, she asked if they could talk business, and he agreed. More armed men appeared to fight against them. None of them understood why the investigator was attacking, completely changing their plans. Her gaze was overwhelming, but she continued fighting them all. The men were already terrified by everything the woman was doing, unable to react properly. With a firm and authoritative voice, she ordered the men in black to advance and attack without hesitation. In complete desperation and confusion, they didn't know how to respond to the rapidly escalating chaos. With no other option, they charged toward the two, calmly waited, weapons drawn and ready to strike. Shin Kang-hu was beginning to understand that this was all part of her plan. He started wondering if the woman was just trying to test his abilities. Determined, he decided to play along with her game and attack the fighters with swift and precise movements. The protagonist revealed one of his special abilities, using it with extreme speed and efficiency. The attacks kept coming from all directions, making the environment increasingly chaotic and dangerous. One of the men managed to disarm the hero. This was the perfect chance to take him down right there. But he always had a trick up his sleeve, refusing to be defeated in any situation. With quick and precise movements, he was faster than anyone else in that chaotic place. His skills were incredibly impressive and highly effective, leaving everyone around him stunned. With a single precise strike, he severed one of his enemy's hands, neutralizing him in a brutal fashion. Amazed by what she had just witnessed, the woman began to suspect that he might be using telekinesis to fight. He looked at her with tired, exhausted eyes after the intense battle, showing the weight of his efforts. Without hesitation, he ordered everyone to head immediately to the emergency exit to ensure their safety. Wanting to get out of there, he started running, but they quickly realized he was trying to escape. Furious, the commander ordered his men to chase that bastard immediately. The pair began fleeing the area while some men pursued them, and others remained in the main hall. Curious, the woman started asking him a series of questions, wanting to know if he was an assassin and if he used magic. Showing his artifacts, he answered with a smile. Using his magical glove, he attempted to connect it to his dagger. He simply told her that she could think whatever she wanted. As he ran, the protagonist suddenly encountered a series of enemies speeding down the roads. A broadcast message could be heard announcing that members of the Black Lion were trying to cause a disturbance inside the club. Meanwhile, the men in the hall continued attacking the customers who desperately cried for help. The announcement stated that Eclipse was working hard to suppress the situation quickly, targeting the fugitives. But Shin Kang-hu remained the fastest and most skilled person there. The blows aimed at him never landed. He dodged them with astonishing agility and precision. He skillfully dodged and counterattacked with all his strength, quickly taking down his enemies. A new notification appeared before the protagonist, and he couldn't immediately understand its meaning. He had received an unexpected sponsorship from a constellation, recognizing his acts of justice during the intense battle. A soldier tried to strike him with 2 knives, but he laughed, showing how ridiculous it all was. He threw a knife toward the man's forehead, who couldn't even defend himself. The woman began deeply reflecting on the idea of justice that he had mentioned. She questioned whether justice truly existed in this cruel world full of inequality and conflict. However, the protagonist didn't care about that. He was focused only on his immediate objectives. The soldiers took their attack positions, saying they would repay the sponsor. An axe was violently hurled. It struck the wall with full force, creating an impact that echoed throughout the space. Shin Kang-hu seized the moment and used the wall as support to perform a strategic leap. He advanced toward the man at the top of the stairs using all his available resources. The leap, though short in distance, was devastating and managed to take down 3 enemies at once. After landing the strike, he dropped to his knees, feeling the weight of his physical exertion. The sound of short-distance jumps echoed nearby. Soie pulled a knife from one of the fallen men. She had already expected this fatal outcome. Meanwhile, Shin Kang-hu kept running, kicking open every door in his path. He spotted her in the distance, signaling the safe route ahead. Happy and relieved, the girl celebrated, believing that her eyes had correctly identified the right direction. Outside, the stars shone intensely in the dark sky, illuminating the silent and cold night. Together, the two finally escaped the club, leaving behind the chaos and danger. Eclipse's soldiers were still searching for the 2 fugitives. Hidden, they waited for the right moment to act. The woman suggested that he work somewhere freer than a guild. With her penetrating gaze, she assured him that the pay would be excellent while handing him a card. The hero replied that he would contact her after dealing with some more urgent matters. With that, he turned his back and continued alone into the darkness. The subordinate remained exactly where she was, awaiting new orders or instructions to act immediately. She answered a call from her master, who was seeking her for an extremely important discussion. Observing some prisoners, she calmly reported that everything had been taken care of in that place and there were no more issues. She asked the master if he wanted her to investigate someone. He only needed to say the name, but location would be the Chungmyung Detention Center. And the person to be investigated was none other than Shin Kang-hu. At a train station, countless people were boarding, disembarking, and walking across the platform. Someone descended the train stairs wearing black shoes and tight pants. It was Shin Kang-hu, who concluded that he wasn't yet wanted, judging by Soie's reaction. But the right move would be to leave Daijin as a precaution. Eclipse was expanding its influence and had been closely monitoring the trains heading to Gapyeong. The safest option for him was to go through Yongsan Station. The man began opening a cardboard box, tearing off the tape. Carefully, he noticed that his package had arrived without any issues and held it in his hands. He used a hidden space near the station and retrieved the solatium. As he focused on his surroundings, he overheard a conversation. A man in a fur-lined jacket was speaking to someone over the phone, saying that the person only needed to act. Noticing that he was being watched, the man began shouting frantically, asking what Shin was looking at. All he wanted was for the person on the phone to come to Yongsan Station. A man with gray hair and a long coat controlled fire. Everyone gazed at the image displayed on a massive screen in a building in Seoul. It was the place where Junghwa Guild's smart monopoly over dungeons was maintained under the guise of security. But it was also the only place where the National Security Agency actually did its job, since it managed to run a market of astonishing scale and constantly kept prices crushingly high. The protagonist realized that he urgently needed to stop relying on practical use data and change his approach. He began reflecting deeply on his unique abilities and the valuable items he had accumulated over time. With determination, he gripped one of those items tightly, feeling the weight of his important decision. Without hesitation, he destroyed the item with one hand, demonstrating his strength and unwavering conviction in that moment. For him, the power he possessed was more than enough to face any challenge that lay ahead. The speed of resistance recovery would be doubled when out of combat for more than 30 minutes. Unlike other hunters, he didn't have to worry about mana, as he possessed unique and special abilities. Holding a dagger firmly in his hands, the man began walking calmly through the deserted streets of the city. Suddenly, he was startled by something unexpected, stopping immediately to try to understand what was happening. There was a family walking peacefully in front of him, while the child asked to eat chicken at night. The mother smiled, affirming that yes, and that the National Security Agency and the Junghwa Guild would protect them. Shin Kang-hu watched that scene unfolding in front of him. He reflected that it was truly the epitome of blind faith as he walked in the opposite direction of the family. A noise caught his attention, and he turned around. It was criminals who had attacked the family and were trying to capture the child, while the father begged them to let him go. The boy was visibly scared, but the hooded man had no intention of satisfying his pleas. The people around began calling for help from the National Security Agency, fearing the worst at that moment. Shin Kang-hu was already completely prepared to attack those idiots, even in broad daylight. He appeared suddenly, stating that he would show sincerity to the hooded man, leaving everyone around surprised. Their eyes widened spontaneously upon seeing someone unexpected approaching, completely changing the course of the situation. The criminals spotted Chu Wanhyang in the distance and were visibly frightened, realizing that the situation had changed. Everyone present was incredulous at the appearance of Shin Kang-hu from the Junghwa Guild. His constellation possessed specialized abilities in swordsmanship and spatial separation. The protagonist didn't understand why that man was there, as he wasn't the type to intervene in situations like that. Chub Wanhyang began his attack on the criminals. He threw a card toward them. One of the men caught it in the air and looked at it suspiciously. The man in the suit informed him that he could withdraw as much as he wanted if he returned the child. The other thug immediately started putting the boy down without hesitation. But the boy was suddenly thrown to the ground and fell unexpectedly. The father rushed to the boy to check if he was okay, while the thieves fled. The job was done, and Chi Wanhyang could leave. The family was safe, and the man went after the criminals. Shin Kang-hu realized how strong and courageous he was. He was a skilled swordsman, specializing in manipulating spatial abilities, making him an unpredictable opponent. Determined, he would not allow the two hooded men to escape so quickly and easily. The swordsman began using all his powers, delivering devastating attacks against the two hooded men. Both men were completely confused, not understanding anything about what was happening in that chaotic moment. With precise and devastating sword strikes, he attacked the men, leaving them no chance to react. They didn't even have time to respond because Chi Wanhyang was extremely agile. When the mask fell, one of the criminals' faces was revealed. It was the man who had been talking on the phone earlier at the station. The man couldn't believe that his friend was dead. Begging for his life, he said that he had only done as he was ordered and that it was supposed to be just an act. None of the people could hear what the two were saying. Desperate, the man kept pleading for his life. He decided to fight against that powerful man who frightened him so much. But no one was a match for his powers. Thus, Chi Wanhyang finished off the second criminal and walked away, informing the people that they were safe now. It was something the hero had already expected. He used external hunters to increase public confidence in the Junghwa Guild and create a pretext to monopolize the rights. People thanked him while the protagonist walked away, thinking that the opportunities attributed to Chi Wanhyang would all be his later. With a notebook in hand, a sincere apology was heard. The man extended a sheet with all the information about the fugitive prisoner mentioned by the woman. Without missing any details, she began to read the received file. Page by page, she devoured all the content in the material. Shin Kang-hu approached two men in a forest. One of them recognized him immediately. The protagonist's file was in Soie's hands. She smiled, saying that the person in the photo looked quite familiar. The hero stated that it was time and asked to enter the portal. The guard informed that the dungeon initialization was complete. However, the sentinel remembered that Shin Kang-hu had said he was level 20. That was clearly below the recommended level, making the situation more dangerous than initially expected. They asked the protagonist if he would really be okay, considering the difficulties he would face at that moment. He began to reflect that it was absolutely necessary to level up to achieve his future goals. The minimum goal set was to reach level 50, something that would require a lot of effort and dedication. He needed to level up quickly, even if it meant suffering a lot at the beginning of his journey. The landscape around him changed completely, transforming into towering mountains that dominated the distant horizon. Shin Kang-hu walked through the desert, facing an extremely strong wind that made his movements difficult. He could barely see what was in front of him. The only thing that helped him navigate through the emptiness was the trail left by his footprints. He was startled upon reaching a part of the path. It was a huge canyon, unseen by him. The man almost fell into the gigantic hole in the earth that was blocking his path. A noise was heard coming from behind the character. Numerous creature eyes began to appear in the middle of the landscape. They were ancient lizards staring directly at him. If everything went well, the hero would be able to reach his goal faster than expected. The lizards moved quickly and came in full force for the attack. Meanwhile, Soie was still analyzing the received information about the fugitive. She wanted to know more about the results of the chase analysis. The man believed that Shin Kangyu had managed to deceive a level 100 hunter, someone who possessed mana. Even so, he didn't understand his success in subsequent missions since he had level 10 abilities. The image began to be carefully analyzed. Soie thanked the director for the help offered. Additionally, she revealed that she had met the fugitive a few days earlier. She then added that she believed he was at level 100, shocking the director. Thus, he didn't understand the information he had been given, finding it completely useless. Since the researchers had not even been able to comprehend the character's level, back in the mountains, the hero continued using his abilities to defend himself. The lizards attacked, but his powers were more sophisticated. The dagger struck one of them precisely. His aim was at the creature's stomachs as expected. Using the magic glove, he reflected that it would take an eternity to finish them all. He pulled his blood-stained weapon from the animal's belly, preparing to continue the fight without hesitation. With a precise and devastating strike, he destroyed many of them at once, impressing with his strength. The protagonist made quick calculations, analyzing which enemies had not yet been injured and planning his next move. Only 2 of them remained, so he wasted no time and attacked them in sequence, finishing them off quickly. The creatures lay on the ground while he boasted about his achievement with a confident smile. With a flick of his finger, he provoked the remaining creatures, calling them to battle without showing fear. Crawling slowly with eyes as red as shining rubies, the monsters approached, ready to attack again. There were many enemies against just one person, but he remained firm, determined to defeat them all without retreating. Something to be careful about when hunting monsters is damage. Even if the monster dies, if you were not able to cause damage, the system considers that the hunter did not hunt the monster. But if you manage to injure the monster even just a little, it can bring you advantageous results. The protagonist began to flee from the lizards that were relentlessly pursuing him. They jumped and ran after him, but he wasn't afraid. The short-distance jump was used skillfully to cross the Great Canyon with impressive precision. During the crossing, the creatures chasing him began to fall one by one, unable to reach him. But the man completed his passage successfully, reaching the other side while leaving the enemies behind. The lizards that were chasing him fell into the deep pit. There was no chance of survival upon hitting the ground so abruptly. The task was finally completed, and he had defeated an ordinary monster, successfully ending the challenge. With each monster that fell, a message appeared about the new achievement. His plan had worked, and now he was at level 27. Meanwhile, in another room, Soie found a drawing on the ground, probably made by Shin Kangyu. It was a blood ritual, but the woman still didn't know its motivation. She began to consider the possibility that he had summoned a constellation. Her phone rang. It was her master looking for updates on the investigation. The subordinate informed him that the fugitive was not an ordinary guy, and the man nodded. She requested the help of one more person, because she had been annoyed by the information given by the director and ended up killing him. Returning to the mountains, the warrior observed the desolate scene around him. The defeated animals lay on the ground, evidencing the intensity of the recent battle. He held a stone in his hands, analyzing it carefully as he reflected on the past. He remembered the difficult times in mining when he faced daily challenges to survive and prosper. At that stage of the game, Soie should already know that he is the fugitive. Even so, he refused to be caught so easily. A gigantic fire-shaped figure appeared behind the protagonist, illuminating the surroundings. Walking calmly, the creature tried to approach him with long strides and threatening movements. He noticed the monster and, with a confident smile, informed it that he had been expecting it. Wielding his dagger, he emphasized that it was his first ability. The two stood face to face in the middle of the mountains. A hooded man prepared his bow and arrow. The creature was seen defeated in the water. Shin Kangyu had achieved another feat in his journey. A notification appeared confirming that he had completed the ability. Now he would be able to imbue the fire element into all of his weapons. From above, the man couldn't believe how quickly he had hunted down an intermediate boss. His hunting style seemed very refined. He used all his combat abilities to guide the fire humanoid to the oasis. The use of illusion magic served to deceive it. That hero really didn't behave like someone of his lower level, the observer thought. Thus, it was no surprise that the captain was so interested in him. The command to follow him had come from her. The guard was supposed to follow him wherever he went. That's why he had memorized the warrior's face. The captain informed him that his test results were very good, but his low level was her real concern. She wanted the man to help Shin Kangyu if he was ever in danger, and he should explain to him the advantages of teamwork when necessary. The warrior would be of great help to the Blue Eyes if he helped them grow a little. Continuing his surveillance, he decided to follow him a little longer. A dagger was thrown from a long distance. It struck a protective shield with precision. The shield began to break after the impact. the protagonist realized that their defense was robust. One of them was an intermediate rear defense boss, another was an intermediate side defense boss, and the third was an intermediate front defense boss. The three were inside this protective shield, effectively doing the work of three people, working as a team, covering each other. This reminded him of Lee Yaren's words. He had said he would get in touch after dealing with Hyojumtae. The woman asked him to wait a little. She offered him a full-time job. Thoughtful, he glanced at her from the corner of his eye without answering the question. Smiling, he said he gave the impression of being tied down to some group and that he didn't like sharing things. Returning to the fight, the hero made a short-distance jump. He carefully approached the glowing blue shield, analyzing every detail before making his move. He started running around the giant sphere, tracing a strategic plan to attack the target. With precision, he grabbed his dagger and thrust it directly into the shield, trying to cause significant damage. He kept running quickly and cleverly, maintaining his pace to avoid any counterattacks from the enemy. He used another one of his abilities, now the transversal teleportation. The warriors were completely lost. Now he tried to use the capture ability. The men could no longer see anything at that moment. Another short-distance jump was used. The protagonist was enjoying how everything was going according to plan. He was at the perfect distance for the abduction to work. Soon the warriors began to realize what was happening. With the power of abduction, he defeated them one by one effortlessly. The soldiers couldn't tell where the attacks were coming from since they couldn't see anything. Shin Kangoo was extremely fast in combat. The protective barrier was almost completely broken. He said that this was the reason nature worked in teams. He mentioned the consequences of relying on others when one couldn't even take care of oneself. Using transversal teleportation, he attacked his enemies quickly and completely unpredictably. The opposing fighters had no chance to react against his speed and impressive skills. A new short-distance jump was carefully planned, ensuring a strategic advantage during combat. Smiling confidently, he kept fighting with increasing intensity, demonstrating his superiority in every move. The men within the shields could no longer defend themselves. This battle was already lost. Victory notifications appeared almost immediately. However, there was still one boss left, and he wanted to attack him with all his power, but the man was already prepared for the moment. It was one against the other, face to face. The protagonist raised his dagger, striking precisely. In that way, he was able to land multiple attacks on his opponent. With his fist raised high, the enemy attempted to land one last desperate blow against the protagonist. However, the illusion magic ability completely confused him, leaving him vulnerable and unable to react properly. There was absolutely no chance of survival for the soldier, who was now completely at the mercy of the attack. The fatal blow was about to happen, ending the battle quickly and decisively for the protagonist. There was no longer enough defense to protect him. The enemy had no chance left. He fell to the ground with a dagger in his chest, and Shin Kangoo reached level 29. Another achievement for the hero, who remained undefeated. The side, rear, and front defense abilities were combined to create the protective barrier ability. This combination was very interesting for the hunter, and certainly very useful on his journey. The hooded man was still watching him from afar, fascinated by his abilities and agreeing that he might not need a team. In reality, it was still too early to determine that. The observer would only be sure of this fact when he saw him attempt to defeat the main boss. Shin Kangoo was already facing his next opponent, and the man following him was there at all times, observing him in battle, always keeping a close eye on his every move. The two men were staring at each other while the protagonist thrilled at reaching this moment. The white-haired monster was waiting and possessed the blood burn ability, and it was the most sought-after ability by the hero since the beginning. The monster began flying frantically, trying to figure out how to launch the first attack. It let out a powerful roar, echoing through the surroundings, demonstrating its fury and determination in battle. From its hands, dark purple fireballs emerged, launched directly at the enemy at high speed. The hero dodged, taking about 3 short-distance jumps. The creature noticed the man's quick movements. A beam of light spread through the air. It was defensive magic being used. Using the wind arrow ability, the white-haired creature defended itself. The protagonist noticed how difficult it was to get a good angle to attack. It held something green in its mouth that seemed powerful. The fight between the two continued, and the creature managed to strike the object near the hero, splitting it in two, through front-spamming abilities and defensive magic from behind. He could defeat the melee mage using a few strikes to reach him. However, Shin Kangoo reconsidered his plan, concluding that he would end up bleeding too much. And that damned creature's signature ability, known as Blood Burn, was devastating and mortally dangerous, besides having the power to kill him instantly and brutally. As the mage flew around him, the hunter tried to find another way to get close for an attack. The mage had already shown all of its abilities, but Shin Kangoo had only demonstrated his jump. Thus, it was unaware of the other hidden defensive techniques. Under that red sky, the battle continued. The observer made comments about the fight, saying that neither the monster nor the man had managed to land decent blows. He realized that the hero was still looking for his opponent's weakness. The mage's magic was becoming increasingly deadly and dangerous. That creature seemed very irritated with the fight, activating its red, terrifying gaze. Noticing his opponent's irritation, the blue-haired boy started to toy with him. It was the perfect time for his attack. He would show everything he had been holding back. He made several short-distance jumps to get even closer to the mage flying in the skies. With an intimidating gaze, he was already close enough to complete another mission. He was now within the necessary range. The mage didn't even have time to notice the boy beside him. Its white hair stood on end upon realizing how this boy could defeat it, and it cast a spell. Shin Kangwoo's plan had not yet been completed. The fight was intensifying and more power explosions erupted around the observer, who took cover behind the rocks. It was time to use universal teleportation to attack the mage from behind. He glanced to the side and saw that the character was already beside him. Smiling wickedly, the mage wanted to attack the hero with all his magic. An intense explosion of dark purple energy filled the air. But it was too soon for the mage to rejoice in his incredible feats. The protagonist positioned one of his hands and used the protective barrier ability he had acquired earlier to defend himself from the intense attack. He also made use of the fire imbuing ability and delivered a devastating strike to the mage's back, making him fall to the ground while screaming in pain. Shin Kangwoo's gaze was overwhelming as he observed his victory. Burning relentlessly, the mage was engulfed in intense flames. Defeating the enemy, he concluded that the ability wasn't so bad after all. The hooded man couldn't believe it when he saw that the hero had managed to kill Alicia at this level entirely on his own without help. Now he possessed the blood burn ability he had long desired and had completed his primary objective. He also noticed that the guy who had been following him throughout his journey had left. His level was already at 32. Now he possessed the basic assassin class ability, Acceleration. Observing his new and well-earned achievements, he consumed the green objective. He received an unexpected sponsorship, granting him a small amount of constellation power. At his feet lay a shining blue item, emanating a mysterious energy that seemed to pulse intensely. That constellation power was now entirely his, something he had never imagined possessing in his hands, and it would surely be very useful on his journey, helping him overcome the challenges that still lay ahead. Meanwhile, in a dark building in the middle of the street, something sinister happened, hidden in the shadows of the night. Soie was informing her master about Shin Kangwoo's journey. She was with a few soldiers who were waiting outside a locked door. Their goal was to enter the room and search for something that could be evidence. A man in a black jacket was reporting everything that was happening through his phone. He was typing a message to his client informing them that Eclipse was looking for traces of Shin Kangwoo in his home. Upon entering the place, there were no traces left behind. It was completely empty. On the other end of the phone, a man smoked a cigarette. The short-haired girl listened as her master commented that he was becoming more and more interested in the protagonist. He explained that his interest was because the boy did not hesitate when he moved, was careful, and acted with precision. He added that his caution was a useful trait that Soie did not possess. Her eyes widened when she heard that her master was interested in the man's work, who would become a direct competitor. He continued to insistently ask if she had found any useful evidence to advance the investigation. Reading through a piece of paper carefully, she stated that she believed she had found something relevant to the case. The woman explained that the owner of the house they were in was, in fact, a skilled and dangerous hunter. A character observed the movement from the other side of the street without approaching. Leaving the place in complete disarray, the gang left satisfied with the clues they had found that day. Leaving the mountains, the hero reflected on the blood burn ability he had stolen. Additionally, selling the received green magic stone earned him 50 million won. He also obtained a ring that increased the bleeding effect and a skill book, which he decided to keep. They heard a noise seemingly coming from his phone. Now that he was farther from the dungeon, his phone was starting to regain signal. He checked the messages he had received while inside the dungeon, informing him that Eclipse was investigating him. He celebrated the warning with a wide grin, clearly showing his satisfaction. Thinking of Soie, he noted how incredibly fast and efficient she was in investigations. After reading the messages, Shin Kangwoo remembered Han Soyeon. He confirmed that this was the informative power of the Flower Guild or listeners, as expected. He concluded that Eclipse had noticed his movements and would soon search for Li Yeren. He knew that woman had no reason to protect him because he had refused her partnership. He was just a businessman. Despite that, the blue eyes were at odds with Eclipse due to the city of Daejeon. He decided that he would go after Hyo Jung-tae. Calmly, he boarded the train without any luggage. He reflected that help would be necessary for this job and that he should find that person before anything else. A red-haired character observed the brick building. Scratching his head, he wondered if he would be able to catch Hyo Jung-tae at this pace. He spoke to a man smoking a cigarette and warned him to stop with his plans. The man in the suit informed him that the Yangpyeong incident was outside his jurisdiction. The character's eyebrow twitched, showing his contained anger as he stared at the building ahead. That building was the last registered home where he had lived, carrying memories that now seemed distant and painful. Step by step, the man climbed the stairs slowly, each step echoing the heavy silence that filled the air. He was already at the top of the stairs when he knocked on the door forcefully, determined to face whatever awaited him. A light-haired character appeared, asking who was knocking. The red-bearded man questioned him about Hyo Jung-tae, but he seemed not to know him. Only one person lived in that apartment, and it was that very boy. Looking inside the house, the man in the coat noticed a weapon on the kitchen counter. Promptly, he asked the boy if he was a hunter. The boy turned almost instantly to observe his weapon. He explained that he had a weapon because the current world was very dangerous, and he was sure that everyone had one at home. Ashamed, the character apologizes for the inconvenience and the boy closes the door. That was not the place he was looking for, but he decided to continue his relentless search. Meanwhile, the gun was quickly grasped by the boy in the apartment. Smiling confidently, he opened the door again as if he already knew the outcome. Without hesitation, he aimed directly at the redhead's back, ready to attack immediately. The redhead quickly noticed the movement and drew his long sword to defend himself from the imminent danger. Advancing with his skills, the man was much faster. He struck the boy's hand that was holding the pistol. Surprised by the discovery, he realized that the boy was a shooter. Entering the apartment, he chased after the blonde boy. He violently kicked his back and made him fall to the ground, screaming in pain. Aiming to instill fear, he placed his long sword close to the boy's head. He ordered him to tell everything about Hugh Jungtae. The boy revealed that he had seen him only once due to a commission, where he stated that he would kill anyone who came looking for him. He also knew that Jungtae was hiding alone and discreetly, supported by someone terrifying. With his swords at the enemy's neck, the redhead asked about the revealed information. Now outside the building, the man wondered if this was the reason the Yangpiao investigation was halted. His gaze shifted to a noise in the street. He saw some people approaching them. 3 guards from the Seoul National Security Agency were patrolling the area, alert to any movement. Not wanting to be spotted, he quickly hid behind a wall, trying to avoid any direct confrontation. The 3 men walked slowly, scanning the area while looking for a specific place to investigate further. Revealing his eyes for a moment, the red-haired man hesitated on how to hide from them completely. Suddenly, a blue-haired character appeared at the scene, approaching the officers to talk. He claimed he needed to tell them something important, but was informed they were on a mission. The man told them that a hunter had robbed him on the road, describing the incident in detail to the officers. While he distracted the guards with his story, the red-haired man seized the perfect opportunity to escape unnoticed. He ran quickly to a hiding place, ensuring he was far enough away to avoid being captured again. Upon reaching safety, he was grateful for his luck, relieved to have escaped such a dangerous and complicated situation. Happy with his achievement, Shin Na realized he had helped that man escape. A book is reached from the top of the shelf by a hand wearing a watch. The man holding his swords walks slowly while attentively observing the darkness around him. An old photo album opens, revealing a picture that brings back memories of a distant past. 2 friends appear together, celebrating something special as the memory of that day resurfaces in his mind. The friends laugh together, and one congratulates the other on moving to Seoul. They continue laughing, enjoying the joyful moment, unaware of what the future holds for them. The friend in the black suit told the other to rest assured, promising to take responsibility while he was away. The 2 would protect justice in their own way without hesitation, even if it meant facing great challenges and dangers. Another character enters the room, his shiny black shoes immediately drawing everyone's attention. It was Shin Na, who had previously encountered the red-haired man carrying an aura of mystery and intense determination. He questioned him about how he had discovered that place, but the man seemed to know everything about Yu Do-hoon. He revealed his current level, which was 362, and that he worked for the Seoul NS. Startled and gripping his sword, he asked if he had conducted a background check or was a member of the Seoul NS. He only knew the reason for the search for Hyo Jungtae. Shin Na wanted to work alongside the man. Back at Lee Yeren's desk, she noted how unfortunate it was that he wasn't interested in the mercenary corporation. But the man in front of her was an excellent commission receiver, potentially even being recommended to Jang Shuan. The 2 heard a strange noise and immediately turned, alert and with serious expressions. The screams were alarming, echoing through the place, leaving both visibly startled by the unexpected situation. It was Soie arriving at the office, accompanied by her feared gang known as Eclipse. Carrying a paper, she announced that she had finally found what she was looking for. Standing up, Lee Yeren couldn't believe the audacity of someone crawling into that place without permission. With a smile on her face, the long-haired woman stated that she didn't want to fight, only to talk calmly. She handed over Shin Na's file, asking if Lee Yeren knew him with an enigmatic and firm look. Shocked by the information, Lee Yeren looks at the paper in her hands, trying to understand what was happening. Returning to the conversation between the 2 hunters, the redhead grows curious to learn more about the offered job. With doubts, he asks what kind of work the 2 of them would be able to do together. Shin Na emphasizes that capturing Hyo Jungtae would not be the end of everything, and that Yu Do-hoon would be incapable of handling it, especially if he worked for the Seoul National Security Agency. He recalls how difficult it was to obtain information about his friend due to the restricted access. The redhead explains that it was a matter of jurisdiction, but he wonders why the guards had almost run into him just a short while ago. Confused, Yu Do-hoon does not understand where the hunter is going with this. He explains that Hyo Jungtae has support, and that he is someone powerful enough for even the National Security Agency to stay on high alert. The redhead remembers the information given by the blonde-haired boy about the conversation he had with the man in the suit. He starts putting the pieces of the puzzle together, analyzing each detail and arriving at a shocking conclusion. He desperately wants to know who this mysterious person supporting Hyo Jungtae is, helping him in such a discreet manner. To his surprise, the supporter was one of the most influential members of the powerful Junghwa Guild. Immediately, he is completely stunned by the information, unable to believe what he has just discovered. He doesn't believe the man's words, thinking it's all nonsense. Shin Na states that the 2 of them should join forces due to their shared goals. He gives a date and time tomorrow at 6 p.m., saying the red-bearded man would see him if he went to the square. He also assures him that this is not a trap, saying he can investigate as much as he wants. In return, if Shin-na keeps his promise, the man will work with him. In Lee Yaren's office, the woman continues questioning without resting. The other woman reflects on the real name of the person she knew, Sunkyu. She knew that Eclipse was very interested in him, having sent the hunting dog, but she retorts that she does not know him. Despite her denial, Soie grows irritated and states that she has already confirmed that she was recommended to him. With her hands on her head, the short-haired woman confirms the information but comments that it had been cancelled. Then she orders the woman and her henchman to leave. Very irritated, she bites her lips forcefully and threatens, saying it would be best if she wasn't lying and deceiving her. The woman storms out, stomping her feet heavily on the ground. Shortly after her departure, Lee Yaren orders someone to keep an eye on the hunting dog to monitor her movements. She asks if she should inform Shin-na about what happened, seeking to strengthen her relationship with the blue-eyed man. We return to the blue sky near the building, where the peaceful atmosphere contrasts with recent events. A message reaches Hugh Jungtae, informing him that someone is persistently looking for him. With a sarcastic smile, cursing people as damn fools, he calmly and coldly plans his next move. He puts his phone in his pocket, saying that no one knows he's hiding right under their noses. He continues walking through the streets, humming a random melody, unaware of what is about to happen. Suddenly, he notices someone speaking to him and discreetly following him throughout his entire route. It was Shin Kangyu, the person he had been waiting for a long time, appearing at that moment. The Dark Priest's ability is revealed as a constellation with a tendency toward evil. The two men begin talking, exchanging tense glances while the surrounding environment remains silent. The vision capturing ability is activated, revealing hidden details that completely change the course of the situation. Hugh Jungtae is immediately hit by the spell, feeling the energy surging through his body overwhelmingly. Something begins inside him, a transformation that no one could have predicted. The two rush to initiate their attacks, moving with precision and speed toward the enemy. Short-distance jumps are used, allowing them to close in quickly and maintain the advantage. Shin-na realizes that the enemy has avoided his vision-capturing spell, meaning his magical resistance is quite high. The long-haired man wonders if this was the person searching for him. Standing before him, he does not move. Hugh Jungtae begins using his abilities since the man had discovered his hiding place and he needed to defend himself. He wanted to end his life and launch all his swords at him. A weapon was fired, striking a man who screamed. Crying desperately, he emphasizes that he knew absolutely nothing, denying any involvement. He firmly states that he does not know any Shin Kanghu, trying to prove his innocence against the accusations made. Soie, however, continued her intense attacks, determined to uncover the truth without showing any signs of hesitation. She did not believe the words he had spoken, as she was tired of lies and manipulations in similar situations. She remembered the day she met Shin-na, who had never contacted her. She also recalled the shock she felt when her master mentioned that he was a strong competitor. She stomped the ground with her sharp heels, using all her strength, while her determination grew with each passing moment. She no longer saw him as anything different from an enemy, someone who needed to be confronted without hesitation or mercy. She knew she could not allow this to happen, that this man would take her favoritism. She had to act immediately, thinking of herself, before the situation spiraled completely out of control. After eliminating the man she was speaking to, she thought her master would understand her actions, even if they were extreme. If she accidentally killed Shin Kanghu, she believed she would be forgiven, as it was all part of her mission. He was fighting for his survival at that very moment, facing attacks coming from all directions around him. His protective shields saved him from receiving numerous stabs in the back, ensuring his chance to keep fighting. Hugh Jungtae noticed another ability in his enemy, realizing that he was far more dangerous than he seemed, and he reflected on whether this man was not actually an assassin, questioning his actions and choices up until that moment. 4 more knives were positioned in his hand, ready to be thrown with precision and devastating force, and all of them were aimed at the protagonist, who needed to react quickly to avoid his fate. He dodged and evaded all the attacks with immense agility, moving as if he could predict each enemy movement. He had sharp visual acuity and had taken some distance to defend himself, carefully analyzing his next move. The two waited to resume their attacks, silently studying each other, ready for the final confrontation. Hugh Jungtae's gaze was anything but happy, carrying a growing fury that showed in his every expression. He wanted to strike him up close, ensuring that his blow would be precise and end the fight once and for all. He was impressed by the intense combat movements, observing each strike with a mixture of surprise and admiration. He had not expected such reflexes, which demonstrated a skill level far beyond what he had initially imagined. He was shocked by so many abilities from his lower-level opponent, questioning how someone like this could have been underestimated. The knife was pointed at him. The bloody stab attack was used quickly and painfully. Shin Kangyu stated that he had planted his mana in places where his opponent might try to hide. The artifacts were all scattered on the ground. As he calmly walked among them, his presence was noticed, but no one dared to interfere. He explained that every time the long-haired enemy struggled to move, he became more predictable. The protagonist could clearly see the entire route of his opponent, anticipating every movement with precision and confidence. His piercing eyes stared intensely, conveying a sense of superiority and absolute control. The only thing Jungtae could think about was the intense pain he was feeling. He would need to retreat, at least for now, as the blows he had taken had caused significant damage to his body. But that would not help much, as the protagonist, confident in his victory, was already announcing the outcome. He then used his newest ability, the powerful Blood Burn, which drastically increased his strength in critical moments. The opponent writhed in pain, no longer knowing what to do or where to run. Lying on the ground, he twisted in agony, and the pain did not subside or lessen. Even though he was badly wounded, he still threatened, showing that someone powerful was backing him. However, Shin Kangwoo was not afraid and already knew that this person was Chae Wangyum of the Jungwoo Guild. In disbelief, the man lying on the ground could not understand how the other had already known this information. Preparing the fatal blow, he adjusted his stance and focused all of his strength to end the enemy once and for all. In a more deserted scene, the red-haired, bearded man remained silent, deeply reflecting. Thinking about the night before, he recalled the significant events that had led him to his current situation, and everything that Shin Kangwoo had told him that very night. He had already noticed that the redhead frequently used his watch, too often for it to be merely a keepsake of death. It was the account of his friend that still remained active within that object. For the NS agency to deactivate that account, they would have had to process his deceased friend as having died in the line of duty. But Hyo Jung-tae's supporter would not want that due to the involvement of that fallen friend. That's why the man concluded his statement by saying that they would likely want to handle it discreetly. Thus, they must have chosen to cover up the account instead of following the usual procedure. But a few who could log into the account must have read the investigation details and come to the village. The redhead was deep in thought, paying close attention to the information. Shin Kangwoo stated that it would be necessary for him to cooperate using that account. The next day, the red-haired man arrived at the designated location, even though he was a little late. The protagonist informed him that he had been waiting for him all this time. But the other man was only interested in learning about Hyo Jung-tae, persistently questioning where he might be hiding. All wounded and exhausted, the wanted man finally appeared in the hero's grasp, unable to resist or escape. Now, Yoo Do-hoon finally understood why it had been so difficult to locate him, recognizing the fugitive's exceptional skills. There were many people nearby watching everything closely, and this was intentional. If he were arrested at that moment, not even his supporter would be able to do anything. He was still given the option of personal revenge against the man, and no one would stop him. He was asked to make a decision as quickly as possible, pressured to choose before it was too late. Thoughtful and unsure of what to choose, he was completely speechless, unable to make an immediate decision. The sun slowly set around the park, painting the environment in orange hues and creating a melancholic atmosphere. A guard suddenly appeared at the scene, ordering everyone to step back while closely observing what was happening. He moved closer, holding a strange doll that suddenly began opening its face in a frightening manner. He asked Shin Kangwoo if he was the one who had contacted them about Hyo Jung-tae. The protagonist responded affirmatively and presented the captured fugitive, who was widely known for his impressive concealment abilities. The guard asked him to provide his hunter registration number, necessary for the reward to be properly processed. Without hesitation, the protagonist provided this information, demonstrating confidence and ensuring the procedure was carried out efficiently and quickly. The guard thanked him for his cooperation and immediately processed the transaction, delivering the promised reward. He had earned a reward of 300 million won and the dungeon rental. It was already nighttime and the red-haired man gazed at the horizon. He had refused his personal revenge. But that was not a problem for him, as he was content with his decision, made with his friend in mind. Both of them only wanted a place where they could trust something in such a difficult world. They wanted the National Security Agency and the Jungwoo Guild to be like that. Returning to the conversation, he wanted the NS agency to pay for its mistakes. He did not want to let either the guild or the NS agency rest after hearing that man's words. He was already carefully considering the right path to take, planning each step with focus and determination. It was the same path where he had led the Great Rebellion against the NS agency, marking his history with courage and boldness. In the novel, he was described as a dangerous villain and also a declared enemy of the powerful Jungwoo Guild, just as the protagonist also sought to achieve his goals, facing every possible challenge. He had been captured due to the Hyo Jung-tae incident, but this time, there would be no trace left behind. The man still thought about the favor requested of him, only because of the reward. Shin Kangwoo stated that he was not the type to do volunteer work. He smiled while making these statements. He was ready to take down Chae Wangyum, which was a massive reward in the end. The guard reported Hyo Jung-tae's arrest, mentioning that both of his arms were crippled. He wanted to know who had done that to him. Immediately, the officer retrieved the hunter registration, analyzing the data carefully to verify its authenticity. But he was startled when he noticed something strange on the phone screen, which unexpectedly displayed incomplete information. The information that should have been there had mysteriously disappeared, leaving the officer confused and unsure of what to do. Another guard's account had been used to delete the information, eliminating any trace of evidence, which should not have been possible because it was the account of someone who was already dead. In a massive outburst of rage, Che Guangyang could not believe what he was hearing. He did not want to accept what the officer had just told him. He became furious with the guards who kneeled before him, begging for forgiveness. They explained that they had gone to Yangpyeong but had found no suspicious individuals. Enraged, the man refused to believe the words coming from the officers. They pleaded for him to calm down, but his gaze expressed immense disapproval. A beam of red light began to emerge in the room. A man with light-colored hair and eyes entered the scene, asking what was happening. Shin Kangyu emphasized that he had taken Hugh Jongtae's items for himself, including resistance recovery, and he states that there are no better allies than the enemy of your own enemy, something he considered strategic. The redhead does not understand what he is talking about, feeling confused by the enigmatic words spoken at that moment. The character needed a sword to attack the Jeonghwa Guild, and for that, he assisted in a revenge in exchange for an ally. Now the man with the swords was beginning to understand that he was the protagonist of some novel. He does not agree with this statement, and says that he is not that so-called protagonist. Shin Kangyu existed as a contrasting shadow so that Jang Shuan could shine. Stating that he would return to Seoul, the warrior stared at him, and walked into the darkness, descending the hill. Meanwhile, Shin Kangyu continued toward the place he was heading. A reflection on level development emerged as the moon shone in the sky. The fight with the police continued in an alarming manner, yet they did not respond to the insults. He did not calm down at all and kept shouting, making it clear that his anger was uncontrollable. A tall man dressed entirely in white appeared on the scene, bringing with him an imposing and mysterious presence. And he said that Wang Yang was not in a good mood, warning everyone about the imminent danger of the situation. The guards quickly realized that it was Jang Shuan who had arrived, recognizing his overwhelming authority. He ordered the police to leave immediately, making it clear that he would not tolerate any interference in his important affairs. Frightened by his intimidating presence, the officers did not hesitate before obeying him and left the scene quickly. He controlled the situation with ease, and the men withdrew without questioning his orders or showing any resistance. The characters sat in a silent room, each occupying a chair, attentively observing their surroundings. The conversation began slowly and cautiously, with each word carefully chosen to avoid misunderstandings. Jang Shuan asked what the problem was and what had happened to cause such rage. Wang Yang explained that the tool he had been using was broken and suspected that someone had deliberately sabotaged him. The man continued expressing his opinion, but was abruptly interrupted. He had already been warned once before. Seated, the man in the white suit requested more details, trying to understand exactly what the problem was. Calmly, he stated that he no longer cared about the existence of the plague, and that all enemies who blocked his dreams would turn to ashes. At Yangsu Station, a hand was seen touching what appeared to be a statue of a dog. It was Shin Kanghu, who was at that location, observing everything around him with a serious expression. Although it was a hidden dungeon in the novel, he knew that this place held valuable and dangerous secrets. For the protagonist, Jang Shuan, to take advantage of it, he would have to face challenges that tested his strength. The blue-haired man would make good use of it this time, seizing every opportunity that came his way. He walked with long strides, determined to reach his goal, while his presence exuded confidence and absolute determination. And he held in his hands an illuminated dagger, whose light seemed to cut through the darkness that filled the gloomy environment. On high alert, he was already positioned at the entrance, prepared for any attack that might suddenly and treacherously appear. Chanyang, an intermediate boss with multiple eyes, appeared, bringing with him a threatening aura that made the air feel heavier. He sensed the danger as he stealthily approached his target, carefully assessing the right moment to strike without failure. The two stood face to face, the monster being twice his size, exuding an intimidating presence. With magic in his eyes, he initiated the attack, releasing an energy that seemed to dominate the environment. Using shadow steps, the creature duplicated itself, creating a perfect copy that increased the danger even further. The shadow would execute all the attacks, moving with impressive speed, while the original remained still, watching intently, and just as quickly it vanished, disappearing into the air as if it had never existed, leaving behind only silence. With a single leap, it came extremely close to Shin Kanghu. Now there were multiple shadows, but he did not move, waiting for the right moment to act. The shadows charged at the man with full force and cunning, ready to attack without hesitation. With his dagger in hand, he observed the precise moment to act, focusing to execute a decisive move. Using his magical glove, he cast a powerful spell, hoping it would be enough to stop the threat he faced. However, he was not expecting what happened next, caught off guard by the creature's ability to react unpredictably. The creature had dodged his strike, displaying an astonishing agility that left him momentarily speechless, and many others rushed within his reach, surrounding him quickly and heightening the tension of that deadly confrontation. Before he realized it, his dagger was embedded in the ground. He ran quickly to retrieve the object from the ground. Gripping his knife firmly, he was determined to emerge victorious from the battle, ready to overcome any obstacles that arose. His feet floated in the air as he ran toward the shadows, moving with impressive agility and precision. The man began striking them one by one, eliminating the shadows quickly while keeping his focus on victory. He was wiping them all out, not giving them any chance to react, demonstrating his superiority in combat against his enemies. He noticed a new attack coming from behind, realizing too late the approach of something extremely dangerous and fast. It was a shadow moving with frightening precision, ready to strike without giving any chance for defense. It used illusionary magic to confuse him and delivered a strong punch, hitting him with devastating force. The character felt the impact being thrown backward while trying to regain his balance and understand what had just happened. He dropped his knife to the ground, unable to hold onto it after the impact while the situation became even more critical. The shadow noticed that the fighter had disappeared from its vision. It found itself alone in that terrain and was nowhere to be seen. That was when he returned, using all his power. He struck its head precisely with the dagger. That shadow was no longer a problem for him as he had found a way to defeat it completely. Disoriented, its end was imminent, powerless to react as the protagonist prepared for the final blow. It collapsed to the ground without any reaction, completely defeated, making it clear that it no longer posed any threat at that moment. The protagonist had achieved yet another feat, proving once again his strength and ability to overcome seemingly impossible challenges. His enemy had probably never expected that he would use illusions and hide nearby, and even less that he would track its attack and strike at the perfect moment. Now he had defeated an intermediate boss and gained the Shadow Steps ability. He told himself that he would make better use of this ability than the fallen enemy. His level had also increased, reaching 33 and completing the first stage smoothly. Returning to the two characters conversing while seated in the room. Both were engaged in a discussion, each defending their own opinion. One of them started to get irritated. The blonde man claimed that the world revolved around him, because he was goodness, justice, and the way. Meanwhile, Shin Kangyu found himself separated in the middle of the forest. As if in suggestion, the main boss appeared before him. What was strange was that the events were not happening exactly as described in the novel. The man in the black suit began to notice and understand who the true protagonist of this mysterious story was. The man in the white suit with light-colored hair confidently stated that he was the true main character of the plot. Shin Kangyu was already mentally and physically preparing for his next fight, which would be the most challenging yet. This time, he would face a version of himself that had become the main and most powerful boss. His weapon was fully prepared for battle, ready to be used against the toughest enemy of all. He started with a short-distance leap to get closer to the enemy. He attempted to strike but failed as the enemy dodged swiftly. His steps were heavy as they hit the ground, combing through the environment as he advanced with determination toward the inevitable combat. He attempted another strike with his sword, searching for an opening in his opponent to end the fight quickly. The weapons clashed with precision, producing sparks and an intense metallic sound that echoed across the battlefield. He realized that this would be a close-quarters battle, requiring both physical skill and strategy to overcome his skilled opponent. If he used illusionary magic immediately, he could be easily tracked, a fact that would compromise his position, making him lose his initial advantage. And since both of them had the vision-capturing ability, they knew each other's weaknesses. Perhaps if the short-distance leap was combined with the abduction ability, it would be harder to dodge. The best option was to use abilities that required physical contact. He realized that a difficult battle lay ahead. The transversal teleportation was frequently used, and he was prepared, dagger in hand, ready to strike with precision and determination against the enemy in front of him. He began advancing using his special ability, the Bloody Stab, aiming to break through the enemy's defenses with brute force. But the opponent skillfully dodged, using a protective barrier that blocked the attacks and frustrated his attempts at direct advancement. The defensive and offensive movements used by the opponent were excellent, demonstrating great skill and experience in intense battles. He wanted to see exactly how long the enemy could endure before succumbing to the pressure of his continuous attacks, until suddenly the enemy multiplied into several clones, making the battle even more challenging and unpredictable. He became completely lost as he faced the Shadow Steps ability, which confused his senses in the middle of battle. He couldn't believe what was happening as the enemy seemed to be in multiple places at once, deceiving him. He ran to attack him, dagger in hand, determined to land a decisive blow and end the fight. With all his strength, he struck him on the first try, believing he had finally managed to defeat the skilled opponent. He split the enemy in two, but the latter used the swap ability as a defense, escaping the fatal blow. He felt a sharp pain within himself. The sword was already preparing for a new attack. It was the Bloody Stab ability, but the protective shield was there to defend him. However, cracks began to appear due to the extreme force used. Soon that protective barrier broke, exposing the man. With all this fury, the other immediately began striking him. He started running desperately from that place, trying to escape. Once again, the full Bloody Stab ability was used. Several punctures hit their final target. Noticing something coming from behind, it was the short-distance leap. But the man quickly launched the protective barrier again to defend himself. The shadows attacked him constantly, destroying his protection. With wide eyes, the attack continued. Fleeing from everything and everyone, he only tried to hide. He was terrified of the strength with which he was fighting. He tried another spell. He struck the shadow, but it dodged everything. He no longer knew how to defend himself or what to do to win that fight. Another shield began to form. He tried at all costs to protect himself from the shadows, while someone shouted at him to keep trying. They moved closer for a hand-to-hand battle. The swap ability was used again and quite frequently. He didn't know which spell to use, so he kept using his protective barrier, but soon broke under so many attacks. He had reached his limit and was desperate. He no longer had mana to keep using his abilities. He had not been able to replicate the hypersensitivity to mana in the same way. With the bloody stab, defeat was certain. He was already badly wounded from so many attacks. He could no longer react. He felt immense pain all over his body. With a short distance leap, he tried to retreat, but the enemy called him back to the fight. He was not satisfied, he wanted more. Thus, he made his final move with Bloodburn. It was the end of the line for him. Lying on the ground, he no longer had any chances. Shin Kang-hu realized that his hypersensitivity to mana was incredibly useful and had improved his ability. He was already aiming to reach the hidden dungeon, keeping that in mind as he carefully planned his next steps. He decided to choose from the abilities listed in the book, and after analyzing them all, he finally selected the most powerful one available. Now at the maximum level, he believed that nothing could defeat him, as he had achieved absolute power. He entertained his first ultimate ability, something that represented the peak of his strength and set him apart from other fighters. He was extremely pleased with his journey so far, recalling the challenges he had overcome and the victories he had achieved. He was a true champion, a victor who had conquered all adversities and become a living legend. With that, he blocked one of Jiang Shuwan's chances of obtaining an ultimate ability. However, he had never thought he would obtain a red crystal and a skill book. Red crystals were rare ingredients used to upgrade items or abilities. He said he would have been jealous if Jiang Shuwan had gotten them and decided to keep the items. First, he would use the assassin's skill book, which contained advanced techniques and essential secrets for deadly combat. He quickly flipped through the entire book, absorbing its contents with focus, determined to apply what he had learned in future battles. He had learned everything he knew from the book and would see its practical effects in the upcoming challenging fights. Thus, he decided to move forward with his journey, ready to deal with the threat posed by Hu Jumtae. The next day, near Pyeongtaek Station, Li Yeren stated that she had never seen anything like that outside of the dungeon before. He nodded, silently agreeing with the woman's words, who seemed to have some important questions for him, who already had some interesting questions to ask. Pointing to the land, she questioned why he had deposited 100 million won into her account. He explained that he knew Soie was after him, so if his information had leaked, she would have appeared in Yangpyeong immediately. Apparently, she was looking for him by burning hunters who did not have relevant information. The woman says that protecting the information of her commissioners is obvious, and he highlights another detail. He mentions capturing Hu Jumtae while the woman stares at him intently. That was the reason he did not reveal his true identity to her. Disbelieving what she had just heard, Li Yeren could not understand how he had captured the fugitive without leaving any trace. She deeply believed in that boy's potential as he continued to surprise everyone with his incredible skills. Curious, she asked how he would like to be called from now on, respecting his personal decision. After all, she already knew his real name due to an unexpected accident. He stated that for security reasons, she should continue calling him by his pseudonym. Making a joke, she replied that with him she agreed with Sunkyu, and they returned to discussing commissions. At a bus stop, the commissioner herself would be guiding people today and said she wanted to see their skills. Her name was Yoon Saemin, and she was delighted to meet Sunkyu. The protagonist returned the greeting with a friendly smile, saying it was a pleasure. They were standing in front of a security bus, personally protected by fully armed hunters with magic bullets. Even though operating such a service was expensive, people's safety was guaranteed. The hero boarded the bus and decided to sleep a little until he reached his destination in Ulsan. People inside the bus were talking about topics like hunting and plans. Shin Kang-yu awoke from his deep sleep upon hearing the loud and incessant conversation of the other passengers on the bus. He was very irritated, as he just wanted to rest a bit during the long and exhausting journey he was on. Suddenly, his sword began glowing incessantly, drawing attention. He saw the reflection of a guard positioned beside him but remained calm, showing no reaction. With a suspicious look, the guard observed attentively, unaware of any threat coming from Shin Kang-hu. The officer began walking slowly down the aisle of the bus, analyzing each passenger with a careful and watchful gaze. He scrutinized every person on the bus, looking for any suspicious behavior, but found nothing that stood out. He had a gun pointed at the protagonist's head while he sat calmly in his seat. A gunshot was heard inside the packed bus, but even the attacker himself did not understand the situation. The man was no longer sitting where the shot had been fired. He had vanished. Using transversal teleportation, Shin Kang-hu was quick enough to attack the guard from behind. With his sword in hand, he wounded him severely, dealing 33% more damage to the enemy than before. He was very pleased with his new ability, which was extremely powerful and useful in intense combat situations. Shocked by what had just happened, all the passengers watched the man lying motionless on the floor of the vehicle. The other officer, already prepared for battle, drew his weapon and positioned himself to fight immediately. Shin Kangoo realized he would have to fight multiple opponents at once, but he showed no fear. Suddenly, a red beam of light appeared in the middle of the scene, illuminating everything and drawing everyone's attention. Noting that by listening to classical music, the recovery speed increased fivefold. Yoon Sang-min was already prepared to defend her friend and fight alongside him, but he did not want help, thinking that the two of them might get in each other's way in the middle of combat. With her bright green eyes, she agreed with the idea because she only wanted to observe his abilities. The man began positioning himself for the fight. There were many people against him, but the hero would prove to be more cunning and intelligent. He possessed numerous abilities to use, such as vision capture and surface chaos. Soon he used multiple shadows to confuse his enemies and attack them quickly. The police officer, now furious, no longer wanted to play these games. But nothing he did was enough to capture or injure Shin Kangoo. Even while fighting multiple enemies at once, Shin Kangoo struck the guard, who screamed in intense pain. He used his swap ability at just the right moment, ensuring he was not hit by the bullets fired at him. Despite being severely wounded, the guard kept attacking furiously, determined to avenge his fallen comrade. Shin Kangoo was incredibly powerful and skilled, facing any opponent with confidence, with nothing and no one able to stop him. He grabbed his opponents with force, using his technique to injure them and secure his advantage in each fight. With his dagger in hand, Shin Kangoo gave his all to defend himself, showing his determination to survive. He felt no fear whatsoever, facing any enemy with courage, even in situations of extreme danger. Suddenly, another man started shooting frantically, trying to hit him, but he kept dodging skillfully. The swap ability was indeed incredibly useful in this battle. He continued dodging all the bullets fired at him with incredible skill, remaining unharmed during the confrontation. Suddenly, he began sprinting towards the person threatening him with a gun, ready to attack. With a short distance leap, he quickly reached the man, positioning himself to deliver a precise strike. Using another powerful ability, acceleration, he increased his speed, making it impossible to be hit. Everyone was impressed, but it still wasn't enough. Shin Kangoo laughed at the foolishness of the fighters who insisted on continuing the battle, even though they were bound to lose. Now he wanted to end everything quickly. He activated his maximum level, his ultimate. He wanted everything to end as fast as possible because those people had no idea of his power. They were risking everything by facing him and would inevitably learn a hard lesson they would never forget. The enemies began receiving harsh and intense blows across their bodies, unable to defend against any attack. The blood burn ability was devastating, draining the adversary's energy and leaving them completely vulnerable. At that moment, the men no longer had the strength to keep fighting, succumbing to his overwhelming power. All that remained were their lifeless bodies scattered across the vehicle's floor, a testament to the battle. One by one, the enemies collapsed on the floor of the vehicle, with no chance of surviving the brutal confrontation. Only one man remained standing, trying to resist, but he was visibly exhausted and too weak to continue. Two girls, hiding behind the seats, watched the entire fight unfold before their eyes. The man listening to music began coughing up blood, showing the impact of the blows he had taken earlier. Shin Kangoo, with a sarcastic tone, asked the man if he was enjoying the sound of the music he was listening to. The man, determined to keep fighting, prepared for an attack, raising his weapon with the intention of firing. With a devastating smile on his face, the passenger did not hesitate and started shooting, desperately trying to hit Shin Kangoo. At that moment, Yoon Sang-min stepped forward, stomping down with full force on the man's foot. The gesture was simple but effective because it sent him directly toward the enemy, who was waiting with his sharp sword. With a precise and lethal strike, the man fell with no chance to defend himself, ending his last moments of life. These were his final moments, and there was nothing that could be done to save him from that situation. The protagonist triumphed in yet another battle that had seemed impossible, demonstrating his unmatched strength and skill against his enemies. Next to the driver, the two girls watched in silence, eagerly waiting for the conclusion of the battle they had just witnessed. Yoon Sang-min observed all the abilities the protagonist used with great attention. With a thumbs up and visibly amazed, she informed him that he had passed. After killing his target, he confiscated his contract with the father of music and acquired an increased recovery speed. He commented to himself that he should start listening to classical music when resting now. He laughed to himself while rummaging through the pockets of the lifeless man. He found a resistance item proportional to his level, a new glove. He also discovered a new special pair of shoes that would grant him a high agility stat, something extremely valuable. All the remaining items he had would be sold immediately, without hesitation, to finance his future acquisitions. Intrigued by the situation, the girl directly asked if he wouldn't give her any praise for her help. Since she had provided crucial assistance during the fight, she expected some recognition, but he seemed completely indifferent to it. Smiling, she said she would like to officially commission him as the captain of the Talwa River. The organizations in Ulsan were a side story in the novel, and the Talwa River was an example. As she unwrapped a lollipop, she mentioned that the commission's payment would be 2.5 billion won. She declared him the sovereign of Ulsa and requested that he bring the left arm of Gong Tu Despite the proposal, the man still insisted on adding a condition that was entirely unexpected and unconventional. He wanted to ensure that the Tawa River would have full control over Ulsan, something that surprised everyone present. And instead, he demanded the unique opportunity to meet in person with the feared leader of the mysterious abyss. Shocked by the absurd request, the girl nearly choked on her lollipop, unable to believe what she had just heard. The Abyss, after all, was known as one of the most powerful and feared forces within the Jungwa Guild at present, and they were the military organization with the highest level of cohesion and the strongest organizational power, even as they were collapsing due to internal conflicts. To defeat the Jungwa Guild, Shin Kang-hu would have to interact with them soon, as he needed a force equal to theirs. The girl reflected on the request made by the man. The Tawa River was one of the Abyss's satellite organizations, making it an opportunity to get closer. Laughing, she found the condition quite interesting and suggested they discuss the details after seeing his results. Walking side by side down the street, Shin Kang-gu and Yoon Saemin continued. Wherever they passed, strange murmurs began to arise as people gathered around. She introduced him to the dungeon that Gong Tu frequented, a very strange and complex place, full of power. Judging by the atmosphere of the location, he concluded that they were not there to invade the dungeon, but rather to capture Gong Tu. The girl asked if the warrior knew about fireworks. He looked at her seriously, thinking before responding. The term was used when several mercenaries worked together to capture a strong target. People were bound to die if this method was used, but in exchange for the sacrifice of others, the one who survived would achieve their goals. Shin Kang-gu was familiar with Gong Tu's constellation and battle habits, which he could use to his advantage. The girl informed him that he had many enemies, leading to around 100 commissions being placed on him at the same time. Gong Tu was the leader of the Scarlet Blood, and in Ulsan, just seeing his name made many people consider him a nuisance. He was a psychopath who cared for no one. He would kill everyone, which is why his nickname was the Butcher of Ulsan. That man was incredibly difficult to kill, due to his level 200 items. Someone suddenly screamed desperately, claiming to have spotted Gong Tu, drawing everyone's attention and causing a great commotion. He appeared imposing, surrounded by several armed guards, dressed in refined clothing that highlighted his authority and wealth. It was possible to see an elegant glove on his hand, adorned with a red diamond that shone intensely under the light. He did not want anyone in his way and ordered everyone to move aside. People whispered about the man's left hand, which bore the precious stone. The girl explained that when using magic, Gong Tu defended 99% of his left arm, which made it more valuable than his own life. Most of the mercenaries present in that place coveted that bounty and were just waiting for the right opportunity. She concluded by saying that the moment he left the dungeon would be the beginning of the show. Shin Kang turned his back on the girl after she revealed all that valuable information. Finding his sudden change in behavior strange, she questioned whether he would not stay by her side, as all the people from the river were waiting nearby. But the man disagreed, saying that she should go ahead because there was a place he needed to visit. Inside an art shop, visitors spread out, examining each item in detail. At the counter, Shin Kang-gu asked about the price of an item, which cost 500 million won. He decided to sell absolutely everything he owned without hesitation to purchase that highly desired item. He only wanted to keep whatever remained after the purchase, even if it was just the bare minimum to survive. That ring guaranteed a pain reduction effect and a high resistance status. He understood that it would be extremely difficult to find a fourth-rank composition like this anywhere else. Carefully placing the item hidden in his pocket, he left the shop without drawing anyone's attention. He was searching for an item that would be truly useful for his journey and future goals. But what he really sought seemed to be nowhere to be found, as if it had completely disappeared. He remembered Gong Tu and reflected that the man had no constellation, but all of his subordinates did. He believed that the man had a habit of checking his items before proceeding with his entire plan to ensure nothing went wrong. He continued thinking about a strategy he could use. He noticed that a short-haired woman had been following him the entire time. The Holy Archer's ability was revealed, increasing the precision of magic and bow attacks fivefold. Shin Kang-gu identified with this new item. He spotted the woman and realized that it was Gong Tu in disguise. Everyone was inside the hunter's shop. With enigmatic eyes and silent steps, the mysterious figure left the store without drawing attention, disappearing into the crowd. Curious and suspicious, he began following the person, trying to discover more about their true identity and hidden intentions. The disguise was incredibly well crafted, so perfect that it would have been impossible to recognize him without a keen and detailed eye. If it weren't for the constellation subtly glowing, the warrior would never have imagined that this mysterious figure was actually him. He noticed that everyone there was skilled constellation users and that Gong Tu had several guards surrounding him. Gong Tu climbed into a vehicle that was already departing. If he could, a man would simply do his job and continue his day normally. But as soon as he finished thinking, he was already making a short-distance leap. He moved across the rooftops of buildings, leaving no traces so that no one would suspect him. That's why he continued moving forward on foot. He wanted to uncover the true intentions of the enemy. The sun slowly set on the horizon, marking the end of the day as the sky took on orange and pink hues. Gong Tu was extremely excited about the success of his disguise, which had worked perfectly as he had planned. He could hardly wait to see the frustrated and surprised expressions of the mercenaries who had been completely fooled. A new mysterious member was joining the group, immediately recognized and respected by all as the new leader. But the disguised man did not like what he heard and narrowed his eyes. He cast one of his powers on one of the henchmen, and he did not understand what was happening when he suddenly found himself alone in the area. He did not know how to react to everything that was happening around him. He began to suspect that his intuition was wrong. Shin Kang-yu understood why he had survived the fireworks in the novel. Frightened, the men asked what was wrong. By this point, the protagonist already knew his next move and had to pursue him. As night fell, everyone eagerly awaited Gong Tu. Sung-kyu was not at the designated location and was already running late. A man in the form of a leader was worried about the stranger, suspecting that he might be a spy. He mentioned that the White Corporation had also been eliminated in a similar way some time ago, with its members hunted down and executed. He suggested asking the Abyss for an answer. The girl warned him not to worry about anything. The leader of the Blue Eyes, Lee Yeren, gained confidence by supplying scenarios for various clients without choosing a specific group. And having the Blue Eyes recommend someone meant they had that level of skill. Thus, the girl concluded that it was worth waiting a little longer for the man. She received a message on her phone. She was surprised to see that it was an encrypted message. She began reading it and was shocked by the information she received. She ordered the man to gather everyone for an urgent announcement. She informed them that they were leaving that place. Everyone in the dungeon observed the scene. Footsteps could be heard on the street as someone approached. It was Gong Tu and his men. A boy caught everyone's attention by loudly announcing that the man had finally left his hiding place. People quickly prepared for what was coming, gathering their courage and determination in the face of the imminent situation. With makeshift weapons and attack instruments, they began advancing toward the man, ready to confront him. The guards, loyal and determined, did not hesitate for a second before protecting their leader against any threat. Furious and thirsty for revenge, the combatants desired his death, driven by an intense and uncontrollable hatred. A defense bat covered in rusty nails was raised into the air, ready to be used as a lethal weapon. The guards continued protecting their leader at all costs, forming an impenetrable barrier against the attacks. The battle began right there. People attacked without thinking twice. Ruthlessly, the guards wiped out anyone who invaded their path. They fought harder and harder to defend their master. The crowd shouted for him to taste the fireworks. Someone was grabbed from behind with just one hand. A reckless boy used another person as a shield, but he didn't care, he just wanted to survive. A red beam of light represented immense power, and an explosion struck everyone in the midst of the chaos. A man caught fire right then and there, and Gong Tu appeared in his disguise, showing that he truly wanted fireworks. No one understood anything anymore, thinking he had appeared out of nowhere. Desperate screams and more cries of pain and panic echoed everywhere, heard by everyone around. Fast strikes, precise kicks, and violent blows were used as defense against the never-ending attacks. The guards were brutally destroying the hunters, demonstrating their superior strength and leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. They sarcastically asked if the hunters wanted to enjoy some special fireworks, and surprisingly, that had been their plan from the beginning, something no one had foreseen or even imagined. The unleashed power hit everyone nearby, especially those who were already severely wounded. The explosion turned into something deafening and colossal, shaking everything around with its devastating force. Falling to the ground, the boy began to burn in the intense fire that spread rapidly. No one could understand where that sudden explosion had come from, catching everyone completely off guard and terrified. It was Gong Tu, firing blindly from afar. But Shin Kang-yu had already been watching him, realizing that the actions of a mage with the Holy Archer constellation were obvious. He created explosions and killed many people at once. With the blessing of the Holy Archer, magic and bow attacks would increase fivefold. He had to explode everything he could touch. He loved the view he was witnessing, without getting hurt. When he was about to cast again, it was time for the attack. Shin Kang-yu was ready to take down Gong Tu. He used his powers to grip his target firmly, ensuring that he could not escape even with his intense resistance. The men beside him watched the situation in confusion, not understanding what was happening to their leader at that moment. The leader, completely lost and disoriented, could not recognize who was attacking him, increasing his vulnerability. With a determined gaze and swift movements, Shin Kang-yu instantly approached, prepared for any challenge. Shin Kang-yu advanced with his sword in one hand, aiming for a direct strike at Gong Tu. Sweating coldly, Gong Tu dodged the frenzied attack, moving quickly to avoid Kang-yu's lethal strike. Kang-yu's dagger surged toward Taesu's heart, but he used short-distance teleportation as a defensive measure. The protagonist realized that his enemy could not go far, limiting himself to small jumps to escape. Thinking quickly, Kang-yu concluded that the most effective place to attack would be directly behind his opponent, from the back. With a precise leap, he appeared behind Taesu, preparing a surprise attack with his special ability. The Bloody Stab ability was activated, granting Kang-yu a devastating attack that caught Taesu completely off guard. Screams echoed from all directions as Kang-yu's attack struck Taesu, who was unable to defend himself properly. Gong Tu had not expected such a furious assault. He no longer knew how to react. A massive explosion occurred above the building, spreading flames throughout the area and causing widespread destruction. The fire spread across the entire location. The destruction caused by the battle was significant and extremely dangerous, spreading chaos everywhere. Chunks of the ground began to crumble slowly as the fire rapidly consumed the walls. Those intense, uncontrollable flames were far stronger and more dangerous than the protagonist had initially imagined. Furious, Gong Tu spotted his enemy from a distance. His arm was injured due to the attack he had suffered. Upon seeing his enemy suffering, he decided that it was time to say goodbye. He was grateful for this and smiled as he spoke. It was the perfect moment to activate Blood Burn. Gong Tu had no way to escape or hide. His final hour had arrived. Screaming in agony, he could no longer endure the suffering. He cried amidst the fire and ashes, declaring that he would kill Shin Kangwoo. Consumed by overwhelming rage, he continued shouting that he would kill him. He realized that his opponent was no longer in the room. He wanted to cast a spell but could not find him. That was when he noticed something strange. His left arm had been severed from his body and lay on the ground. This was his worst nightmare becoming reality. Shin Kangwoo grabbed the mage's arm and held it tightly. He thought to himself that it was impossible for this to be happening before his very eyes. Uttering furious and hate-filled curses, he ran after his enemy despite being extremely weak and exhausted. The protagonist, far stronger and fearless, remained calm, demonstrating his superiority in every movement and confident expression. He continued threatening his opponent, shouting angrily that he would tear him to pieces, trying to intimidate him with desperate words. He searched for him everywhere, demanding that he come out of hiding. He ran while holding his open wound. Soon, he noticed that some people were approaching. He could sense their presence, and others realized he was trying to hide. He looked intently at someone standing in front of him. That person had wiped out all of his henchmen in one go mercilessly. More people were approaching now that the mage had lost much of his power. The girl appeared, pleased to see Gong Tu's condition. She had discovered that the Gong Tu who entered the dungeon was merely a decoy, and his plan had been to surround the mercenaries and attack them. According to the messages, the real one was hiding from afar, supporting his allies once they exited the portal. Thus, everyone was to hide and move to the building in sequence. By following those instructions, the girl would find Gong Tu without his left arm, utterly enraged. Shin Kangwoo had known everything and had provided the hints. The girl spun her long sword with mastery, eliminating all enemies around her, leaving a trail of destruction. The men were thrown into the air and crashed to the ground, their bodies covered in wounds caused by her brutal strength. A bright blue beam of light shone intensely, reflecting the extraordinary ability she displayed in every movement. Gong Tu, completely defeated, had no hope left of leaving that place alive or escaping his dreaded fate. Outside, the battle raged on fiercely, with screams and the sounds of weapons echoing through the chaotic environment. The decoy, confused and disoriented, could not understand the sudden abandonment amid that devastating scene, and he wondered why the boss had stopped supporting them. The attacks continued, and the people had no idea that he was just a decoy. They wanted to finish him off once and for all. As he fell to the ground, the men realized they had been deceived by the mage. They searched for the real man, who was nowhere to be found. The others appeared quickly, engaging in battle against the henchmen, fighting with determination and impressive skills. The girl watched in fascination, completely captivated by this world filled with action, mysteries, and dangers surrounding her. With her sword in hand, she walked confidently through every corner, exploring every detail and facing any threat. Irritated, the men finally realized they had lost this fight, unable to overcome their skilled opponents. But they still had enough strength to resist even after facing so many difficulties. The guards, completely unprepared, were beaten by the enraged people who fought bravely to end the imposed oppression. Crowds ran desperately, determined to put an end to them, driven by an uncontrollable desire for justice and freedom. In the end, the scene was devastating, with many casualties and countless injured scattered all over the battlefield. The girl, distracted for a moment, received a new message and immediately looked to check its contents. People asked her how she knew the exact location of Gong Tu. The message reminded her not to forget the promise she made to Shin Kangwoo. He wanted to meet with the leader of the Abyss. She replied, letting him know that she would be busy for a while dealing with the remaining small fry, and once things calmed down, she would fulfill her promise. She felt sad upon realizing that her friend had left without saying goodbye. In another setting, Sung-kyu was being received in an office. Holding the arm, Lee Yerin was impressed with the work he had done. The warrior asked what the woman thought Chae-soo was doing. The response was that the woman was in Jeonju and that some false information had been leaked. Smiling gently, she continued talking to him, maintaining a light and friendly tone throughout the casual conversation. Curious, she asked if he had heard the latest news circulating everywhere. Now, Shin Kangwoo had become a well-known celebrity, attracting attention and admiration from people everywhere. A video of him had gone viral on the internet. He thought that things were slowly diverging from the novel. Someone like Gong Tu wouldn't affect much, but he needed to be careful when dealing with anything related to the protagonist, Jang Shuwan. The woman asked if he would continue working with Blue Eyes in the future and hoped for a positive response. The man confirmed as long as there were no better options. She understood that he really knew how to play the game. Now with the two discussing the next commission, Li Yering declared that the name of the next target was Joe Gubin, and she added that he was a serial killer who targeted minors. His last confirmed location was at Ground Zero. The warrior believed that this information would be useful for the hunt. However, he knew that preparation would be necessary before setting out. Meanwhile, Shin Kangmu's video was being played on television. Jiang Shuwan watched the news, finding everything very interesting and impressive. He made a call stating that he was from the Junghwa Guild's information strategy team. He wanted to learn more about the Gong Tu incident and was looking for the hunter who had cut off his left arm. Tall buildings could be seen at the World Guild headquarters. A man stated that he did not know the one sitting in front of him. Han Sung-yuk was the general manager of the dungeon management team. Jiang Shuwan wanted the Baltman dungeon license for 1 billion. Faced with the request, the manager was left speechless. Using shadow steps, he advanced close to the door. He explained that the Baltman dungeon had low cost and high efficiency. The hero thought about everything he could gain from that dungeon. He was battling multiple shadows. Using all his knowledge and advanced combat tactics, the debris could be seen scattered along all the walls. His level had risen once again, now reaching 37. He decided to allocate all his stats into resistance again. The fire began making the entire environment hotter, and it kept increasing more and more. The main boss of Baltman was a large and ferocious wolf. It had already warned that if one valued their life, they should turn back and go home. For Shin Kangmu, it was just an insignificant creature standing before him. With a short distance leap, he landed atop a tower. The boss could not comprehend how the boy had no fear of anything. It decided that it would burn him completely, and began launching its spells at him. The lava was chasing after him, but he used his acceleration ability to escape. His gaze was threatening. He used shadow steps to keep evading. The wolf could already smell the approaching meal. He was ready for the battle that would follow. He unleashed his flame on the man running toward him. Everything began to be completely incinerated with immense force. The chief increased his spell more and more. He spewed fire in all directions. He had burned the man completely and afterward would devour him whole, exactly as Shin Kangmu had planned. Everything happened exactly as the warrior expected, with each detail unfolding according to his plan. Now a special and unique meal would be offered to him as a reward for his victory and impeccable strategy. After capturing Alisha, the warrior had saved something for this moment. Upon obtaining his skill book, he learned about the ability to scorch combined with acceleration. The warrior awaited the next steps, and he began to use many shadow steps. The wolf, attentive to every movement around him, watched everything carefully, waiting for the right moment to act. Still hungry, he saw his food slowly approaching, smelling it and anticipating the taste of his prey. He began to prepare his devastating attack, a powerful strike that would burn everything, leaving only destruction in its wake. As he unleashed his alarming and destructive fire, the wolf displayed all his strength, spreading intense flames everywhere. The warrior realized it was the right time. He threw his book toward the chief. The throw was faster than the very shadows that ran frantically. He thought it would not be possible to simply serve food to him like this again. He began to incinerate everything around him, determined to end the chief, destroying any obstacle in his path. With a short distance leap, he quickly moved away from the imminent danger, avoiding the flames that surrounded him intensely. The fire continued to spread through the space, consuming everything in its path and turning the environment into pure chaos. The warrior, observing the destruction caused, smiled with satisfaction, proud of his new feat and the strength he demonstrated. Now, with everything consumed by the flames, it was too late to go back or undo what had been done. The wolf noticed a different taste in that food, but he longed to know the taste of the man who stared at him. He began to feel unwell, and everything happened with strange swiftness. It was the great beheading that appeared in the book. The chief noticed his body was strange and did not understand what was happening. A red alert appeared before him. He could not use his abilities at that moment as he was completely disarmed. Various warnings began to appear incessantly, revealing that Shin Kangmu had strategically and precisely planned something against the chief. Gradually, he started to realize what was truly happening, connecting the events and understanding the real origin of the problem. The blame for everything fell upon the warrior, who had orchestrated the situation and manipulated events to achieve his goal. With a confident smile, the warrior affirmed that this was merely a demonstration of his unique and powerful ability. The chief was already too worried, not knowing how to react. An intense rain of fire spread across the place. Shin Kangmu watched the change in the sky's landscape. A great explosion sent sparks flying in all directions. The wolf commented that the man was finally in the state he should be. That explosion hit the spot where he stood, but when the smoke dissipated, the man was no longer there. He had escaped using his swap ability. Abduction was another ability the warrior was using. The wolf began to feel extremely afraid. Shin Kangmu warned that he would kill him slowly. The wolf could no longer bear to hear the words of that arrogant man. He wanted to burn him to ashes and end him. He was already tired of this endless pursuit. The warrior used the protective barrier so that the people could not capture him. He knew that was more than necessary, more than enough. And with a bloody stab, he would be able to defeat him with his strikes. The wolf howled incessantly as he was struck. With his sword by his side, the man delivered multiple attacks. The two fought against each other, fire against protection. The warrior realized that the barrier had lasted as long as he had expected. Now he distanced himself from the creature using the short-distance leap. The beast would not allow him to escape. Hearing his pleas, he stopped where he was. He replied calmly that he was not running from anything or anyone, and he would defeat him using the blood-burning ability. Finally, the chief was being defeated. Dead, he fell to the ground without any reaction. Shin Kangyu reached level 39 and observed the message with satisfaction. The Great Beheading was what he wanted. According to the book, even if the class of the wielder was different, there was no penalty in learning abilities. With this, it was possible to make a monster learn the ability and then take the ability for oneself. In other words, he would use someone to receive the ability and then steal it. He concluded that it was time to go to Ground Zero. From the view of Seoul Station, the man had no choice but to go to Seoul to move around. He spotted a giant screen with a picture of Jang Shuan smiling. The master of the Junghwa Guild and the master of the Fortune Guild shook hands, sealing agreement. The Fortune Guild was quite famous in America and was now moving globally. However, that was a coordinated movement by the 3 stars. The 13 stars were 13 hunters, praised as heroes in the original novel, including Jang Shuan and his friends. But in reality, they were the main investigators who would bring this world to ruin. The scariest part of this was that they had an informant network all over the world, manipulating public opinion as they pleased. As soon as they started moving as one, people would revere them as great believers. The hero found himself in that crowded place due to karma for writing such a novel. A woman approached him, saying that Seoul was very boring. He turned around when she called him. She continued saying that the prices were mercenary and that only those with advantages kept benefiting. Her eyes were blood red and her hair was dark. The man did not understand why such a beautiful woman was striking up a conversation with him, until he noticed something different about her. Suddenly, the two were sitting at a table, using his phone and she working on a computer. She paused for a second to observe the warrior. Now he understood everything. The woman had a mental ability. In a black and white scene, some thugs watched a woman who was on the ground. A girl sat in her chair in front of 2 enormous screens. A man observed his wounded companion, and the scene shifted to Shin Kangyu. She reflected that to be able to nullify her mental cleansing, his level must have been higher than hers. The man immediately warned her to stop with those futile attempts. He did not like nosy and prying people. Looking at the woman's constellation, the enchanted fox, he was sure of one thing. She was one of Yu Chumwa's 13 stars. Soon he started finding all of this quite interesting. There was nothing he could do about it, but there was a method to defend against mental abilities. That type of mental ability made the victim lower their mental barrier willingly by thinking of good memories. So if one thought of painful memories, they could create a temporary barrier. The woman became very interested in the boy who managed to block her abilities. She handed him a business card that was only given to those who had blocked her ability at least once. If you wanted better support, you could seek her out. It was a card from the Shinto Guild, one of the best in China. The young man said he would keep the card. Hoping they would meet again, the woman then left. However, to face the 3 stars, he knew he would need allies. Now he was in a completely arid and dry place, where the intense heat made the environment almost unbearable. His footsteps, light and silent, did not even leave marks on the ground, disappearing quickly in the dust that covered everything. Finally, after a long journey, he found himself at Ground Zero, the starting point for something grand. Carefully analyzing the map, he wondered whether he should go after the treasure first or deal with the commission beforehand. He heard some noises coming from a little further away. A completely black figure began to appear, foreshadowing a shadow. A cloud of blue spells appeared in the environment. It was congenital mana hypersensitivity, which, despite being incredible, could be fatal to his body. This would cause a massive status loss, meaning instant death in the middle of a battle. He knew he had to learn to control it, as his next battles would be even fiercer. He needed to obtain some mad silasium, another type of plant. Shin Kangyu had previously used it to achieve a much more remarkable effect than standard silasium. After consumption, one would be free from mana hypersensitivity for 30 minutes. Although it had some rather complicated side effects, it was truly useful in battle. The problem was that this plant did not grow in Ground Zero and was also highly protected by a high-level beast. He knew there were 6 areas where this plant was predominant and observed the markings on the map. The best thing to do now would be to reach at least level 40, so he could acquire a new ability. Now the warrior was fighting what appeared to be a carnivorous plant. He had defeated that common monster with a single blow. He was much calmer after another victory. But more monsters appeared, showing that Ground Zero was literally a wild region. In that dangerous place, various mutant monsters were scattered everywhere, making the environment full of constant threats. The place was filled with unpredictable variables, with every movement requiring attention and strategy to avoid the dangers that arose. He used his long-distance leap, and he further added that, above all that had already been mentioned, a single moment of carelessness could lead to death. That was when he found a man leaning against a rock, but his body was not decomposing. That body was still very clean, which was strange. He began using mana tracking to understand more about what happened. Just as he had imagined, there was no way mana could come from a corpse. He noticed that the man was holding a weapon in his hands, and he believed it was a trap set by the Dark Guild, which lured hunters using an item that revealed their actual location. He realized that the plan was to use bait to catch prey. Apparently, he saw something about the corpse in front of him. It was a quiet and calm boy who was constantly mocked by his classmates, who chased and played pranks on the boy. The vision was not very clear, but it was possible to understand. Shin Kang turned his back and left the place, leaving the body where he had last seen it. That was when he spotted at the very top of the peak the plant he had been searching for. He was on a steep and treacherous cliff, which made everything even more difficult and dangerous for him. Determined to finish this quickly, he needed to find an effective way to reach the desired item. With a powerful thrust, he planted his feet firmly on the ground, preparing to make a risky leap. He jumped with all his strength toward the cliff, desperately trying to reach that rare and essential plant. The dry trees stood still, with no wind at all, when suddenly, a monster awoke from its slumber. He grabbed that plant with all his strength and did not let go. He managed to pull it out from where it grew, but he still had to be careful not to fall off that cliff and end up like the corpse. The character hung from the mountain, holding his entire weight with just one hand. Now he could see the monster he had mentioned earlier. It was the mad-former with its fluorescent green eyes. The creature was eager to grab Shin Kang. It launched its branches in his direction. The man began pushing against the tree trunk so that he could jump and escape from that place. He made a short-distance leap, saying it was a pleasure to meet the famous monster. Irritated, the mad-former tried to strike him with its branches as the boy fled, but he was incredibly fast, skillfully dodging every attack the monster attempted against him. With universal teleportation, he constantly confused the monster, moving unpredictably and avoiding being hit by any attack. He decided to use one of his special abilities, imbuing his sword with the fire element to increase its destructive power. With lethal precision, he plunged his flaming sword into the creature's back, delivering a devastating and decisive blow. The fire started to spread, and the damage was increased by 33% with this attack mode. The man watched everything attentively. As the creature was now completely engulfed in flames and destroyed, he calmly observed the outcome of his brutal victory. Fallen hard to the ground, the defeated creature lay motionless while he remained atop the cliff, analyzing the scene. Another difficult task was completed, and now he could finally sheath his dagger and rest for a moment. Yet another common monster had been defeated by him, once again proving his strength and skill in combat against any threat. Finally, after so much effort and intense battles, he had reached the long-awaited level 40, attaining a new milestone. Additionally, he gained the quick dodge ability and was surprised by the system. Thus, after acquiring his new ability, he had to greet the unwanted guest. Climbing the trees, he made a short-distance leap to reach the one who was pursuing him. He was already on one of the branches when the black smoke continued to swirl. He wanted to understand why he was being followed by that mysterious person who seemed determined to accompany him. The unwanted guest, confused and speechless, did not know how to respond to the questions asked by the hero at that moment. It was a curious girl, trying to understand at what moment the hero had noticed that she had been following him so discreetly. He could not fully grasp the image he was seeing, feeling intrigued by the unexpected presence. The woman standing right in front of him seemed to be hiding something important, making him even more suspicious. She was the same girl from the school images he had seen not long ago. Her name was Jung Yuri. She had a very wealthy businessman father and was the model of a hardworking freshman student. Although she was famous for being close to Choi Won-hyun, who was the vice president of the school, he abandoned her after her father's business failed and they fell into poverty. The character concluded his train of thought by saying that, in the novel, she was an opponent who harbored resentment toward Won-hyun. The woman began to apologize for the inconvenience of having followed him. Smiling, she said he was really impressive for reaching ground zero and being able to handle the shadow guides. And she recalled that he had also defeated the mad farmer. The man held his dagger in his hands and made an attacking gesture toward the woman. Frightened and unsure of what to do, she could only protect herself, trying to avoid any threat that might arise. She began to fear for her life, believing she was in great danger with no chance of escaping that situation. However, he had no intention of attacking her, as his true objective was to eliminate the monster behind her. It was just a giant and dangerous insect, and all he wanted was to protect her from any harm or threat. The girl thanked him for his kind and concerned gesture. Even so, he ordered her to stop following him, and the man silently descended from the top of the tree, moving swiftly as he continued on his path. He moved forward without hesitation, leaving behind everything that had happened, carrying a feeling of sadness. Sad that they no longer had time together, the girl realized that he had truly left without saying a word. The warrior, pausing for a moment, observed his dagger embedded in the fallen monster on the ground. He pulled his weapon from the creature's body. He was already quite exhausted after that fight. He had passed through all 6 dangerous zones so far, facing countless challenges and surviving each one. He began to think that he should finally go after his commission, as he had already completed a large part of his mission. Something mysterious and imposing began to slowly emerge in the distance at the foot of the mountain, drawing his attention and awakening his curiosity. It was an angel-type monster, the majestic and menacing presence seemingly ready to initiate a deadly confrontation. Attentive to its movements, he began to walk. He hadn't known there was territory belonging to them in that area. He remembered the corpse he had seen earlier on the rocks. He reflected on what could have caused its death. Apparently, the doll attached to the body was not very dangerous. He thought that the truly dangerous one would be the bastard controlling that guy. The shadow guides were a mass of ghosts with silent techniques and dark coloration, making them difficult to see. Even if one detected their attack, they could not be killed using conventional means. Because of this, those dragged by them ended up completely losing their senses and going irreversibly and tragically insane. In the end, these desperate people ended up taking their own lives, unable to withstand the mental pressure that consumed them slowly. Committing suicide after being mentally consumed, they became victims of unbearable torment, with no strength left to fight against the darkness. The hero, however, would not fall so easily for that reason, as his mental strength was unshakable and extraordinary. With shadow steps, he approached the body, but something began to hover over the area. He prepared for another battle, his weapon always in hand, ready for anything. The fierce creature wanted to attack him at all costs, moving quickly to try to strike the hero. He began making good use of his movement ability, using it to evade their relentless attacks. Shin Kangyo, realizing the situation, commented that he urgently needed a spare weapon to deal with the enemy. The bird was struck hard, letting out a piercing cry that echoed through the environment, but it continued trying to attack. The bird's attacks did not stop, constantly targeting the character, who defended himself. He kept eating the food that generated strength, and he fled from the creatures that pursued him wherever he went. The shadow guides appeared. He couldn't believe they had shown up so suddenly. The man kept running, taking one step at a time. He made a great leap to the other side of the cliff. The guides arrived before him. They tried everything to attack him, but he dodged and used his acceleration ability. Without showing any fear, the man accelerated his run even more, determined to escape the dangerous situation quickly. As he ran, he noticed a massive monster beside him, whose imposing and terrifying presence made him tense. The monster was gigantic and horrifying, with an appearance that struck fear even in the bravest of warriors. Suddenly, the monster's hand began to reach for him, and he found himself lost, unsure of how to react properly. He decided to use his movement ability and went to the other side of the mountain. He caught the monster's attention, causing it to turn toward him. Irritated with such petulance, the guy begins his hunt again. The angels observed everything that was happening. They were curious about the latest events. The guides noticed that they were being watched. That was a very well thought out trap. The only things that could kill a guide were power or its opposite, which was the power of light. Those beings wanted to keep fighting until one of them died. Shin Kangyu only wanted to know about his newly acquired weapon. He had taken it from the corpse's hands. He also looked at his documents to find more information, but nothing helped. The warrior reflected that even if the man was dead, he could still take him back to his family. Extending one of his hands carefully, he closed the corpse's eyes, showing respect before silently withdrawing. He knew that he had to deal with his client's grudge first, prioritizing the resolution of that delicate matter. Kangyu says that he will resolve the client's problem first. He leaves, leaving the body and a trail of black smoke behind. Yuri, who was hidden there, just smiles. The name of his target was Joe, the assassin goblin who usually goes after minors. The woman tells the man that information would help. Looking at the envelope, he says that it was information different from the usual. With her head down, she comments that it was from the commissioner. The one who gathered the information for them was the father of one of the victims. Now, in North Korean territory, the man looks at his cell phone. He remembers the woman saying that commission was not just murdering to respect the commissioner's conditions. With that in mind, he puts away the cell phone. Then, using mana detection, he finds a body. He quickly grabs his sword. The man smiles as he puts on a glove and celebrates atop a body, saying that Ground Zero was the land of opportunities. When the system warns that he could level up by killing more people, he becomes even more excited. However, something catches his attention. Before he can react, he is attacked. He dons his armor and throws aside the sword that had injured him. Quickly, he uses his ice armor ability to protect himself. The assassin asks who the man was who simply pulled the sword back. Staring at him, Kangwoo says that he wouldn't tell. Seeing that, the man becomes even more irritated. Then he uses the wizard ability of Jiro to cover himself and forge a spear. Using all his power, the assassin threatens him. He says that if he didn't tell, he would force him to, and he throws the spear in his direction, which he dodges, causing it to hit a stone. He throws several spears, but the man continues dodging very quickly and gets closer. Shid notices that he was a mage. His level was something because of the constellation, and he had a magical resistance different from Jumtae's, so capturing his vision wouldn't work. But first, he needed to deal with his armor. After dodging all the attacks, the man approaches his opponent. Seeing him approach, the man begins to invoke another spell. Thus, the blood from the body begins to rise from the ground. The man was able to form blood spears, and the other had no chance to dodge. Kangyu activates the resistance shield that protects him from the attack. Both are surprised by what just happened. He thought he would take some damage when he used that ability. The ability was Quick Dodge, which has the effect of a resistance shield. Several warnings begin to appear, stating that his dodge has been updated to Quick Dodge. It was the first time he used it since he obtained it, and he found the effect very useful. The assassin says that one came close. Then he makes another ice spear. Grabbing it, he says that he could have killed him in one go. But since it wasn't fun to toy with him, he would kill him and take his items. Shin stops and asks why he was going after children. However, the man doesn't understand the question. Placing his hand on his head, he asks who his client was. The man asks for an answer, but Joe Goblin laughs and says that he didn't know anything. He says that he liked deceiving them, that it was fun. and then he got excited by it because they were pure, and he used them only as toys. Upon hearing this, Shin remembers how Chi treated Yuri with his claim. Angrily, Goblin uses the ability to create an ice barrier around them. Quickly, the man grabs his sword. Taking a fighting stance, he says that he will show him what it is like to be a toy. Shin creates a magical illusion to confuse the man about where he truly was. Thus, they go after Joe. He becomes confused, trying to identify which one of them was the real one. Staring fixedly at one of them, he believes he has found him. However, that one disappears, making him think that he must be hiding and trying to find an opening. While he was thinking, he did not notice the others approaching and was surprised by several of them attacking him. Joe grabs 2 ice spears and prepares for battle. They pass through the illusion's bodies, making him despair. Several of them move past him and stop behind the man. Now he was surrounded by the figures, unsure of who could really harm him. Shin runs to strike him from behind with his sword. The assassin begins to think about how things reached this point. Using the ice foam ability, he decides to finish them all off. One by one, the illusions were hit, but the real one was not found. Realizing he had been deceived, he becomes worried, but soon sees the real one coming toward him with determination. He starts to create another ice spear. As Shin used acceleration to get closer, he tells him he was too slow and sets his spear on fire. Saying that this was exactly what he was looking for, he uses the weapon to strike the man. The fire from the sword began to break through the ice armor and reach his body. He asks the man how it feels to be deceived. Joe thinks that the pain wasn't allowing him to focus. He grabs the sword from his body and tries to strike the man, screaming for him to die, but he manages to teleport. When he turns around, he sees him with his sword ready to strike. Jumping to attack, he says, "This is it." Using the Great Decapitation ability, he strikes from behind, dealing 33% more damage. Seconds later, the assassin was gasping for air. Kangyu plays classical music. The system shows that the Great Decapitation consumes 25% of his energy, and he thinks that while it requires a lot of energy, it was very effective. Looking at his opponent on the ground, he materializes something. Joe looks at him and notices that he was speaking on the phone. Shin calls someone and introduces himself. He thanks them for their patience and places the phone on a tripod, saying that he would now begin the revenge for their daughter. In a building, Kangyu appears on the screens of a train station in Seoul. Someone tells Soie that he was heading south, that it was certain he had been at ground zero, judging by the direction he was going. The woman says that the man would return to the station and to keep her updated. Hanging up, she begins cursing him. Smiling, she says she would make him pay for disregarding her. At ground zero, the assassin begins stuttering apologies without looking at the phone camera. A while later, the man on the other end of the phone says that it was enough, that it was sufficient, and his daughter would be content with it. Crying and covering his face, the man begins to thank Kangyu. He thanks him for doing something that the law and the HNSA could not. Shin says he simply did what he was assigned to do. He finishes by saying that he hopes his daughter rests in peace. Screaming, the assassin says he did everything he was ordered to do. At that moment, the man activates the blood burn ability, making him groan in pain. After the man stops moving, he tells him he could die now. The system issues an alert stating that the target has been eliminated. Thus, a constellation joined him, and his constellation said it was useless. The Plunderer's dimension states that he needed separate training, and Kangyu says he would leave it to him. Taking the items from the corpse, he comments that he could make a lot of money selling them. When he turns around, he notices that the phone started ringing. Returning to it, Yeren appears saying he did a good job, that the commissioner gave him a bonus and would send 2.5 billion to his account. Shin says he would like to make a request. He asks to retrieve the body he found upon arriving and to check its identity. Smiling, the woman says that would be easy. Hanging up, she says she would see him soon. Looking back, he tells someone that he had already warned them to stop. He asks why they kept following him. Yuri appears from behind a rock. She says there was a dungeon she couldn't complete because of an intermediate boss. Embarrassed, she asks him to go with her. The two arrive at the location. Looking around, the man says it was strange that this place existed and that it looked like it would collapse at any moment. He had set up Ground Zero to have many hidden dungeons, so there were many that had yet to be discovered. The girl says she didn't think he would accompany her. Smiling, she thanks him, and the man says it was good for him too, since dungeons were beneficial. He could also observe her abilities, and if she was good, she could be a great force in the fight against the Junghwa Guild. He wonders if this was her first time in a team. Yuri asks him to look at a sign. She asks if he knew how to read it since the words were cut off, which is why she wasn't using a translator, and the man says it was Latin. It read that those who invaded the deepest place with bloody feet would be buried there for eternity. He asks if they should see the incredible things that place would show them. The two descend the stairs. Turning around, the young man asks what kind of intermediate boss was there. She says it was a monster that sent out strong consecutive ranged attacks and barely managed to get within range once. She landed a final blow, but it was blocked by a high defense ability that neutralized the first attack. Kangyu says that must have been difficult, but doesn't notice the monsters at the bottom of the stairs. When he realizes, one of them growls at them. They charge at the two young warriors. Grabbing his sword, he says he will go first. The first monster tries to attack him, but the young man uses teleportation to strike it from behind. He quickly lands a hit on its back before it notices. While one of them was being eliminated, the other throws a spear at the girl. she activates her ability. She uses the dimensional gate, which teleports the spear and makes it hit the monster instead. Shin is impressed. Her reaction speed and proficiency were excellent, and her level was probably close to 200. With all the enemies defeated, the portal opens. The young man says they finally did it. Ahead, the monster senses movement and awakens. An intruder has been detected. Yuri tells him she had never seen a combination of abilities like that before. A crab ability that only monsters used combined with an assassin class ability that monsters possessed. Excited, she says they finished quickly, and the young man thinks she doesn't find it strange. Thanks to that, he leveled up significantly and was eager to reach level 50 quickly. Suddenly, something attacks them, but they dodge swiftly. They notice that the attack left a crack in the wall beside them. They had reached the intermediate boss. In front of them, a giant being appears. It grabs its sword and says it will execute the task. It was Sportula. It launched consecutive attacks and had a high defense ability. Turning to the girl, he asks if he could let it fall on its head. She asks if he would be okay, and the young man tells her to just use her ability. Believing in him, the girl begins and says she understands. Shin uses his short-distance leap and rushes towards Sportula. It tries to strike him with its sword, but Jung uses the dimensional gate ability and teleports him. The young man emerges on the other side of the giant, confusing it. Then he does it again, appearing on the opposite side. In this way, the boss was unable to hit him. Due to the consecutive ranged attacks, getting close was difficult. Using teleportation, the young man ends up on top of the boss's head. Sportula swings its sword again but fails to hit him once more. Seeing that it couldn't land a hit, it starts getting irritated. The girl thinks that this was the moment, as the sword falls towards Sportula's head. Right behind, the young man appears to see the sword falling, but the monster activates its high defense. Kanghu manages to disable the barrier for a moment. Immediately after, the boss uses all its strength to hit them. But Yuri activates her ability and says that the timing was perfect. Shin appears right above its head, gripping his sword. He uses the Great Decapitation ability to strike. Seconds later, he leaps away, and when he looks down, he sees the girl smiling. Kanghu managed to escape just in time and land behind Yuri. He is startled because he thought she would send him behind the boss. The girl begins to invoke another ability. As she strikes with electricity, the thunder roars, declaring that it also wanted to fight him. After the shock, Sportula lets out a groan. Seconds later, it falls backward without resistance. Shin wonders what she was planning. He believes she didn't want to simply wait and congratulates her. Deeper inside, they find a person kneeling under a beam of light. He thinks the girl is progressing well, and at this pace, she would be very useful when they fought against Jungwa. She draws his attention to the kneeling man. Both prepare for an attack. The man had his hands together, praying. Kanghu asks if that was the boss since he looked like a person and approaches. Looking closer, he can see that the man was crying blood. Before them, his entire body becomes covered in the red liquid, and at that moment, the beam of light changes color and intensifies. The girl, confused, asks what was happening. Quickly, he throws his sword, which strikes the man. He begins to crack, and as he shatters, the system announces that they have killed the main boss. There were no abilities to loot, and around them, a strange energy began to rise. The dungeon was collapsing and everything was being destroyed. Desperate, he turns to the girl and tells her to use all the abilities she has. She agrees and begins. Using his short-distance leap, the young man says he will escape as well and starts leaving the area. As the walls collapse, his speed increased. He couldn't believe the main boss treated hunters like travel companions. Picking up a rose, he said it was a precious item, but he couldn't be stingy. He began eating it because he would die if he didn't escape. A wave of energy surged through his body as everything around him was destroyed. He was the one who wrote that item, but feeling it personally was better than he had imagined, all his senses were awakened. Smiling, he said he would escape. In another room, the girl kept running. She had spent too much mana on Sportula. Because of that, she was weak and ended up collapsing from exhaustion. When she looked ahead, she saw the young man running. She tried to shout for him to wait for her. Her memories took her back to when she had made the same plea to Chi. Seeing that she wasn't hurt, she closed her eyes in resignation. However, the young man asked what she was doing and if she was hurt. The girl was surprised to see him extending his hand. Above her head, a rock began to fall. Yuri warned him, but nothing happened. Then the young man activated a protective field. She tried to speak, but before she realized it, she was being carried by the warrior. Holding her, he said this would be his final push. Running as fast as he could, he told her to hold on. Behind them, the dungeon completely collapsed. When they were at a safe distance, they stopped to rest, and the young man said they had survived. The ability he obtained from the intermediate boss would be very useful. By maximizing its proficiency, the cooldown time would also decrease, making it useful in the future. While looking at what he had gained, a screen appeared beside him, saying he had received a skill enhancement. He thought it wasn't a bad reward for putting his life at risk. Yuri thanked him. She said she wouldn't have been able to get out alone. Looking down, she admitted that she didn't move because the situation reminded her of her past. She used to be a guide for the Jungwa Guild. She was a mercenary guide for other hunters. One day, Chi came looking for her. They said they always did their best to ensure the safety of Jungwoo's team members. That was the best guild in the country, so she trusted him and joined the team. But one day, she was seriously injured in a dungeon attack. After hearing that it was severe enough that she wouldn't be able to enter dungeons for a while, she asked everyone to leave her behind because they couldn't waste time on useless things. Yuri asked if it was a lie that he would do everything to keep her safe. She said that was only true when she had value. Then she asked if she was an idiot for believing in that. In the end, she said it was a shame because for a toy, she wasn't so bad. Shin said that was an assassination attempt. The girl said it was a miracle she escaped. And if she hadn't contracted a constellation that dealt with space, she would have died. Smiling, she said she was lucky, but the young man told her it wasn't just that. Constellations don't contract hunters without a goal. He said hers must have seen her potential. Excited, the girl asked if that was a compliment, and he thought it was just the truth. Looking down, Yuri said she felt better after talking about it. That was the reason she was at Ground Zero. She didn't have difficulties because of the people there. But at the same time, it was lonely. She admitted that she must have secretly wished to find trust in people. Suddenly, Kang felt unwell and started falling toward the girl. She panicked when she felt his hand on her shoulder. Moments later, his body collapsed backward. The girl saw him gasping for air and asked if he was okay. Shin told her not to worry. It was just the side effect of the improper use of solatium. He just needed to rest, and then he would get better. Placing her hand on his forehead, Yuri smiled and thanked him once more. The young man simply smiled back in response. At Imjin Station, Kangoo thought that if Jung Yuri stayed at Ground Zero, she would grow well. They would meet again. Since there was still time before the train arrived, he decided to check Huntergram. It was the SNS exclusively for hunters, generally used for advertising or sharing information. Shah of Junghwa, the largest guild in the country. The central point of the dungeon invasion strategy is safety and teamwork. Looking at his phone, he thought it was a lot of nonsense. He noticed that the Tawa River was gaining supremacy over Ulsan. Smiling, he said they would handle the rest properly. He would be able to meet the leader of the Abyss soon when saying they fulfill the promise. A message from the Plunderer's dimension appeared, saying it was incredible. It said that, although it was a shame they couldn't plunder the constellation, they wanted to ask him something. Then it asked, what was the meaning of having constellations? Kangoo says that since it was a mutualistic relationship, it should go well for him to do well. The dimension says that it was interesting, but that the boy was not a normal hunter. He knew something was happening when he called him back when he was level 10. He says that soon he would test him. If he passed, their destinies would become one, and he would have even greater abilities. Smiling, the boy says that he accepted. He asks if the constellation had no complaints about the contract, but it does not understand. Shin says that this system connects constellations that control the world to the fate of mere humans. In the novel he wrote, he set it up to mock Jang Siwon's subordinates. The dimension says that it was natural, since the contractor's fight was the same as the constellation's fight. The constellations are not administrators of that world, only its constituents, and the boy asks who was above them. However, the dimension says that it could not speak, as those were pieces of information that transcended the worldview of the novel. Even as the author, he could not know everything about that world and wonders if they were a reflection of his consciousness. To his surprise, the dimension says that it did not want to disappear like a normal constellation, that he made it greedier and was slowly beginning to think it could share its destiny with him. Shin tells it not to worry, that he would show things that would exceed expectations in the future. The dimension says it was waiting. Aaron sends him a message saying that Soie was at Seoul Station. The boy thinks it was faster than he expected and that he needs to change his objective. He would face Soie after clearing one more dungeon. He should go to the express bus terminal instead of the station. Leaving there, he thinks about going to the dungeon near Gwangju Terminal. Near the terminal, looking at his phone, he thinks that there was a reason for going there. That was the place where he could use the PS he got at Hansa, paid for the hunter's information, so they could not track him. If he improved his skills there, the fight with Soie would be more viable. Suddenly, a scream catches his attention, and he notices a woman screaming for help as she is surrounded by men. One of them points a knife and says that she bumped into them first, asking the others to take her belongings. She starts cursing the men and says they were from the Heian Guild. That guild acted as Jang Shuwon's arms, and instigated by him, it ended up annihilating one of Jungwoo's forces. They had some authority in that area, but in reality, they were just trash. However, when he looks at the commotion again, he notices they were holding the girl. He discovers that they had a very useful constellation, the Great Trickster. The looter says that despite the vulgar name, it was a high-level constellation, and he could not believe it was with such scum. Drawing his sword, Shin comments that he had no reason to ignore that. He would see that constellation in action. He shouts to get the men's attention and uses illusion magic to confuse them. Approaching, the boy asks them to try to guess which was the real one. The men call him crazy. They run towards the men. One of them grabs a knife to attack, cursing him. His knife ignites in flames and swiftly moves toward one of the clones. At Seoul Station, the woman was still waiting for him. So, irritated, says she had waited long enough. She wonders if he had taken another route. Her master contacts her and asks if she managed to catch the boy. She says no and was getting irritated. The man says the woman was fighting a lot and really wanted to see him. Hidden behind her, a person was listening to everything. The man says that the boy only needed to be alive and to make sure to bring him. The woman says she would take him. After hanging up, she notices a presence behind her, reaching for the knife at her waist, so he asks if the person wanted to be struck. Noticing that the person did not move, she grabs the weapon. Turning, she throws the knife at the body with precision. Back to the fight, the man manages to find the real one but hits his force field. Since he had found him, Shin says he would give him a reward and uses the Great Decapitation ability. He defeats 2 more and the system says that their contract with the constellation now belonged to him. Other men who witnessed the scene are terrified, as is the girl. She approaches him with a smile. With the team leader defeated, the men start threatening him. Knocking the girl down, they charge at him armed. However, using his ability, he moves past all of them before they can realize it. He says that since they had no constellation, there was no need to prolong that. The Great Trickster says that every 100 levels, he would receive a rare item, and he becomes more excited to level up. The girl thanks him and says that she was only alive because of him. Embarrassed, she says her name was Jin Hueyang. Taking his hands to give him her phone, she asks for his number. She wanted to repay him even, just a little. He starts typing on the phone. Shortly after, Hueyang thanks him again and says goodbye, saying they would see each other again. As he watches the girl walk away, he receives a notification. It says that the dungeon would open and for him to enter. So he wonders if the man she attacked was a personal mercenary or just a civilian. Since she found no information, she wonders if she got the wrong person, and from afar, someone was watching her. This person steps out from behind the place where they were hiding. Typing nervously, he reports that the woman had noticed him. Behind him, the woman appears, saying that she knew there was a rat. Using her ability, she touches him and burns his entire body. In his ear, someone says they had found Shin, that he had been seen in Jiangju. Taking a photo of the body on the ground, she says she should not have trusted Yiren. Burning it, she says it was ugly to lay eyes on her and that he should stop running away. Seeing everything he received from defeating the enemies, he says he would earn 800,000 by selling everything. Grabbing more items, he decides to check his bank balance, yet nearly 5 billion. With that amount, he could easily buy a 3rd-rank weapon. Yiren warns him that the woman had eliminated his spies and was on her way to Guangzhou. Just so he was level 200 and had a constellation. Her nickname wasn't Hunting Dog for nothing. Compared to her, at level 49, he needed to level up at least twice before facing her. For now, he would enter the dungeon he requested. With his hands in his pockets, he heads toward the dungeon. Near the Guangzhou terminal, a young man starts talking to the woman, saying that they had done as agreed. They eliminated the Heiyang Guild and took control of the toll and the bus terminal. She says they also took control of Songjiang Station. She tells him to wait where he was. Smiling, she hoped Kanggu would like the network she had set up. Suddenly, something catches her attention. Sitting on a bench beside her was the boy. Drawing her sword, she says it had been a while. Shin was deep in the forest, fighting against a swordsman. This was the main boss, Sajina. The boy thinks it was annoying. The 3 phantoms he sent were thrown away with a single strike. Since he was far away, it was difficult to use perception vision. Those ranged attacks were useless. If he went directly at him, he would just waste his self-defense and dodge his attack. So he decides to use shadow steps to attack simultaneously. 2 of them hide among the bamboos while the real one attacks from the front. Sejin sighs and looks at him intently. He grabs his sword and begins attacking the shadows while the real one remained hidden. Seeing that he was behind him, he says that this was what he was waiting for. He uses the ability to catch the swordsman's attention and appears, saying that his skill was interesting, but that it was useless if he got within range. Using Bloody Stab, he strikes him from behind. Noticing the attack, the man looks at him shocked. When the boy jumps in front of him, the man bends down due to the gravity of the wound. He growls at his opponent. Gathering his strength, he begins to stand up. However, before he could do anything, Shin vanishes from his sight. Suddenly, he appears behind him again. Sejuna grabs 2 swords and runs towards the fighter, entering his safety circle. He asks if he felt safe in that circle and observes him. The man strikes one of the swords on the ground using circular thunderous wind. Calling him to fight, the boy says he would kill him within the circle he made. Using Blood Burn, he hits his opponent. From afar, he begins to shield himself from the chaos he caused. He defeated the main boss and looted the target's ability, Circular Thunderous Wind. Shortly after, the system reports that he has leveled up, reaching level 51, and obtained the stealth ability. Even with this skill at maximum level, he could not use it simultaneously with an attack ability. The boy thinks it was a shame, but if it worked, it would be surreal. The Dimensional Looter says he was ready and eager to see his performance in the next battle. Leaving there, he says he would go to the shop before meeting her. At the station, he stands up and thinks that it wasn't bad at all. With his sword in hand, he says it had been a while. Smiling, so he says she thought he would keep running like a rat. He says he couldn't keep running with a hunting dog on his tail. Pointing his weapon at her, he says he got a new one to take down a bitch. The girl says that since he called her that way, she asks if he had no intention of becoming Eclipse's dog. The boy comments that there was no point in confirming something she already knew. She thanks him for rejecting her offer. Aiming at his chest, she says she had always wanted to kill him, that hiding was useless, and calls him a rat while taking off her gloves. A van was speeding. The woman says she was worried because Shin didn't like receiving help unless he asked for it. Beside her, Yerin says she looked like him, but there was no other way and she wanted to keep her talented job for longer. That makes the woman happy. She turns a corner. She ends up encountering an army standing there waiting for them. Yerin says they went to the right place. With determination, the woman starts accelerating the van and runs over all of them at once. At the station, Kangwoo dodges Soie's attacks. Seeing the destruction her power caused, he thinks he was doomed if it hit him. Creating a massive explosion, the woman tells him to just die. He activates his protection field and starts running from the attacks. Shin takes the flower to use its power. Eating it, he thinks it was difficult, but luckily he had reinforced the protection barrier and strengthened his weapon. Seeing how he ran, Soie asks how much longer he would keep running and increases her attacks. Grabbing his weapon, he thinks he reinforced it. With it strengthened, he needed to get closer and sent his clones to land beside the woman. She becomes surrounded by several of them, while the real one watches from above. Even with them being identical, the woman smiles. Elsewhere, the girl was fighting against the men and defeated them with little effort. When she knocks them all down, she finds herself surrounded by bodies. Turning around, she sees Yerin opening a door and stepping out. Running to her, she says she got rid of the rest and asked about Kangwoo. She says she couldn't find him anywhere. He was busy because all of its clones were being burned at once. Looking up, he says that everything he tried was useless. Seeing him, she says it was over. Shin knows that hand-to-hand combat wouldn't work. He throws his sword, which lands on the ground in front of the woman. She steps on the object. She asks if it slipped from his hand because he was afraid to run. Summoning 3 flaming dragons against him, she says that was how one should aim. He becomes frightened and is unable to dodge the attack. Amidst the flames, Shin appears from above. Stating that things weren't going well, the woman wonders what he was trying to do. Kangwoo activates the thunderous wind whirlwind. The wind was so strong that it started to destroy the flaming dragons. Seconds later, they disappear. Directing his wind toward the woman, he starts to speak. He says that it should be him teaching her how to aim. From afar, Sammy watches the fight. She comments that it was very interesting, that it was good she didn't interfere at the time of the fight and never thought you would make things difficult for Soie. However, it was quite fascinating. After going to Sejina's dungeon, he was using the same ability as the main boss. Her master contacts her, and the girl says she was watching as ordered. Kangwoo was in the middle of his whirlwind, which was hurting the woman. He uses the abduction ability to grab her with a giant hand. Realizing what was happening, the woman is surprised. Using acceleration, he points his weapon at her. With bloody stab, he strikes her abdomen, making her scream in pain, but she grabs her knife from her thigh. Soie manages to intercept the attack with a knife. She asks if he thought he had won. But with blood burn, he makes her stop talking and scream once more. Sammy hears the master asking about the situation. She tells him not to be shocked. Then she reports that she was losing. He says that maybe the woman wasn't as good as she used to be anymore. Noticing what was happening, she wonders if she would lose like that. She remembers when she burned a man who asked why she was doing that. She says it was to teach him not to play with fire anymore, but he doesn't understand. Remembering that she set fire to a house, she asks if the woman was the child who was there. He shouts that killing him wouldn't bring her parents back, but right after, a wave of fire engulfs him. Cho watches the burning body. Soon, she senses something behind her. She dodges just in time as a knife flies past her and hits the wall. 2 men appear and say she was crazy. They say they would make an example of her so people could see what happens when they mess with them. They shout to capture her and several of them run toward her. Irritated, the woman begins to use the fire in her hands. Quickly, she throws fire at them. She manages to hit some, but another appears beside her with a knife, startling her and stabbing her hip while cursing her. One of them insults her, and the other says to search her because she might have something useful. Looking at them with anger, she wonders if she would lose to them while a man watches from afar. Clenching his fist, he asks who is causing trouble in his territory. They turn around confused and only manage to see his fist coming toward them. With great strength and speed, he defeats all of them, throwing them far away. He says that this was Eclipse's territory. Now only the injured girl remains among the debris. Looking at the bodies, he asks if she did that, and she says yes. With his hand in his pocket, he says it was worth taking her in. Then he tells her to follow him. The master gave her a place where she fit in. In return, she dealt with people for him. But one day, he told her that caution was not one of her strong skills. He says it would be good to compete with the boy and bring him to work for him. She wonders if she would lose everything she had for someone like him who appeared out of nowhere. Making flames rise around her, she screams not to underestimate her. Shin is surprised to see her power. Smiling, the woman asks why he was so surprised. With her hands engulfed in flames, she tells the boy to come closer and tries to touch him. The only thing protecting him is the personal defense that creates a barrier. She becomes irritated because of his defensibility. In an attack stance, she asks how many abilities he had. Cracking his fingers, he says it was a trade secret. However, nothing happens to the girl's body. Seeing that, the boy is confused. Smiling, the woman says her prediction was right and that this was an ability that explodes wounds. She says it was a pity because she had cauterized all the wounds. Creating a fire whirlwind, she says that trick wouldn't work anymore. A rain of fire begins to fall, making him desperate. Above him, a massive fireball starts to descend. Using quick evasion, he swiftly dodges the falling fireballs. Fire was her specialty. She was probably planning to control the fire on the ground like landmines. With that amount of fire, his defense wouldn't last long, so he activates the protection barrier again. Looking at the hole the fire made, he thinks he needs to fight outside. With a short distance jump, he exits the area. In front of him, the woman appears, surprising him. She shouts that she caught him, pointing a knife at him. Outside, the woman continues to fight the men. She calls Yurin's attention to look at what she was seeing. Above the men, a wave of fire begins to form inside the area. Yurin tells them to hurry. When she sees the girl running toward them, the men start running away, but others shout to stop her. She uses her punch to knock them down. They use their weapons, but the other apologizes and says they were in a hurry, stopping the attack with just one hand. She tells them that if they wanted to live, they should leave. She returns their attack and hits them all at once. Yurin begins to use her magic, but realizes that the fire was getting worse. She becomes worried, thinking about Shin. He was fighting the woman with all his strength. She used her knife to try to hit him, and he blocked it with his own knife, but started to tremble due to the force she was applying. It turns out that the woman's knife begins to cut through his. Noticing that, he uses cross-teleportation to escape the attack, thinking he would strike her blind spot. Turning around, the woman says she remembered that move. Even using his barrier for protection, the woman manages to crack it. Her strength breaks through the barrier, and she strikes the knife into his chest. She sighs in relief, celebrating that she finally succeeded. Pushing the knife deeper, she smiles at the boy. Looking down, he notices that he was also pointing a knife at her abdomen. Using great decapitation, Kangoo manages to remove the knife from his chest and cuts her arm. Throwing the knife to the ground, she grabs her arm, screaming from the wound. Sammy feels sad and wonders if it was over. When she looks to the side, she notices someone running toward the two. The boy steps back. He thinks that the girl made quick decisions, that she sacrificed her arm in exchange for her life. While cauterizing her lost arm, so he screams that she would kill him and sends whirlwinds back at him. Using the protection barrier, he says he was getting tired and that the effects of mad silasium would wear off soon. Throwing fireballs, the woman says she would break that barrier as many times as needed. He tries to protect himself, but someone protects him first. He realizes it was wind magic. Kang holds the girl in his arms while Soie asks how many times she would be interrupted by them. She finishes her sentence by stating that she did not invite Yurin. Yurin jumps from where she was and stops in the space between the duo and the woman. While responding, she says that Soie doesn't understand the situation ahead. The enemy begins to condense her fire magic while laughing. She unleashes her magic and tells the group that she can do this as many times as they want while advancing. Yurin uses a magical barrier to block the attack. After the block, she realizes that her opponent has disappeared. The girl raises her arms and asks where she went. Gasping, Kangoo reveals that they don't need to stay on alert. Yurin asks what he means, and in his thoughts, he says he was worried about Soie's last constellation. He thinks that the opponent's ability is very strong, and using his mana tracking ability, he detects that the opponent copied his stealth ability and fled. Because of that, she would no longer attack. He reveals to the group that Soie has escaped, and his ally says that they should pursue her immediately. But at that moment, the boy weakens and faints. Before he falls to the ground, the girl catches him and asks if he is okay. Yurin eases the situation by saying that the boy was breathing, that in any case, they should take him to the hospital. The opponent, now some distance away, curses Yurin for interrupting. She wonders about the secret Kangoo was hiding. She notices that the boy has many abilities and several of them are boss abilities. This makes her question whether he can copy the abilities of monsters, and for that reason, she needs to warn the master. But someone was nearby. Hyoyoung steps out from a corner and strikes the woman. Sifu barely manages to dodge the attack. Hyoyoung asks where she was going in such a hurry, and the woman asks what Jin was doing. She replies that she was letting Siu see the sad situation she was in. In a flashback, Hyoyoung's on a call with the master and asks what she should do with Cha. He simply responds to discard her, because a hunting dog that fails to hunt deserves to die. With that, Jin reveals that the master had abandoned Sihu. This leaves her very surprised, but her opponent promptly advances for another attack. Later, Kangoo wakes up and adjusts himself in bed, realizing he is in a hospital. Beside him, the girl had stayed until she fell asleep, calling his name while dreaming. He gets up, gets dressed, and leaves the room, taking out his phone to play classical music. While enjoying it, he receives a notification on his phone. The message was from Jung Yuri, leaving him surprised. In the chat, the woman poses beside a flower while typing Tada, and the boy wonders if finding the flower was just a coincidence. Another message is sent by her, saying that she now has a grandmother. But he puts his phone away without paying attention, wondering what she was talking about. Turning to leave where he was, the boy is caught off guard and becomes nervous. Yurin, while staring at him, says she was right and knew he would do this. She then asks the boy why you won't rest before leaving since his body hasn't recovered yet. Kangoo changes the subject and asks if the blue-eyed woman was okay, leaving Lee surprised. The The boy reveals that she may have become a target of Eclipse because of everything that happened, but she responds that he doesn't need to worry, because the team might be big, but the blue-eyed woman wouldn't give in so easily. Shin says he is happy to hear that. Then he thanks her for the help and asks her to tell Soyeon that he was grateful. Aaron comments that Soyeon would want to hear it personally. However, the boy says it's better not to, that it was better for Soyeon too. She was an unconditional character for Kangoo, and if they got closer, what happened in the novel would repeat itself, so he says he is leaving. The woman says she won't force him, but she asks if he could give her a moment, because she wanted to tell him something. Yeren asks if it was okay to take a little longer to find out his identity, and the boy says to do whatever is most comfortable. She says that Eclipse did nothing even though Soie ended up in that state, and that it was strange that they remained silent after so many of their people had been killed. Shin comments that they might be trying to cover up the incident. The woman agrees, even after sending their subordinates to capture him and even failing with an executive member. She says there were no witnesses, so Soie failed and should have been eliminated, considering Kang Dong-yeon's nature. During the battle, the boy told Yeren that the woman had fled. Immediately afterward, he fainted and was supported by both of them. The looter said that the fight was impressive, that he had proven his worth, to call them if he wanted to proceed to the next stage. He thinks it was a malicious relationship, but he had an opportunity thanks to Soie, and bids farewell once more. Yeren tells him to be careful because there might be people following him, and the boy asks her not to worry. He would be in a place where no one could find him. The Gwangju Guild was attacked by the Daejeon organization. Showon says that they attacked Haeyeon, which had nothing to do with them, and it bothered him because he wasn't paying attention. Unexpected things kept happening those days. Just as Ryotawa eliminated Gong Taesu, they also dominated Ulsan. He couldn't even find out who took Tasu's left arm as there wasn't enough information. Slamming the table, he decides to call someone. He says he needs to know why Eclipse attacked Haeyeon. He requests CCTV footage from Gwangju Station in a building. Shin says to begin. The looter says he needs to confirm something first. Dying inside the constellation test was the same as dying in reality. He asks if he is aware of that, which makes him thoughtful. Smiling, he says yes. The constellation test was conducted solely at the discretion of the constellation. The type varied depending on the constellation's disposition, but the only similarity among them was that regardless of level, the difficulty was high. Some constellations conducted the test just to get rid of their contractors, since if they died, the contract would end. Most accept the challenge after improving their skills a little first, but he had felt that during his fight against Soie, he needed to become stronger. He didn't have time to hesitate, so he thanks the looter but says he needed it now. The looter says he worried for nothing. Teleporting him, he says he accepts his will. Shin appears in another place. Looking to the side, he sees several men in the stands. There were more spectators than he expected, and he says the show would be electrifying. Above him, the looter is happy that he liked it. He welcomes everyone to his contractor's test. If the contractor passes the test, he will share his destiny with him and obtain his powers. However, if he fails, he will die at the end of the battle. He asks them to donate some of their constellation powers and express their intentions if they liked it. If Shin fails the test, the constellation power will return. The opponent for this match would be a hunter from another dimension, and the contractor himself would have the chance to choose. Kangoo thinks that it might seem like he had a choice, but the point of the test was to be recognized by the constellations, and they would never be satisfied if he chose a weak opponent. Looking at an opponent, he smiles and says he chooses him. The constellations are surprised by the choice. The wild strategist says it was interesting because he chose someone he could never defeat. All the constellations begin making their donations. His opponent says that's enough, that fighting against a being from another dimension was fun. Shin observes his opponent with satisfaction. Taking the flower, he says this was a good place. The mana was purer and more abundant than in reality. Jang asks if he wasn't a patient or an addict. Eating the flower, the boy says he was neither. He asks for the boy's level, and he replies 47. The man doesn't understand how a level 47 was trying to face him, a level 800. He calls him reckless and says he only chose him to get attention, but all he would show was his own death. Turning to the constellations, he asks if it wouldn't be too sad to leave right after traveling so far to get there. Shimon says he would use only 2 constellations. Shin thinks that, as expected, the boy was drawing the spectators' attention. Normally, high-level constellations want the main position, so they wouldn't want to contract someone with such a quantity. The intelligent morning man is impressed, and the mad mathematician says it was a great opportunity to see what he was capable of. But in a place with so many constellations, at least one would like his abilities and things wouldn't go as planned. A man appears before Shawan in his office, handing him the documents he requested. He asks if it was about the Eclipse case, and the boy says it was about the Abyss case. Looking at their latest news, he says they were an organization truly difficult to understand. He asks why they were so obsessed with the truth. He says the public would see things and believe whatever they wanted anyway. He asked the man if his work was reliable, and the other comments that he also agreed. With that, Shuwon would hire the Black Skeleton Troop. Lee Hyun-suk, the captain of Abyss and Park Dongji, his blood relative. Suddenly, Lee's phone rings. It was Sangmin, who excitedly says that it had been a long time. He comments about Ulsan, and the girl says they had only gotten rid of flies. She tells him that someone else took care of Taesu, then asks if he has time. She says she has something to tell him, but the man replies that he doesn't have time. He couldn't get in touch with Dronzer and didn't know he was in a dungeon again. But when it asks if he was avoiding him again, the man says that Yusuk went looking for him, so everything would be fine. Then he asks if the girl could go there. They would see each other for the first time in a long time and make their next plans. Smiling, the girl says it was perfect. The fight between Kangwoo and Siwon was intense. His personal defense was already breaking. The man tells him not to be scared because it was just a signal. His speed was as insane as in the novel. It would be dangerous even with just his body. Siwon asks how long that barrier would last. Throwing purple darkness fireballs, he tells him to run if he wants to survive. Smiling, the boy starts dodging. But soon, the man uses wind arrows to attack him. He had seen his abilities before, but now he was on another level, and if he got hit by the arrows, he would be in critical condition. Using quick evasion, he does his best to dodge. He was using dark magic right from the start. He had chosen the constellation of pure dark truth as his first. Looking at the audience, he says it was a relief that the insect was fast. He says they wouldn't have to worry about the duration of the fight because it would end quickly. The constellations begin to talk, wondering if he was delaying the fight on purpose. The constellation looter says it's not over yet when he notices Shin using acceleration to run toward his opponent. He thanks the man for talking so much because it allowed him to get closer. Unconcerned, Siwon uses the dispel ability to block the attack. Seeing that, the boy becomes worried and the man comments on his ability. He says he would have to adjust his evaluations, and at that moment, Shin uses illusion magic so that all of them attack at once. They all surround their opponent, but he uses space manipulation to throw them away. Using his sword, he grabs onto the wall in front of him to avoid falling. The second constellation he was using was the special guide. Gaining momentum, to the man's surprise, Shin jumps directly at him. He and his clones jump at the boy again. Siwon thinks that it was just a cloning technique, that he would deal with the original body first, so he uses purple darkness fireballs to attack. However, he ends up hitting the clone and the real one moves behind him. When the man realizes it, he only sees the knife approaching. Shin throws it with speed and the other tries to intercept it with space manipulation. Seeing that he succeeded, Shin jumps to attack him from the front, but something grabs him. Elsewhere, Dronzer is grabbed by his shirt. Yusuk was trying to hold onto him, panting. He asks what happened, but the man only asks him to stay quiet. He whispers, asking for his attention. They had discovered that the Jungwook Guild was after him. Nervous, the boy asks if it was true. Leaving the place, the man says there was no time for explanations. He thinks it was good that he made contact. The man who was following them notices the escape. He becomes irritated, and the other asks what happened. He shouts that the target moved. Back to Shin, his protection barrier was having issues. He was lying on the ground and his clones returned to his side. He soon notices a green energy surrounding him. Siwon says he doesn't know his place. He asks how he dares to aim at his back. He uses the oxidation ability, but the boy manages to escape in time. Using space manipulation, he says it's useless. The man was using both space magic and dark magic at the same time. All of his clones were being hit while he did everything he could to dodge the attacks. However, one of them was still following him, even hitting the others. He couldn't track him with his eyes, and because of that, it didn't take long for him to be hit in the back. That attack makes him scream, and where he was, a massive explosion occurs. One of the men tells Yusuk to stay there if he doesn't want to see the hostage die. Irritated, the man curses them. Hearing that, one of them hits him from behind, smiling. Dronzer desperately calls his name upon seeing him on the ground. Taking the boy, they start to leave. Even without strength, he shouts the boy's name, which catches the attention of others passing by. They run in the direction of the scream. Reaching Yusuk, they kneel, and he apologizes. He says that the boy was kidnapped, leaving everyone in panic. He laments, saying he should have been more careful. One of them says they should search a bit more and asks which direction they went. Pointing to the left, the man says they went that way. They say to leave it to them, and the two run off to try and rescue Dronzer. However, he starts smiling strangely, thanking them. In the battle, Siwon waits for the smoke to dissipate. Once again, he begins speaking with the constellations. He asks if they enjoyed the show. He says that even if only for a short time, it was an honor to meet them. Looking up, he notices that the donations are still coming in. Seeing the smoke clear, he becomes confused. Shin emerges without a scratch, thanking Jang, because thanks to his talking with the spectators, he was able to recover. Hearing the music playing, he is impressed. Putting his phone away, the boy says nothing would change even if he looked at him that way, since his attacks wouldn't work anymore. Using his ability, the man says he wouldn't be able to say that after he destroyed him. Looking at the power of the magic, the boy thinks that if he got hit, he would die instantly. But if he couldn't overcome it, he would never be able to block Siwon. Siwon thinks that it's just a bluff. Then he launches a black lightning bolt at his opponent, who doesn't move. When the bolt gets close to him, the boy uses quick evasion to dodge. Noticing this, the man becomes alert. He wonders how that was possible while Shin smiles at him. Hyunsuk starts shouting, asking if it was true that Dronzer had been kidnapped. Yusuk bows, apologizing and saying it was his fault. The man says there's no reason it wasn't his fault. Sitting down, he asks the other to do the same and tell him everything about who they were. He says they were elite hunters. There was a high chance that their goal was money. and they could contact them using Donger's phone. Hyunsuk wonders if it was just a simple kidnapping or some scheme by the Jungwa Guild. He says the guild had been watching him more and more lately. If his information had been leaked, it wasn't strange that they targeted the boy. Since he wasn't sure, he asked the man to list everyone who knew that the boy was his nephew and tells him to be careful. Standing up, Yusuk says he would start immediately, and the other thanks him. He says that Sammy was arriving and to let her help him. The man thinks about the girl and that it would be great if he could kill her too. Showon says he doesn't care how he dodged, because he would die anyway, and he starts attacking. Kang-Hu couldn't dodge them using his eyes. The only thing he could do was sense the mana he was using. Since the mana there was much more abundant and pure, it was possible to do that. So he begins dodging the magic projectiles quickly. He was finally seeing the benefits of his mana hypersensitivity. The constellations start praising him, saying they should keep an eye on him and wondering how the match would end. Seeing that the constellations were paying attention to him, Shirwan becomes irritated. Using black lightning again, he asks how he dares to ruin his stage. However, when he looks at the ground, he notices the boy is no longer there. While searching for him, Shin appears behind him again. Using Great Decapitation, he aims his knife at his opponent's neck. Elsewhere, Donj is thrown tied up against the wall. A man tells him to stay there and behave. If he irritated him, he would cut his fingers off. Then he leaves, slamming the door. Donja wonders how that happened since Yusak had told him that the Jungwa Guild was after him, but those were obviously not their members. The man calls someone and says that he captured the boy. On the other end of the line, another man smiles and says it was easier than expected, that in 2 hours it would come to pick him up. In the battle, Shuwon uses chains to restrain Shin before he can cut him. He says that the other gave up his disadvantage, since he was now using his third constellation, the Suppressor of Nature's Course. Bringing the knife closer to the other's neck, he says that this was his victory. However, he is thrown back and asks if the other was backing out. The Ruined Prophet says it was impressive, that no one would have imagined he could use an ability that had previously been blocked. The King of Drugs asks if that wasn't the monster's ability, and the other says it was surprising that he used it so skillfully. The Martial God of the Iron Mace says he was looking forward to seeing his evolution. Irritated, the man asks what kind of trick he used. Shin says he just used stealth. The other says that ability should only be obtained by assassins at level 50. Kang-Yu says he is right and asks if he really believed what he said. The constellation asks if he had been hiding his level from the beginning. They comment that there really was no need to reveal everything to the opponent. Irritated, Shuwan begins to summon a massive firestorm. He acknowledges that he underestimated him. He says he will now show his sincerity. Sammy is excited because she will finally see the captain and Donghae after such a long time. She can finally fulfill her promise. She sends a message to Sunkyu, telling him about it, that she will see him in 2 days if he is busy. In the battle, Shin calls him crazy for using so much power there. The constellations start praising Shuwon's ability. Controlling the massive wave, he says he should have done that a long time ago, that he would turn him to dust. Then he unleashes everything into the arena in the boy's direction. It was grand crimson flames that covered the entire stadium. An explosion occurs. Looking down, Jang says it's absurd. He asks if this isn't a violation of the rules. Shin is standing on a rock surrounded by flames that destroyed everything around him and asks why a constellation's interfering. The constellation looter says he cannot allow a human to act undisciplined in his dimension, that his contractor has already passed the test. He tells Shumon that his role is over. Opening a portal, he orders the man to return. Shumon explodes in rage, telling him not to make him laugh. But soon he is pulled into the portal, leaving them alone. The looter erases memories and sent him back to his original dimension to avoid a headache. Shin says that was close but had considered the possibility of it happening. It was obvious if one stopped to observe. Throughout the constellation test, even when he was at a disadvantage, he continued receiving donations, which meant he had passed. Lowering his head, he asks if he can receive his reward. The constellation agrees. He tells the others that he understands their intentions. The test results were clear. If they looked at the amount of power the constellations had gathered. One of them says it was an interesting fight, and another comments that the boy suited him, which irritates the looter. The darkness of the apocalypse says he is also interested and will continue watching. He tells the boy to remember him, which makes Shin happy since he was getting noticed. The constellation looter says they are too interested in his contractor, but he will allow it just for today. He begins converting the constellation power into EXP. He congratulates him for passing the test and tells him he will gain a new power. Then he is sent back, because the sweet taste of evolution is waiting for him. He arrives in his apartment. Since he leveled up quickly, he reached level 101. Seeing the message, he is very happy because he achieved his goal. But soon he becomes anxious as several other messages start flooding in. Shin has obtained the basic skill of the assassin class, Soul Imprint. After reading that he can imprint items, he is pleased. It was annoying to have to take care of weapons while fighting Chesodi. He should imprint all of his important weapons. Looking at the panel, he sees his new trait. He says it's useful but won't use it immediately. Among the numerous messages he received, he sees that the Trickster Master constellation has given him 3 cards to choose from. He remembers this and that he once mixed items that didn't suit his character, which caused problems. He decides to choose the middle card. The constellation congratulates him for picking one of the best items. Seeing what it is, he is delighted. He could copy Zhang Shuan's ability, but he thinks it would be good to acquire an assassin-class skill. He already knew someone who fit what he was looking for, but this person was quite famous in China. His phone starts ringing. Aaron is relieved that he answered and asks how he is. He says there's no need to worry, he's fine. The woman says that things with Eclipse have calmed down, so he doesn't need to be concerned. Then she asks if he can accept a request. She says the mining commission discovered a natural crystal mine near Hongshan. Mining them requires mana, and since there aren't many mines, this was quite rare. Thinking the payment would be good, he tells the woman he will go the next day. The next day, near the Hongqian Dungeon Liberation area, the miners are impressed to see Shin mining. After that, he needed to meet with Sangmi. He wanted to meet with Abyss soon because, due to their strict security, finding them without an intermediary would be impossible. The boy uses mana to locate the crystals. Grabbing an axe, he strikes the ground, revealing several of them. He says that should be enough, and the others are shocked by his speed. Behind him, Shin hears someone grumbling. Stepping on a man, he asks if they think the Cutting Wind Gang is a joke. Then he turns to the boy and wonders who he is. He asks how he dares to take all the stones for himself. Grabbing his sword, he moves closer to where Shin is standing. He says there was a better way than mining on his own. Remembering his past, he thinks they were always the same. Grabbing his knife, he thinks it's good that they're bothering him. However, someone activates an ability, striking the man running toward him. Without understanding what happened, he sees several of them on the ground and others shielding themselves from the light that had formed. He wonders where they came from when an archer fires an arrow at the group. The leader becomes furious upon seeing his men fall. He shouts, asking who did that. A masked man says they should be the ones asking. Shin recognizes the demon mask, and the others are startled. The girl aims her weapon again. She shoots another man who collapses while the leader orders them to scatter. He tells them to surround and destroy them. They rush toward the girl, but soon one of them is struck before he can reach her. Kangoo runs toward her with his weapon in hand. Using short-distance jump, he takes down more of them. Seeing this, the masked man begins to observe him. The leader appears, cursing him. He says he will kill him and charges at the boy. The girl shouts for him to be careful. Using his ability to retrieve his item, he grabs his knife again and prepares himself. As the man passes by, the boy strikes him in the stomach. Noticing the other trembling, he says it's convenient. Thus, all of them fall to the ground. The girl is impressed that he did all that in such a short time. Soon, the man appears and tells Shin that he is as impressive as he had heard, that he never thought he would find him in a place like that. Stikyuk approaches and, while removing his mask, says he didn't expect to find him there. Then he calls the boy by his name. A team member interrupts the interaction and thanks him for saving them. The leader tells everyone they can relax. John's objective was to free exploited hunters, and he would kill anyone for that cause. That's why he received the title Judge of Silence. But to gain recognition from Eclipse, it was written that he would die at the hands of Kang Dongyan. Kangyu asks how he knows his name, and Siyuk realizes he hasn't explained. He then reveals that he sent a spy from Eclipse to gather his information, leaving the boy surprised. Siyuk continues, saying he was also surprised that he punished Sophie with his own hands. But Kagyu asks them not to call him by his real name and thinks that the rumors have already reached the guild. He also asks the two team members to give him their numbers. They are surprised and thank him, saying it's an honor. The girl next to Siyuk introduces herself as Ban Seong, and Kangyu praises her for her support abilities. The leader reveals that, according to Eclipse, they still hadn't given up on the boy. For this reason, he should be careful. The next day, in Hongqian Province, Kangwon, Kangyu notices that the mission's commission and fee were very good. He remembers Yurin saying she would add 5 billion as a bonus. As he looks at his phone, remembering that only one thing was missing, a woman approaches and catches his attention. Yoon Sami from Abyss asks the boy how he has been. She takes him to the Abyss hideout in northern Gyeonggi Province. She approaches a guard and asks them to inform the captain of her arrival and her guest, while the boy takes note of the location's security. However, Hansuk appears and notices Sami is there. He greets her and stares at the boy. Then he asks who he is, and the woman responds that he is a guest she brought. Kangyu introduces himself. The captain cordially responds that it is a pleasure to meet him. After entering, the guards ask the boy to wait a moment. In the meantime, he thinks that the security is excessive, even though he came with Yoon. Because of that, there was only one reason for the captain to be so cautious, and he thinks he arrived at the right time. With this, he would be able to earn Hansuk's trust and save Abyss. In the meeting room, Sangmi, shocked, stands up and asks if Dongju was kidnapped. The captain apologizes for treating Kangyu this way, but it was an emergency, and she understands. She asks if the mission could be given to the boy and says she is sure of his talent, but Hansuk asks if that is the right thing to do. She responds that there is an intermediary handling everything and asks if the captain would like to speak with him. After a while, Kangyu is invited into the room, and the captain states that the boy wanted to meet him. Without further delay, the boy tells the captain that he would like to receive support from Abyss. That puts the captain on alert, thinking that he didn't want to join but only wanted support. He decides to reveal to the young man that the Abyss is not well regarded by the public, has already been in conflicts, and would not be the best place for him. Kangyu states that the Abyss is being controlled by Zhenghua, But since the captain is enduring it, he must be very strong. For this reason, Shin went there because it is a strong place that others avoid so he could have better training. Kangoo thinks that this could be a plausible reason and that the captain would not find it suspicious. The Abyss has a considerable number of dungeons and wealth. The leader, Lee Kunsuk, was a strong and high-level man. For these reasons, it would be natural to suspect him, but it is more advantageous for safety to maintain a proper distance. With this is the best scenario to create a commercial relationship based on trust. Kangoo says he does not intend to be an opportunist, and depending on the support, he would help accordingly. The captain says that the young man is someone who does not let himself be swayed by others and praises his honesty. However, the Abyss is an organization with a shared objective, and as a captain, it was difficult to trust Kangoo. In a hideout, a guard pushes the hostage and asks why he is being taken to the inner room. The second guard reveals that the hostage's uncle was someone important, and that this would raise the stakes for later. The first guard finds it suspicious and asks how they would pay, given that the value was already high. But the second guard reveals that the Junghwa Guild is the one who will pay the commission. This excites both of them, and they say the threats will work very well. Reaching the end of the corridor, the guard opens a heavy door. Upon fully opening it, he kicks the hostage inside, calling him an idiot. Something approaches, and this scares the two guards. It informs that if the hostage wants to live, he must not leave the room. While closing the door, he informs that a monster will stand guard. After some time, a giant and strong man stands in front of the door. Dronzer wonders who leaked the information and regrets trying to stay away from his uncle. It was obvious that the Junghwa Guild had kidnapped him because they intended to blackmail his uncle, which would put the Abyss in danger. As he laments, the young man wonders why he is so weak. He then starts repeating that he only needs one person. Kangoo drives his car while Yurin explains the request. The objective was to find Park and save him, and he would only be rewarded if he found him, with target information to be sent. Shin ends the call, saying he will get in touch after completing the mission. In his memories, he recalls the captain rejecting the proposal as the captain of the Abyss, but considering it because of the rescue mission. Kangoo thinks that Hansuk would reconsider the support proposal after the mission and resolve the Abyss's internal conflict. In the free area of Gongshin, the young man uses an ability and says he will finally use the power he gained during the test. During the night at the base, a guard approaches another and says it is time for the shift change. As the door opens and the guard passes, Kangoo sneaks in while invisible. The guard warns not to let their guard down because the contractor is arriving. Kangoo thinks they will deliver Park. The novel was written from Jang Shuwon's perspective, so it was thought he would be taught a lesson by the captain for spreading rumors. Even without knowing the details of the kidnapping, there was an order for Taeseop to secretly kidnap him. He was the one who was supposed to retrieve Dongje. A car arrives in front of the base. The car door opens and a guard goes to receive the contractor. He informs that the leader was waiting for the man. Shin watches from inside the building. He praises the contractor's punctuality and realizes he needs to hurry while passing through the corridor. Heading to the underground level, he notices that there are few guards while searching for the hostage. While investigating, he thinks he should search the lower floor, but the monster is just in the next corridor. Kangoo then gets scared by the monstrosity. In another room, the leader of the Black Skeleton Troop says he is surprised by the contractor's visit, and he extends his hand to greet him. He introduces himself as Shin Juno, and the leader comments that there were many expenses in the mission. Juno comments that he gave the group an assistant, so it should have been easy to kidnap him. But the leader responds that big plans cost a lot of money, and given Shin's position in the guild, he should be aware of that. The contractor asks how much he wants, and the leader, please, responds that he knew he would understand. Asks if it's possible to double the initial payment, but Juno thinks the man is overstepping his limits. However, if the plan succeeds, most of the Abyss's funds will go to Junghwa. Firmly, he responds that he will agree but must confirm if the hostage is the right person. The leader promptly says there is no need to worry about that they can personally go and check. Juno comments that the leader seems very confident about the security level. He responds that the commission involves a lot of money, and regardless of who tries to invade, the hostage will be completely protected. He then proceeds to ask if Shuno knows Bijumai. Kangoo on the lower floor dodges the giant's attack. While evading, he thinks that Bijumai is a Russian hunter enhanced with drugs to be a human weapon. He basically lost his rationality during training and has a killing weapon that only recognizes its owner. The monster senses the young man's invisible presence and prepares for another attack. Shin wonders if the giant detects him by scent because it was created to have highly refined senses. Bijumai charges forward, and the young man realizes the beast's sense of smell is on another level. At the last moment, he uses his quick evasion ability to dodge an attack. He reasons that if the monster is there, then the target is definitely behind the door it was guarding. The giant quickly returns in front of the door and launches an attack, but Kangoo dodges. In the middle of the attacks, he notices that the Black Skeleton Troop is starting their patrol. He wonders if he should defeat the monster or go straight to the door. Bijumai delivers another strike but misses as Kangoo uses an ability to reach the door. The monster rushes toward the young man with full fury. Shin takes advantage of this moment to make the beast destroy the door, allowing him to pass without any issues. The giant is left disoriented. A little later, the leader and the contractor arrive on the floor, and the leader takes note of the scene. From a distance, he observes that the door was destroyed and the giant was dazed. Stressed, he thinks someone has arrived and asks Juno to wait while he checks the situation. He thinks it was bad timing, but it wasn't a huge problem. Kangyu, upon entering the room, notices that there were 2 more giants inside guarding a hostage. Dronzer wonders who the man who just entered the room is. He starts walking toward him and takes out his phone. In a flashback, Yeren says she will send information about Park and that he is using a special item. Showing a barcode, it will confirm his identity, and in the room, he points his phone at the hostage. Using his ability, Dronzer confirms that Kangmu was sent by his uncle. But at that moment, the first giant charges to attack. The man manages to dodge the attack, but the 2 giants go after him. Shin understands that he doesn't have enough mana and needs to use his abilities efficiently. The giant raises his axe and delivers another attack, which the man dodges with a quick evasion ability. He thinks that having 2 of them is really annoying. Park starts reasoning and realizes that the man is only dodging and trying to reach him. Kangyu activates another ability, and the hostage uses an enhancement ability on him. With his enhanced ability, he manages to reach Park while dodging the attacks. Getting close, he praises the hostage. While activating another ability, Kangyu says he has finished all the preparations. The enraged giants charge to attack, but the man grabs Park and wishes him good luck. Before the giants can hit them, he uses a teleportation ability to escape the location. The leader enters the room, panting and startled, asking what happened. With the giants enraged and the entire scene destroyed, he shouts, asking where the hostage went. Shin and the hostage are now far from the location, and relieved, he confirms that his ability worked. He adds that it was a good idea to resolve things while Park was with the Black Skeleton Troop. Kangyu, looking at the young man, thinks that he is an excellent buffer and that he made things easier. As long as he is around, they can escape using the teleportation ability. The hostage thanks him for being saved and says he survived thanks to him. But he replies that he shouldn't be thanked just yet, leaving him confused. Shiden says he needs the hostage to do something. At the base, Juno asks if he has seen things wrong. Looking at the leader, he states that he does not see the hostage, leaving the man stammering. Before hearing his answer, he says that since that's the case, no money will be delivered. The leader gets nervous and calls him an idiot. Shouting, he asks if he is crazy and if he knows how much was invested. In fury, he orders the giants to attack the contractor. But the contractor summons a Guandao, a spear with a blade at the tip, and slashes the giant's back. This leaves the leader terrified as the giant was eliminated with just 1 strike. Shumno asks if the leader is crazy, saying he should be the one asking while pointing his weapon at the leader's neck. With his weapon stained with blood, the contractor demands an answer and says he must bring the hostage at any cost. Understanding his position, the leader says he will do everything to find him. As he runs towards the exit, Shin wonders how they knew and invaded. After all, he had hired a group with no ties to the Jungwa Guild and had gone personally to prevent any information leaks. Taking his phone out of his pocket, he wonders if it had been bugged. Yusuk orders the guards to report immediately if they find anything. His phone vibrates with a message from Chuno saying he might have been bugged and should turn off his device after reading the message. Due to a setback in the plan, the location and time have changed and Hansuk must be called to the designated place. After reading the message, the man says there isn't much time left as he laughs. At the Abyss hideout, the Captain Lemons, thinking he hired a stranger, and Yusak and Sami were returning. He thinks it can't be Park's father, believing he had ensured Park would grow up safely, but he hadn't even managed that. His phone vibrates with a call, and upon answering, he asks if it's Yusak, to which he responds affirmatively. During the call, the man reveals that Donju was with the Black Skeleton Troop. The condition for rescuing him was money, but the captain had to come alone. Hyunsuk believes he can still save him, so he responds to the call, saying he's on his way and asks for the location. In a warehouse in the middle of the night, the man approaches and says there was a setback, but he thinks things turned out fine, making the hostage uneasy. Park gets nervous and asks if he was the one behind this. Approaching, he responds that it was all his fault for having him as an uncle, and the hostage asks why. Yusak thanks the man in the shadows for capturing him. As the man steps out of the shadows, Park realizes it's the guy he saw before. He asks if Tasia isn't coming. Sami appears at the top of the stairs, saying it was unlucky. She had hoped it was a misunderstanding. The man asks what's going on, and the boy says that Taesiak was frantically searching for Jimshin. Breaking free from his restraints, he runs to Shin's side, surprising him. Yusuk comments on the message he received, and the young man simply confirms what he was about to say. Showing his phone, he says the message was sent by them. Thinking things would get complicated, he asks to turn off the phone and says it was good that he did. With no way out, he shouts for Donju not to suspect him, claiming he had been looking for him the whole time. Park says it's strange and asks how many people knew he was Hansuk's nephew. When Kangyu said there had to be a traitor, the mystery was solved. He immediately thought of him as they weren't strong enough to defeat him with just 1 strike. Faced with these claims, Yusuk starts to get nervous. Shin thinks that if he had taken the young man earlier, he would have lost the chance to catch Moon. Even though it was annoying, this kind of show was the only way. He says that thanks to this, he could find out what kind of idiot the man was. Since they had the victim in a recording, he says the captain wouldn't let it slide, and Yusuk starts cursing him. Handing over a chip, the man says that's the information he requested. Shuwon asks what information it is, and he responds that it's the CCTV footage from Gwangju Station, though slightly damaged. Smiling, he says he will check it immediately. He begins watching the footage of the fight between Shin and Su. He says one of them was a member of Eclipse. Looking at the young man, he finds it strange because he seems familiar. Sammy asks why the man took Park. Wasn't he satisfied with being second in command of the Abyss? Yusak says the Abyss was a waste. Even with good dungeons, items, and power, they wasted it all on the idea of opposing the Jeonghwa Guild. He asks who would recognize that senseless mission, saying that from the outside, they look like a criminal organization. Pointing at Park, he says he knows what he's talking about. The boy reflects, but someone interrupts. Yu tells them to end this because words won't work. It makes no sense to listen to him, as he wants to sell the Abyss to Jeonghwa. Yusuk draws his weapon and says he will finish them all. The group prepares to defend themselves, drawing their weapons. The moment the man starts firing his weapon, the captain appears and cuts off his arm. The weapon, already firing, hit and exploded the ceiling. The group is surprised by what they see. Hyunsuk drives his sword through the man. He finishes him off while looking at him mercilessly. With a single movement, he withdraws the sword from his chest, causing Yusuk to collapse to the ground. The warehouse falls into silence. As the captain sheaths his weapon, he looks at his former comrade's lifeless body. Relieved, Park calls for his uncle, who approaches happy that he is safe. He asks the young man what he thinks about returning to the headquarters. He replies that there was nothing else to do and that he understands. Kangyu thinks things have become simpler, while Sagni praises the captain for his performance. Hyunsuk asks Shin if it's okay for him to come along. He wants to properly thank him for saving Dongjae. The young man sees this as an opportunity to talk to the captain and accepts the request. Please, he says he will get the car. Sammy goes with the captain, saying she will check the area and that they should rest. After everyone leaves, Park sighs. He asks Hyunsuk if he's a bad person, and the latter asks what he is talking about. Dongjae says he thinks about what the young man said as if his uncle wasn't doing a good job, but he couldn't live like him and didn't like being negatively affected by it like Yusuk. Shin replies that he feels the same, leaving the young man surprised. He adds that he doesn't plan to sacrifice his own safety to save the world, that it's fair for Park to live as he wants, but from what he sees, there was no need to reject what his family could offer him. In an office, Shiwon on the phone and asks if Dongjae has disappeared and if Yusa cannot be contacted. Juno, on the other end of the call, replies that he has nothing to say about it. Chang continues, saying they made a mistake, choosing someone of a low level and that he won't use them again. They should think about getting rid of the trash and killing everyone, but Shin responds that they already did after eliminating the entire black skeleton troop. The leader, crawling among the bodies of his fallen comrades, begs them not to come any closer. Shumeo kicks him in the back and prepares his weapon. Ruthlessly, he drives the Guandao through the leader's chest, killing him with a single blow. Shin orders them to incinerate all the bodies, that they should make a proper statement for the press. In the office, Shuwon says he wants to destroy Jimshin entirely, but will have other opportunities to attack the Abyss. He will focus on that and thinks he will find answers in an unexpected place while looking at the images on his computer. With great interest, he wonders if the person responsible for sending it was Chesodi and that he should look into it first. At the Abyss hideout in northern Bayamigyu, lying on the bed, Dongji says he can finally rest. Sammy says he was a good actor and asks when he planned all of that. The young man says it was all thanks to Sunkyu. Since he knew Yusuk's number, he told them to send a message with a traceable number. Now that he has returned safely, he wants to talk to his uncle for the first time, and the girl says that's a good idea. She comments that he should also get some sleep. Saying goodbye, she wishes him a good rest. Kangyu and Hyunsuk sit face to face. He bows, thanking him for saving his nephew. Shin says he only accepted the request like anyone else would. Lee says he trusted him because he had been his subordinate for a long time and that if it weren't for him, it would have been a disaster. He says it was shameful and asks if he could change his previous offer, to which the young man agrees. But he comments that he would like to confirm something. He asks if Shin really went to the Abyss solely out of self-interest. Surprised by the question, the young man doesn't understand. Hyunsuk says he sensed an inconsistency when Shin helped them because it felt like he was doing it for them. Kangyu says he wanted the Abyss to remain intact. That, as an opponent of the Jeonghwa Guild, that was all it was. He says he wouldn't want to compromise his safety and thought it was best to maintain an appropriate distance. The man says that makes sense. Smiling, he comments that the answer was fitting and that Shin could count on them if he ever needed it. He hands him a token, saying he can use it whenever he wants to meet him. Shin takes it and thanks him. Hyunsuk says it's good that he's aware of the Jeonghwa Guild. Currently, Shuwon and Gwangyam seem to have formed a secret network. Even though he doesn't know their objective, their actions are suspicious and he asks Shin to keep his distance. Shin says he is talented because he noticed the existence of the 13 stars. The man tells him to sleep there since it's late, and the young man says he will. Now he has eliminated the greatest threat looming over the Abyss. He will slowly put pressure on Shuwon. Dongji gets irritated with his uncle, saying that he himself had said that just keeping in touch was enough. He asks his nephew to stay in Gaon Igyu, and the other replies that a buffer should have many connections, Seeing the argument, Sangmi says she thought things between them would change, but people don't change easily. In the novel, Park was interested in Kang's abilities, but because of the guild, they never ended up working together. The young man turns to Shin and apologizes for his behavior. Shin asks him to speak more casually since they will be seeing each other more often. Park was a rare buffer and had many uses beyond that. Getting closer to them was a good idea, so he asks for the young man's number, which he readily accepts. Turning to his uncle, he says he is leaving. The girl asks them to have a meal together, while the man extends his hand and tells him to come back whenever he wants. Shaking his hand, Shin says he will look forward to the day they meet again. With that, Shin departs for another place. While walking, he notices his phone ringing and answers it. Aaron says they identified the corpse he requested. Siwon was looking at Sue's file and what she had done. He wonders why she did all that for a fugitive prisoner. He asks the man where she is, and he replies that they are searching for her. It seems they were purged by an investigator named Hyoeung, who was in charge of a special unit and was after Sue. He wonders if the woman was abandoned because she failed her job. She pursued the target and fought him, so she must have a lot of information. He orders them to find her and check her bank account, then asks if there is any other information. The man mentions a rumor that the leader of Blue Eyes helped the target that day. Surprised, he asks if Hiren was close to him since there was a hunter he wanted to recommend. He wonders if they were the same person. He would like to ask her, but there was a possibility she wouldn't talk after all. She ensured her client's security. He says there was no reason to end their relationship. Blue Eyes had a good public image and was a useful supplier of hunters. At the VIP market, the secretary tells Shin that President Kang will see him shortly after finalizing a deal. The young man couldn't believe that the bodyguard was Kang Bakwa. She was the owner of the VIP market and a business tycoon surrounded by billions of dollars. In the novel, that place was created to help characters specialize, and Bakwe was an NPC always mentioned. You never imagined things were so connected behind the scenes. A woman appears and says she didn't expect to meet him. Yuri asks what he was doing in Busan. Now that his weapon was broken, he needed a new one. Once things were settled, he would visit the market again. She and he were sitting and talking. The girl asks why he didn't reply to her message, since she had been waiting. Shin is shocked that the woman was expecting a response. Yuri says it's a relief to see him again and that she brought him something. It was a mad Salacium. Taking out another plant, she says she will give him that too, and that her grandfather cultivated it. Only one person cultivated Salacium domestically, the person from whom his master K had bought it. Shocked, he realizes the girl is his granddaughter, and she says she wanted to express her gratitude in some way. The fact that she could leave Ground Zero and become a family with her grandfather was all thanks to him. He says he didn't do anything special, and the girl says that thanks to him, she believed in people again. If she had never met him, she wouldn't have been able to trust her grandfather, who was helping her, and would have run away. She says the man had a granddaughter around his age. They had the same name, so it was as if his deceased granddaughter had come back to life, making her his adoptive granddaughter. In the novel, Yuri had no one to rely on and spent the rest of her life seeking revenge against the Junghwa Guild. But the younger Jung, who became her motivation, had a family, and he thinks it was a reflection of her subconscious. Shin asks why she was at the market, and the girl replies that she went to visit her grandmother even though they were separated. The young man starts to ask, but is interrupted when she says that her grandmother was the owner of the market. A woman appears and thanks them for coming. She says it was Bakwa who contacted him. With the young man in the coffin, the woman thanks them for recovering his body. He had no family, so she would take care of his funeral. She says he was a dear employee to her. His dream was to become a hunter one day. He was contacted by the Junghwa Guild and was very happy. She was sad that he was becoming independent, but she congratulated him since he was joining the best guild in the world. The young man thinks that the guild must have gotten rid of him to cover something up. It must have been because of that the identity was also blocked. Handing over a sword, she says it belonged to him. Bakwa says it was the gift she gave him as a congratulation. Turning to the secretary, she asks her to bring an object there. Holding the shining knife, the woman asks the young man if he likes it. Smiling, he thinks it would be impossible to dislike it. Special weapon options with stats like that cost at least 50 billion. He asks if he could really keep it, and the woman says it was compensation for bringing someone dear back. That was a gift she had planned to give him when he returned, but she was sure Minjun would be happy if he used it. Bowing, Shin thanks her for the gift. Yuri tells her that she must be heartbroken. The woman says that Yuri had the same name as her deceased granddaughter. Bakwa and her husband separated because everything reminded them of her. She says she endured thanks to Minjun, but her husband must have suffered greatly. Holding the girl's arms, she tells her she can rest assured. Smiling, she asks Yuri to visit her again, and slightly embarrassed, she agrees. Now the two were walking down the market stairs. The girl says that the Junghwa Guild was responsible for this. With a threatening aura, she says she hopes they pay for all their sins one day. Even though her situation had changed, her hatred for the guild remained the same. Shin says they should go separate ways, and the girl agrees. He thinks that perhaps Master K has some information about mana hypersensitivity, so he asks if he could go with her, leaving her surprised. Smiling with excitement, she asks if it was true. In a warehouse at night, Sue wonders how much longer she will suffer from this wound. Bandaging her arm, she says it was all Jin's fault for continuing to pursue her. When Jin said that her master had abandoned her, she thought it was nonsense. But the fact that she still hadn't been able to contact him was suspicious. She thinks it was impossible because she had done her best for him. At that moment, something catches her attention. Sue grabs her knife and shouts for the person to leave, throwing it in their direction. She asks how long they will keep chasing her. Jin said she is reckless, that she was going to kill her slowly because she thought about being nice. But since she didn't want that, there was nothing she could do, so she lunges at her with her claws. Shin and Yuri arrive at her grandfather's house. He says it's fascinating to have a place like this in Ground Zero, and the young man comments that this is where he cultivates Silesium. He knows that Master K, Bakwa, and Yuri are things from his subconscious, but he is curious about how everything will unfold. Behind them, a man says he has heard a lot about Shin through his granddaughter. The young man becomes anxious about finally seeing the man. Master K smiles at them and invites them in. Now the two are sitting on the couch. He was able to meet someone difficult to reach thanks to the girl. He says he wanted to thank the young man for helping his wife and granddaughter. He tells him that he saw the young man Shin found and that he was involved in an accident. The young man asks if Minjun passed through there, and Kei says yes. His guild needed herbs, so they went there, but since there were some he wouldn't sell, he refused. Since he was recruited suddenly, Shin wonders if they used him and then abandoned him. He then asks if he could tell him which herbs they were looking for. Master Kei says he wants to know why Shin came to see him first. Shin says the man must have extensive medical knowledge. Then he extends his arm and asks if he could check his condition. The man begins to examine him. However, he notices something that leaves him surprised. In the warehouse, the women were still fighting. Sue used the power of fire to defend herself. Because of that, a large explosion occurs in the area and Jin disappears. She doubts the woman is dead, but doesn't realize she is behind her. When she turns around, she sees the claws coming toward her and only has time to dodge. The woman asks if she plans to fight until the end. Trying to hit her, she says it's disgraceful. Protecting herself with fire, she says she will fight as much as she wants, until she boils and turns to ashes. Her strength was so great that it caused another explosion right where the woman was, making both of them fly with the impact. Sue stops and watches in shock. Even burned, Jin continues to smile. Emerging from the flames, she says this will be difficult. Her injury weakened her firepower and she doesn't think she can break through Jin's defense. Jin asks how much longer she will steal another ability to escape. She tells her to do her best. Chasing after her, she says it's no fun hunting her if it's too easy. Sue is sitting, recovering. Irritated, she calls the woman crazy. Suddenly, a commotion catches her attention. Master K tells Shin that he has been suffering for a long time, and even after studying his illness, he has never seen someone like him. He sincerely says that it will not be easy to resolve. The side effects of mana hypersensitivity were a limitation designed to prevent him from surpassing a protagonist. Since it was difficult to treat, the young man asks if he could buy Silesium instead, and the man agrees. He usually only sold them in high-risk situations, and the young man thanks him. Yuri, Content, begins to serve them food. She asks him to try a little, but the young man thinks it's too much. She waits expectantly as he starts eating. Shiden says it tastes good, and she replies that it's a relief. Master K says he has some information that might be useful. He asks if Shin could go to the limited mana dungeon. Shin is surprised that it has appeared. The girl gets excited about going with him, but the old man says that won't be possible. That dungeon is a club operated by Eclipse, and they take a lot of mana as an entrance fee. Shin couldn't believe that such a thing actually existed and was under Eclipse's control. But he didn't want to let this opportunity slip away. Dungeons with entrance restrictions had great rewards but a limited number of raids. Standing up from the table, Master K says he will excuse himself first. He needs to check the stock of Mad Silesium. After he leaves, the young man calls Yuri's attention. He tells her there's a high possibility that the guild caused Minjun's death. Hearing that, the girl turns serious. Shin says that her grandfather knows the answer to the incident, and she looks surprised. He tells her that Minjun came there, asked for herbs, and then it was obvious how he was led to his death. If he found out which herbs they were, he could understand why they killed him, so he asks for Yuri's help with this. Remembering the young man, she becomes thoughtful. The young man says he won't force her, but he needs her help. Someone appears, holding a card. They ask Sue if she is from Eclipse. Smiling, they say they are there to invite her to join the Jungle Guild. At Master K's house, he hands pills to the young man, saying that the effect is severe, but to use them when necessary. Then the young man says goodbye. He tells Yuri that he will see her later, and she asks him to be careful. The old man tells his granddaughter to go inside first because he is going to check the plantations, and she agrees. He watches the girl enter, yawning and smiles. Master K asks another man what he thinks of Sunkyu. The man says he seems promising despite having a long way to go, and the other replies that he would see anyone that way. He says that as an assassin, he was admired more than anyone else, enough to earn the nickname Master of 1,000 Deaths. The man says he never wanted that title. He says the young man is interesting with his unique illness and also for trying to use his granddaughter in his own house. He comments that if it were his daughter, he would have killed him on the spot, and Kei responds that Shin truly helped his wife and Yuri. He will continue to observe him for now, to see if he is someone he can share information about the Jungle Guild with. The next day, Shin was at the club Master K had told him about. That floor was operated like a normal club. Hyoram approaches him and asks if he is the man who helped her in Gwangju. He is surprised to see her there. Jin says she loves the atmosphere of the place and that he can ask her anything if he wants to know something. The young man is intrigued because, based on her constellations, she should be at level 200. It was impossible for her to have been a victim of the Gwangju Guild. He didn't intervene much because she was suspicious, but she could be a great help. Kangyu asks if the rumor about a special dungeon there is true. The rumors weren't widely known and the girl thinks he has good information, so she confirms it's true. From what she heard, the entrance is in the underground parking lot, with guards along the way and a barrier, so outside hunters can't enter. He thinks the barrier would be annoying, and the woman says she never repaid him for helping her that day. She asks for his number again, saying the one he gave last time didn't exist. Taking out his phone, he says he will accept the reward. But he stops when their hands touch and asks for help getting to the parking lot. Smiling, she says she can help him with that. Shin doesn't know what she is planning, but since things have come this far, he will use her first. His Liberator Master constellation seems quite useful. She says she has a method to move freely in a club. Hooking her arms around his, she asks if he isn't nervous, and seeing that no one is looking at them, the young man agrees. But he notices that one of the guards is talking to someone as they pass by. He thinks something is strange, and the girl places her hand on his shoulder. Now placing her hands around the young man's neck, she says that this is the right way. Then she kisses him, leaving him stunned. Looking straight ahead, he realizes there was nothing they could do. He needed to act first. As they descend the stairs, the girl gives a small wave to the guard. Smiling, he waves back. Jim was helping him more passively than he had expected. After opening the door, she wishes him good luck in the dungeon, but the young man wonders what she really wants. She just sighs in satisfaction. Behind her, a man says she did a good job. It was Kang Donghyun. He says he can finally meet Shin Kanghu, that he was so focused on the barrier that he overlooked some important information. No hunter had managed to accumulate the required amount of mana so far. That underground parking lot only connects to the dungeon entrance and the upper floor. Shin tries to open the door, but suddenly he looks to the side, startled, and is quickly struck by lightning. The man says he will be like a trapped rat. However, Shin was quick enough to create a protective barrier and is shocked to see the man. He still hadn't reached the required amount of mana to enter. He wonders if he should give up and go back, and the man asks if that amount isn't enough. Taking out the pills, Shin says it's not. Donghyun uses his ability to launch an explosion of energy in his direction. Swallowing the pill, Kanghu thinks he can't give up here. So he pours the necessary amount of mana into opening the gate. The mana he deposits exceeds the required amount, and the dungeon opens. The young man jumps into the portal just before being hit. Seeing this, Kang gets irritated. He can't believe that Shin actually made it. Sitting on the other side of the door, Shin says he barely made it inside. In front of him, figures begin to approach. Several sticky monsters crawl toward him. They are angry and making noise. Hyoram asks what happened. She stops when she sees that only her master is there. She asks what they should do now, but the man only talks about mana potions. Even without understanding, she asks how many she should make. Turning to her with a threatening aura, Donghyun tells her to make all of them. The monsters leap at Shin angrily, and he uses Ice Imbue to freeze them. The Ice Witch constellation, which he obtained after killing Gubin, specializes in enhancement and imbuing ice elements. A weapon imbued with ice can easily defeat slimes because physical attacks don't work on them. Shin looks at one of them and says it's the last one. It is the Slime King. This one is much bigger than him and extremely angry. It launches several slimes in his direction, but the young man dodges all of them and moves into attack. His strength and speed are so great that he slices it into pieces. Amid the remains, he picks up a red crystal. Smiling, he thinks the rewards here are really good. Reading that he obtained the skill Cuteness, he says he could only use it if he didn't have to call it by that name. Shin continues walking until he comes across several glowing flowers. Previously, he had asked Master K if he needed anything from the dungeon. The man gave him a list of plants and asked him to check if they were there. They included mandrakes, centenarian ginseng, and spiritual roots, all rare herbs. A few years ago, foreign hunters discovered a different dungeon and managed to enter without any issues. One of those who entered was a botanist and witnessed rare herbs growing inside. His theory was that, as a result of the dungeon's special environment, rare species were able to grow there. There was no way to know if the environment was the same, but Kay asked him to bring back a biolent. He found one. Seeing the plants, the young man thinks there is no reason to refuse a bonus commission, so he says he can leave it to him. Indeed, Shin finds a biolent. This proves that Master K's story was true. The scope was large, but he should look for the other herbs the man had requested. Beneath a tree, something was watching him. Kanghu wonders if it was a monster protecting the herbs. It was a shellback turtle. All the flowers were planted on the turtles' backs, and because one was taken, they all began to awaken. Shin becomes surrounded by the animals as they approach. There were herbs growing on each of them. Taking out his knife, the young man thanks them for saving him the trouble of searching. At Master K's house, he tells the man that he wants to go to the dungeon. There are very rare herbs, and he will be able to collect what he needs to treat him. The man says that no medicine could help him. He knows his body better than anyone else. Since the entrance conditions are restricted, only the young man with that unique illness can enter. Kay says that it wouldn't be right to give up now, just when he had become his younger brother, but the other asks him to only worry about himself. He says that he didn't send Shin just for his health, and the man asks if it was because of the Bailan. That herb was an item that the Jungwa Guild wanted to negotiate with him, and Yuri was secretly listening to everything. Hearing the guild's name, she becomes furious. Inside the dungeon, Kangoo managed to defeat the turtles and collect the herbs. He obtained almost everything on the list, but a few were still missing. Perhaps they would appear as he progressed through the dungeon. Suddenly, something moved and charged at him, forcing him to dodge quickly. He thinks that he can't afford to rest here. The dungeon boss says that his dodge was impressive. When Shin looks at him, he notices that all the missing flowers are on him. Irritated, the boss says that Shin invaded his territory and was after his plants. He declares that he won't let him leave alive. Shin comments that this will save him time and retrieves his knife. At Master K's house, a man asks why he is after a plant that he had refused to sell. Ko replies that he won't resume negotiations and wasn't even sure if the Biolant could be found there. But if Kangoo managed to bring it back, he could investigate how the guild intended to use that herb. The boss tells Shin to become nourishment for his land, launching his roots toward him. Shin uses acceleration to dodge and close in on the monster. He takes out his knife, aiming for its head. Then smiling, he simply asked it to hand over the plants. In an instant, he stabs the knife into the monster's neck, startling it. Taking advantage of the moment, he begins climbing onto it. Then he grabs one of the plants and jumps away. Noticing this, the boss asks how he could be so audacious. Furious, he uses his roots to attack the young man. Shin quickly uses fast evasion to dodge just in time. The boss challenges him to try stabbing him again, saying he would never be able to break through his scales. The effects of the mad Silesium would wear off soon, and the side effects would start to appear. Using his roots to form a drill, the boss declares that he will shred him to pieces. Shin says they should finish this quickly. Master K says that if Kangoo manages to bring the herb, he will investigate how the guild intends to use it. The man replies that many others would like to destroy the guild and asks why no one knew about this. K explains that they hire people under the pretense of making deals but kill them when they are no longer needed. His granddaughter hears him say that this must be an important item. Shiwan and Guangyon were the masterminds behind the guild, and the girl knew they were connected. Suddenly, the man starts coughing violently. When he looks at his hands, he realizes they are stained with blood. Concerned, Master K asks if he is all right, and he replies that his fever has risen because of their conversation. He says that the other man came here for treatment, yet he tired him out with all this talking. Taking his medicine, he comments that even though the young man is talented, this won't be easy, and K says he's aware of that. The problem wasn't fighting the Biolant, but getting past Eclipse's security and escaping. Outside the dungeon, Dongyun tries to open the door after drinking all the mana potions, but it doesn't seem like it will open. Hyeon hands him the last mana potion. They bought everything available in the local shops and used up all their stock. She asks if she should get more, but the man returns the bottle, saying it won't be necessary. She asks if he is giving up on Shin Kangoo, and he says no. He has changed his plans, so he orders her to gather everyone. Inside the dungeon, Shin was using Shadow Step to continue his attack. The boss curses him angrily. Shin and his clones keep switching positions to avoid getting caught by the root drill. The boss asks what he is trying to do. Curling into his shell and leaping at Shin, he declares that he will tear him apart. He starts a rolling attack, heading toward them at high speed. If it touched him, he would die. Jumping on top of him, the boss yells that he will kill him. Shin grips his knife and prepares for the attack. Placing the knife on the ground, he creates a circle. He conjures a thunderstorm whirlwind, lifting the monster into the air. Taking advantage of the moment, he uses short-distance jump to leap onto it and then activates Soul Imprint. Now close to its head, he executes Great Decapitation. With all his strength, he drives the knife into the gap where the shell wouldn't protect it. The boss falls onto his back with the young man standing over him. Slowly, he begins to deteriorate. The reward was just as good as he had hoped. It increased his maximum stamina by 20%, allowing him to endure the side effects for a while longer. Shin obtains 2 crystals and the rare herbs. He says it was worth the risk for the unlimited mana dungeon. Around him, everything was disappearing. He wonders if it's because the dungeon boss was eliminated. He could hardly wait to see how Dongyun was waiting for him. Outside, all the guards were waiting with their weapons aimed at the door. They were the sniper team of Eclipse. Kang says that he will appear as soon as the dungeon disappears. He orders everyone to stay alert and shoot as soon as they see him. All of them agree. Hyeon thinks that her master never loses a target, no matter what he has to do. The door begins to emit a strong light. From there, the young man emerges and the captain prepares to give the order. As soon as Shin steps out, all the laser sights target his chest. Dongyun says he missed him. Taking the cigarette from his mouth, he gives the order to fire. All the bullets head toward the young man, but he activates cuteness. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.